Hello, everyone. It's Daniel Ferrens. I'm the co-director and one of the producers of Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street Legacy, and I'm joined by some key members of the team.
This is Andrew Cash. I'm the co-director and co-editor of Never Sleep Again.
And this is Tommy Hudson. I am the writer and the other producer.
And this is Buzz Danger Wallach, the director of photography.
Among many other things.
Yeah, well.
Lots of hats on this show.
the main thing.
So we're doing this commentary. We don't know if anybody will ever actually listen to it, but we
I'll
just thought
listen.
we'll listen to it.
I don't know, man.
We thought it would be fun to sit down throughout this epic journey, 4 hours of Nightmare on Elm Street goodness, and just kind of walk through it with you and see what we come up with.
You'd be surprised. A lot of people were asking how we did this.
Well, and and how we did, look at this. I mean, this stuff is just, I love it. I watch it and I just always love it every time I see it.
I kind of have to tell the story about Michael Granberry, who is our stop motion artist, who came up with all of these amazing little title pieces for us and the little interstitial chapter bumpers you'll see throughout the show. Michael was a guy who kind of landed in our laps like a lot of different things on the show, and he was a friend of Paula Hafley, who's a friend of mine who works for Robot Chicken. And Michael came to us at a time when we had done another title sequence with a different animator that just didn't work out. It just really didn't have the flavor of a Nightmare on Elm Street. But it was a brilliant idea to do something to stop motion, we all thought. And then Michael, I met him, it was literally on the phone, and he said, yes, let me do this, I can do it. And then all of a sudden, he just started turning in these shots, which were, day after day just kind of inspired us as we were editing the show and going through so much strife and difficulty trying to get the show finished, but these shots he came up with I thought were brilliant.
And he was turning over one every day. Like every night we would get a new shot from him, and everyone would gather around the computer monitors and just be jumping out of their skin.
I mean, just the detail, everything that he did was so incredible and so fast, and just, I mean, look at what we have here. I mean, how incredible is that he did that in literally a day.
And he's done these really kick-ass H.P. Lovecraft shorts that he's won some awards for too, that usually play at the Lovecraft Festival in Oregon, and he did one of From Beyond that just blew my socks off. It was one of the best Lovecraft adaptations you ever see.
Look for his website, Michael Granberry. Super talented guy. And I love that tricycle. I have to comment on the tricycle.
Oh, yeah.
It's something I always wanted. It was something from the day we kind of came up with this idea. I was kind of pushing for the little mini tricycle, and he just did it. And he made the house. The day I went to his apartment the very first time, he had the house already built. And this was like the day after we had an initial conversation.
We should point out Andrew separately did the awesome graphic and text and titles and whatnot.
Yeah.
So. And a little credit.
And then Benny. Let's talk about Benny for a second.
Yeah, Michael Benny Pierce.
Mr. Pierce just was another one of these people who came into this whole project just kind of sight unseen. We didn't know him, he didn't know us, but he just sort of rose to the occasion on every level, and he came up with all these great sort of animations and montages for the narration, and these were very much last minute. As we all know, this was a very, very trying part of the process where we were trying to figure out, what kind of imagery can we use over the narration, and it was already recorded, and we really had nothing. And so a lot of this stuff was last minute, but I think Benny did an amazing job. Pouring yourself a drink there, Buzz?
Yeah. I got my Jack Daniels and some Coke.
I'm gonna dip into the Marlowe here because in order to survive a 4-hour commentary.
Yeah, we got 4 hours, gentlemen.
We got to get shit faced.
I have Coke Zero.
Tommy's the pure one of the group.
Yeah, the Puritan.
In fact, as the production was going on, we were teaching him like new swear words and things like that.
Should we? Is it pretty common knowledge that was from our original teaser trailer we did? That little shot of the coffee.
Oh yeah, I think so.
I mean, I guess.
Yeah, we just borrowed whatever you can, but I think what Benny did, which was brilliant, was he took, some photos that we had licensed to use from some of the films, and he took the background plates, which Buzz here shot brilliantly, I might add, all these background plates, all of this stuff. And Buzz and I went into the most, I'd say, some
hellish
places on Earth,
yeah.
at least in Los Angeles, to shoot these background plates, and it was just days of us just grabbing shots wherever we could. Some of these were at Linda Vista Hospital.
Linda Vista. Then there was we snuck into a air conditioning.
We didn't sneak in.
They sneak in, but we got permission to go upstairs in this abandoned air conditioned warehouse.
We snuck into Linda Vista.
We did sneak
we
into
had
Linda
permission
Vista.
to go.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did sneak in. There was a tour group going in, and
it was like AFI students.
Yeah, they were looking at locations or something, and so we kind of walked in with like a bag from Costco,
right,
with all the camera equipment in it.
Yeah,
like I took apart the tripod and the camera and hid it in the bag, and then we just separated from the group and ended up shooting up all these great background plates for the interviews.
So, these articles, I think, are really... We dummied these up. There were these articles that I actually did find in the LA Times, but we couldn't license them. So we just kind of created our own versions of them. But again, this whole idea of these dream deaths that Wes talks about here, I think is really fascinating. And the fact that all of this came from a true story, or a series of true stories, I think is...
It makes it scary, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the way that this was done, too, which is a credit to... the whole team, that obviously Dan and Andrew and the editors and all that jazz, it makes the story feel really fresh. I know that we all know the story how
totally.
Wes came up with A Nightmare on Elm Street, but watching this, it feels really fresh, it feels really exciting, and every time I watch it...
This is
this stuff was what?
This was just literally
two nights before delivery?
Yeah, 2 nights before delivery, and we're just shooting B-roll of...
We're up at 3 a.m.
Of Mr. Coffee machines in closets and running cables across the apartment, waking up the neighbors.
Oh, that's when we were outside, when we shot the
stranger in the hall, in the alleyway. The stranger in the alley.
And I'm 8-year-old Wes Craven.
And he's 8-year-old Wes Craven peering out the window, but that'll be coming up soon.
And we had a fog machine going, too, so half the neighborhood is soaked in fog, and everybody's
Hispanic
freaking
lady
out.
came out in a panic, thinking that the apartment was burning down, because it almost did.
No, here's a funny story. The night before, during the course of this production, every crazy thing happened to us.
It was Murphy's Law.
Yeah, and the running joke of it was, okay, the night before delivery, our apartment complex is just going to burn to the ground, and we're not going to be able to get this thing delivered. It's going to destroy everything, because of course, that'll happen. And literally, and I'm not kidding, the last night before delivery, I'm sitting there, I'm editing the last of the show, and I smell smoke. And I run outside just in time to see the neighbor's car that was parked in the parking garage explode, and half the building went up in flames, almost instantly. So we're all running around scrambling. We're texting Dan, and Dan's first response is, "Get the drives and get the computer."
No, I said, no. To be fair, I texted you back immediately. I said, "Is everyone okay? Did you save the drives?"
I remember that night I got a phone call from Dan, and he had left a message. And he said, literally, "Tommy, this is a 911 emergency. Call me back 911.
I think I said 411 because I was in such a dither.
No, you did say 911.
I did. No.
And I remember calling you back, and I'm like, okay, so what's the deal? He's like, no, literally, this is a 911 emergency. Andrew's apartment complex exploded.
We're running.
I was I knew it was on fire. I knew there were helicopters overhead at that point, and I knew that things were not looking good.
I was on my way home, because I had not been home for I think 3 days or something like that. I had gone off somewhere to reset my brain.
But you should establish the fact you guys are actually roommates.
Oh yeah, Andrew and I live together.
Yes, we do.
Insane.
Yeah, yes. So yeah, that was our house was Nightmare on Elm Street related for 7 months straight. That was fun. But yeah, I was on my way home, and 10 minutes before getting there, I just get a frantic call from Andrew, the building's on fire. And I didn't have the sympathy to go, "Are you okay?" I just straight up said, "Did you get the drives?
Did you save the show?
Did you save the show?"
And honestly, when that happened, I called 911. 20 fire trucks show up. The whole neighborhood is freaking the fuck out. And at this point, I'd been up for 3 days, no sleep at all, just editing the show. So my brain just snapped, and instead of panic or going to save the drives, I just started walking back and forth along the neighborhood street, just cackling like an insane madman, because I couldn't wrap my brain around the fact that this one running joke that has gone on for 9 months was actually happening at that moment.
When I showed up, you looked like Charlton Heston and Omega Man, just walking the burnt streets, cackling to himself, and he's just look at it.
All I knew is I came over thinking the whole place would be burned down. Actually, you guys lucked out since your unit is in the very back of this building, and I don't think you got it as bad as some of the other areas of the building, but you guys got really lucky. It was in the carport, and I came over with some, I don't know, something to drink, wine coolers and
beer.
He
brought wine coolers, and we got completely
smashed.
drunk and then finished the show at 6 a.m. that morning.
Yeah, it was nuts.
And luckily, the fire department was literally 2 buildings down. If that hadn't happened, there might have been no Never Sleep Again.
Yep, that's true.
Or as we call it, never gonna end.
Never gonna
because
end.
there's always something else to do on the show, such as right now.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Getting back to this, what's great also is just that we got Wes Craven to participate in the show.
That was the scary thing too. Is when we set out to do it, we just went out to do it. We had all the equipment, the gears. We had done a number of these documentaries, so it kind of came second nature to us. But when we started, we didn't know we were going to get Robert Englund or Wes Craven. We just we had Heather, and that was about it. And we made our list of about
We had Heather and Hope.
Yeah,
I don't think we thought we would ever get over 100 people.
No,
I don't think we thought we would need 100 people. But then you realize as you're telling the story, you needed X, Y, and Z to make it all come together, and it just seemed so organic. Looking back, how could we not have made the show we made without that 100 some people?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And talking about Wes, one thing I always think about when I watch the show is we have to give credit to our wonderful co-producer Lito.
Oh my gosh!
Who
Yes, we all bow to Lito.
Yep.
Lito Velasco.
Yeah, for a 4-hour Wes Craven interview, stood on top of one of Wes's desks, holding up the black cloth to block out the lights.
Yeah,
yeah.
In Wes's office. So I mean, let's we have to have a moment for Lito, and I think we need to raise our glasses or cans or whatever. And
Lito was a godsend, especially to me, who the basic camera department was me essentially, and and grip and camera and electric. So it was nice whenever Leo would show up because he was a really quick learner, and I could be like, "Get me that cord now," or move that C-stand over there, and he'd be like, "Go, got it." After the second time I worked with him.
There was a core group of I think 7 or 8 people. We all did everything from setting up lights to catering to just about every position.
Everything we all did. I mean, my SUV was like the movie truck. It was hilarious. I mean, I carried everything from the lights to the camera to the food
Coffee,
to
the
posters, everything.
And I think one of the things that people I think should realize watching this, I think a documentary like this is so much more difficult in so many ways than making a scripted movie.
Feature.
Oh no, it's
Because
infinitely harder.
It's
infinitely harder.
We really didn't know what we were going to get out of these people.
Right.
We didn't know if they
Not
were
at
going
all.
to help us tell the story we wanted to tell.
No.
We didn't know
They
going
didn't
into
know.
Wes's office that it was going to be 80% floor-to-ceiling windows.
Yeah, and fluorescent lights.
lighting.
That turn on with a sensor when you walk into his office, which you can't remove. So
we
we're
fixed that,
covering
though.
the sensor with tape.
Gaffer tape.
Just going into all of these people's offices and their lives and having them come to us and that they gave us the time that they gave us. I mean, we were blessed to get Wes Craven for so long. We
Incredible.
were blessed that
I couldn't
Robert
believe
Englund
it. Yeah.
gave us so much time that all these people were just so...
How many times?
Roger.
How many unedited hours do we have of Robert Englund?
Oh my god!
It's got to be
97 hours.
It's,
No,
it's
yeah.
five.
It was at least 4. It was 4 hours, I think, in the interview chair. He didn't take a sip of water or stopped or anything.
Didn't stumble, didn't pause, just kept going. I mean, Robert is sort of like the last of the Energizer bunnies, I guess. I think he goes and goes and goes and goes. He doesn't ever complain. He's happy to tell his stories. In fact, I think he loves telling them. At least our conversations.
Well, he has such great memories.
He does, and it's all right there. And
Sharp as a tack,
even
man.
Wes, who is getting up there a little bit, but he looks amazing, and his recall for all the details is right there.
Yeah.
So I'm just really glad we did this show now. I mean, I hate to say it, but as people get a little older, the memory gets a little fuzzier.
There was definitely some interviews where that was present. Where
of
it was
them.
hard
It's
to
a little
pull.
hard. They're getting a little up there, but here's the thing. I mean, we got all these people still pretty much in their prime. Everybody looks really good.
And there he is, Johnny Depp. We got him.
We got Johnny Depp. You say that we don't have Johnny
of.
Depp, we haven't. We got this great clip of him from the Actors Studio where he talked about Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mr. James Lipton.
But Johnny Depp. Let's talk about how we tried, though. I mean, and first of all, before we go on to that, Tommy Tutson here, as well as Annette Slomka, our line producer and production manager, were really the two people primarily involved in casting this show, and I mean calling these 100 and some odd people that we ended up getting, and even more than just them. Pouring yourself another one, Andrew?
I am.
I mean, just an amazing, truly, from my heart to yours, what an amazing job. I couldn't have done this.
Absolutely. On the phones night and day.
Just working the phones in every way. I mean, Annette using her feminine wiles where need be, but Tommy just being such a great spokesman for this show and for what we were trying to achieve, and calling on not just relationships you already had with a few of these people, but just connecting with so many people, from the agents to managers who were, always difficult to deal with at best. Just any which way that you could to make this happen, and I'm so grateful that you did it.
Well, we did try really hard. I mean, we tried to get everyone, and I can't even say, there was less than I can count on one hand of people who just flat out said, you know what, I don't really want to do that. I can't even really think of who they would be. But we tried so hard to get Johnny. We tried so hard to get Patricia, and we were so close. And they never, or their agents never came back and said, no, they don't want to be a part of this. They're busy people. They're stars.
They're the busiest people in the world.
Mr. Depp, can you stop Pirates of the Caribbean Force and please come talk to us?
There's
Buzz.
Buzz in the
There's
alley.
Buzz.
I love that. I love that shot.
We shot
It's
that,
very
yeah.
Halloween 5 and 6, I might
Oh,
add.
yeah, that's like the underground.
Yeah, so
I
that's-
had to
And, we
And there's
also
me again.
it's Dr. Wynn. In this
give a lot
show.
of credit to the incredible Heather Langenkamp,
Yes, for
who
sure.
was such a fantastic godmother
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
this project and
Yeah.
helped open so many doors, and I think legitimized the fact that a bunch of guys who just loved these movies and wanted to tell this story,
Mhm.
she kind of gave us that credibility in the eyes of everyone else, that we weren't just another bunch of guys who liked the movies. We had something to say.
Right. And I think, look, we had done some of these things as well. We had a background in doing it. We'd done the one on Friday the 13th. Andrew and I continued working together on the Paramount Friday the 13th special editions. We did all of the bonus features for a movie I produced last year called The Haunting in Connecticut. And so all of that stuff was kind of preparation, I think, for this, which to me was kind of the culmination of that whole journey of kind of working together and putting together all these pieces and figuring out how to make one of these things and how to make them really fly.
If we hadn't spent the last 2 years working together on all these DVD projects, we would have been so fucked. We really would have. I mean,
It would have, yeah. I mean, with the monumental task of this one, his name was Jason, which was the Friday the 13th show, was huge and done in record time.
Mm-hmm.
But this was bigger from the beginning, and also we didn't want to shortchange this. We wanted to tell the full story from beginning to end, movie to movie, sequentially.
Well, when we started out, it was going to be 90 minutes.
Well,
Never
there was
seen
talk
it.
about it being 90 minutes, but then we're like, there's no way.
No,
I
I think once
that was
we
a
hit-
very short-lived.
Yo, no,
Yeah.
I remember a call that Dan and I had, and it was, maybe we can get this thing to about 2 hours. Maybe
Or
we could do
three.
it in 2 hours.
I
and
think
then
maybe it was
three,
like
and
3.
then
We were like, oh my
4,
god.
Once we hit over 106 interviews or whatever it was, I think we all were like,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Well,
can't.
just, like we had so many interviews, and his name is Jason, which Tommy worked with me on. I mean, we had about 80 some odd interviews on that show, but the problem with it was they were so sort of beholden to this 90-minute running time is that everybody got cut off. There just weren't complete stories that were being told. So this one we really focused on editing it really well, which is all credit to Andrew here, and of course Benny, but mostly Andrew, just to tell a really complete story. And I think from beginning to end, and then just really clever ways of going from one topic to another. It's really hard to find that through line. And Tommy, you wrote all these outlines, which were phenomenal. Tommy here wrote every single question that was asked of these people on camera. So that, I don't know how you did it. It was like night after night, I'd open my email and there'd be another, 100 questions. I don't know where you came up with all of them. And
Well-
occasionally I'd slip one in.
Well, yeah,
and
no, I mean, the
we'd
thing
all
is,
kind of
it's-
come up with this. But Tommy, you wrote them all. So, I mean, Tommy, I think is, of the group, I think you're probably the most Nightmare on Elm Street knowledgeable as far as knowing all the ins and outs of the series.
Well, I
so
certainly do
perfect,
now.
Well, you're the perfect writer for the show. So, and
I have to say, I want to give some editing credit. I'm so glad the burn victims are so fast. Because those are so disturbing.
they
They're
were,
so
and they really
real.
are. They're real burn victim photos that we
Yeah.
pulled off Wikipedia, which are public domain photos.
Yeah.
I want to add.
But
Yeah.
it's just, I mean, it really does go to show you what the makeup artist, went through to
Mhm.
create
I love
that
that
look
picture.
right there. I mean, that's
So
a
great.
great photo right there.
So great. But yeah, they really went into so much detail. This is Louis Lazara, who I thought was really
Oh,
entertaining.
he
We
was
shot
so
that
crazy.
Shot that in his garage, and he was really close with Roy Scheider, the actor from Jaws and so many other great movies, who'd passed away recently. But Buzz here, being the ultimate Jaws fan on the planet, and was able to get some personalized
Yeah, he gave me
Right.
a
photos and autographs.
photograph of Roy Scheider. I mean, it wasn't personalized, but it was
Right.
it was a it was a
As
signed
an
picture
autograph,
from,
Roy Scheider.
and something
posthumous.
I never thought I'd own because he had passed away. So
Yep.
Just watching this and watching Robert talk about his characterization of Freddy, I'm so fascinated by the fact that he put so much work into that character, and I think that's a testament to why Freddy is so popular. I mean, the fact that he talked about, Nosferatu and Jimmy Cagney, and that he really created.
He knows movies.
A monster.
Yeah,
he does. He's so.
Well, he did a lot of
knowledgeable.
character work on Freddy, and I think that is what made that character, just like you said, so memorable and so part of the pop culture. And everybody knows who Freddy is, and I think that's what one of the most amazing things and enduring things is about this franchise. I mean, he is one of the classic modern horror monsters, and I think we really wanted to celebrate that in the show.
I think another reason too is that the impending remake, which pretty much dumbed it down and threw in all this iconic stuff without really any thought behind it. I think you see the thought that goes behind every little creative decision that they made in the original, and that was sort of a conscious effort in cutting this together and asking the questions, because
it wasn't just thrown together, and it wasn't like, let's just string a bunch of cool shots or scenes together. I mean, there was a story, and I think you were invested in the kids in the first film. And we don't have to go on about the first film. These people do it better than we do. But
well, we did kind of, it already passed, but I think it's his only moment in the first segment, but Charles Fleischer.
Oh my god!
Andrew, would you like to describe what it was like?
Wow.
Okay,
Andrew had the distinct honor of getting to interview Mr. Fleischer.
You know what? I love Charles Fleischer to death. He's a crazy madman. He's impossible to hold a conversation with, and pretty much within 30 seconds of interviewing him, I knew I was in deep shit.
You were KO'd. You got KO'd.
He fucked me up so bad. Had me basically like sinking in my chair as he was just, because you couldn't, any question that you threw at him, which granted he doesn't have a really exciting role in it. It's like, well, Mr. Fleischer, tell me about playing the doctor who comes in and Mr. Johnny Explainer for 20 seconds and tell us about this whole experience. And he just basically would just KO you in a second with all these crazy Looney Tunes voices.
He's the man of a thousand voices. Yeah. If Robert probably is our modern, Lon Chaney or whatever, I think Charles is the vocal equivalent. He's like a Mel Blanc. He's an amazing character of cartoons, and I mean he's the voice of Roger Rabbit and many others. But that's not like just something he just goes in and does. That's who he is.
That's exact. I mean, he's just started. I would ask him a question, and then he'd start talking about like deadly snakes in Africa and what you should do.
Really but it made a great Easter egg on this disc. So for those who find it, it's not that hard to find.
No, it's not. A lot of people have.
Tommy hasn't seen the
I
Easter
haven't
egg.
seen the Easter egg yet.
Oh
man.
Well, maybe we'll tell you someday how to find it.
The Easter egg is pretty much most of the interview cobbled together. This really was, the part one section was the hardest thing to cut together, because what do you say about this movie that already hasn't been said?
Right.
And
it was finding those new ways of approaching it, and you have to kind of cover the bases, and there have been other documentaries and other things that have covered this part of the story. But we just, the thing what I think works about this is that there are some different faces here. It's not just the people we've seen, and all the other shows.
I mean, the other cool thing is that having doing this independently, you do these kind of things for studios and whatnot. If anybody says anything like negative or they didn't have a good time, or if something went wrong, like sort of the revolving room mishap, the studios will not let you put that stuff in. They freak out because they're like, oh, this is liable. We're gonna get sued, or which is ridiculous considering that
well, it's also 25 years ago.
Yeah, and so it's. You're sometimes bound to the legal department, and of course, every production department at a studio has their say in what stories should stay and what stories should go, and and it can get pretty damn aggravating.
Well, that's why part of the reason we just chose to do this completely rogue, independent, off on our own and take our chances with it. And I'm really glad we did, because we ultimately got the show we wanted to make. We got to tell the stories that, maybe would be a little embarrassing for the studio. But, I think this is the way Bob Shaye himself would approach something like this. This is his style. And I was just really inspired by his story. And I think that was another really interesting through line of this documentary, is that it's not just the story of Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a story of a studio that was literally created on the back of a slasher franchise.
I mean,
so
we wanted to get down there in the trenches, basically. I mean, not do the hero worship thing, and basically go into every major set piece and almost be like a learning tool of how they did it, what went wrong, how this built an empire, every in and out of just filmmaking in general, just so that.
Well,
go ahead, Buzz.
No, well, I was going to say what's interesting is that, while learning about how these movies were literally made for nothing and went through so much hell and independent, bullshit trying to get these things done, when we were doing it, it was pretty much the same thing. We were going through the same exact, all the emotions, all the hell that they went through. And
it was funny how our experience was always mirroring, it seemed like, in some way, what was going on when they talked about when they were making these films.
Rotating room collapses and spins out of control. Our apartment complex blows up.
Right. It was just always a trial by fire, and everything on this, just like they talk about. Heather always talks about how the original movie was made for like 5 cents, and it was very low budget. So was the show, and I think in a way, I'm glad that it was, because we got to have that experience of just really, doing this with passion and not a lot of resources to work with. It was just passion and talent, I think.
And just to give you sort of a point of reference, a normal documentary, a normal 90-minute to 2-hour documentary that you usually see takes, 2 to 3 years to cut together. We had 105 interviews cutting together a 4-hour documentary in the space of like 2 or 3 months, which was just pretty much nothing but 2-3 hours of sleep a night, nonstop, never leaving the apartment, cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting. Dan and Tommy were transcribing, through the holidays. Dan was Christmas Day. Dan is just pecking away at the computer.
That was fun.
Never stopped for a moment. Never saw anybody. In fact, all our friends just stopped calling.
Yeah,
after
they all
a
stopped
while.
calling. I don't know.
No, it's true. I remember
nobody even knew I existed.
I would check my email, and I would just be so afraid to find something with a transcript attachment, because that meant, oh God, I have to read this one. Oh God, it's Roberts. It's like 115 pages.
Yeah.
And then we have to highlight and pull the good stuff.
It was insane.
That's all we did over our Christmas was literally reading transcripts and pulling out what we think is going to work.
Yep. It was really a long, long haul. The transcripts alone, I'll have to add them up at some point if ever I have nothing to do. But I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,800
Yeah,
pages.
no, it is.
It's longer than the Bible.
Stuff.
Yeah, no, it really is. I mean, it was nuts. But, there's great stuff there. I want to say, I've been asked the question, like, well, what didn't we get in the show? And I want to say, there's nothing that's not here. I mean, I think we got all the good stuff. Everything that was the meat and potatoes, all the good stuff. Can you guys think of a story that was told that didn't make the cut?
There was a few that,
or even in the extended interviews.
No. Between the extended interviews, disc 2 and disc 1, we covered all the bases. But there were a couple painful little cuts in the major documentary that kind of broke up the pacing, like where somebody almost hung themselves in Nightmare 3, which was just couldn't believe that. I've never heard anything like that.
Did that not make the extended interviews?
It is in the extended interviews, but it didn't. It just slowed down the pacing. Sometimes it was very, very difficult cutting this whole thing together, just because there were so many good stories, and when you laid them all out, it tends to get too rambly, or you just want to move on at some point.
Yeah, we did that pass, that sort of last pass, I think, where we all sat down with the show and we kind of watched it for pace and for tone and what parts worked, what parts were dragging it down. And anyway, you just sort of find your way through it. I love this stuff that we found Leslie Hoffman, the hall monitor herself.
I feel really bad.
And that's the real that's the real high school hallway.
School.
And Buzz went and shot that plate for the Horrors Hallowed Grounds.
Oh, there's pleasure.
Which is great. I mean, she's literally in the same. I mean, green screen, but she's.
I feel kind of bad though, because I put a atmosphere layer on there to create a little bit of fog, so it wasn't just like a still frame. And I should have positioned it in a different area, because it looks like she's just farting on that. It's just this giant thing of like a pocket of air coming, and I'm like, oh man,
she's gonna appreciate you saying that.
I don't
Leslie, I didn't think that.
I didn't either. It never occurred to me. But
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I just hit me watching. I'm like, I should have moved that over a little bit, probably.
We've seen a little bit of his stuff here, and I just have to give another shout out to somebody who was so part of this team and is not from Los Angeles, so he's sort of always like one step removed, but he's always there when you need him, as a guy named Crash Cunningham, who I've worked with him on several projects now, and he's he's an amazing artist, first of all, a great guy. And he makes the coolest Jason hockey mask ever made. I mean, he like replicates all the from Friday the 13th.
That's how we met him, right?
Was because of this stuff from Friday the 13th.
Yeah, we did this awesome little mockumentary for the deluxe editions of Friday the 13th that Dan directed called The Crystal Lake Massacres Revisited, which is sort of this
kind of mock like, MSNBC cheesy little kind of like documentary of like their true murders of Crystal Lake.
Yeah, with and Crash did like all the Photoshop job and
like all the fake news headlines,
which was hysterical. Yeah. We were getting new one like 5 or 6 from them a day and just laughing around.
So really, it started with our teaser trailer, which we shot last summer in 2009. August, and it was brutal hot. It was horrible. And Heather was kind enough to open up her husband's effects shop. She's really is married to an effects artist, and we got to go there basically for a day, and we shot this little teaser trailer just to kind of get people excited and interested in what we were going to attempt to do here. But Crash, just again, as a favor, just made all these great looking, sort of Springwood Massacre headlines for us. And he just has always just jumped in and done so much for us and asked for so little in return. But he's just such a good guy and so talented. And a lot of the drawings and things that you see throughout the show are Crash's. So I'll have to point them out as we get to them. But he's just shout out to Crash. Thank you for everything.
I mean, one of the things also, speaking of items that are inserted into the interviews, is just like this footage of Jim Doyle ducking underneath Heather's open legs.
Which he said he enjoyed immensely.
Yeah, exactly. And then just, all the great behind-the-scenes photos that we were so lucky enough to get from all the cast and crew.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that is so great about this project, was really having these people get excited about not just coming in and telling their story, but coming in and saying, look what I have. I mean, remember Lynn Shea brought the T-shirt that the crew, that they had made back in 1984.
Really rare things, and then like much later in the show you'll see it, but Miko Hughes, who played the little boy, Heather's son in New Nightmare, he came in with this like hermetically sealed, Rex the dinosaur, which was the real little, stuffed animal who was his best friend, and it had his little pajamas inside of it too, and we tried to open it. He's like, "Just break the glass." I'm not going to break the glass.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm going to come in and be the mean producer and go, "Please don't open the glass."
Yeah,
please don't break the glass.
He kept telling us to break the glass.
But Mika was such a cool dude.
But just so many things like that. There were great. I mean, like Lisa Wilcox brought in great photos. So many of the makeup guys. I mean, like Mark Shostrom. Like, what an amazing guy! Have helped us so much.
We got to give a shout out to David Scow, because he brought so much archival stuff to this project. Like, literally, when I would run into a wall, I would call him up and be like, hey, David, we need a picture of Peter Jackson. You got any? And he would pull out 10.
Yeah.
So basically, I think a good 10%, probably 10% of the archival stuff that you see in this doc came from Scow. He was just amazing.
Ronnie Blakely is...
that sounded like such a pause. Like, stop.
We're all watching the TV going, yeah.
We just have to kind of give a little shout out to Ronnie, I guess. Anyway, Ronnie Blakely, we did attempt to get her in the show, and things just didn't work out, unfortunately. We would love to have had her, but it didn't work out. We got John Saxon, which I think is even cooler, because John is such a legend in the world of acting. He's done so many great things, and it was just awesome to get him to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important to get at least one of the parents, because the whole parent thing in these movies is so important, and John had, he came back. I mean, he was a big part of, I think, Nancy's life, and the things that happened to her are a fault of his character. So it was nice that, we didn't get Ronnie to talk about her experience, but, we got John Saxon, and I think he brought a lot to it.
But, by the way, has she talked about that with what David Miller said?
No,
Yeah, because he says, she really wanted to take that tongue phone home, and we thought that was kind of strange. I was like, I really hesitated putting that line in the show, but it was so sort of awesome.
It's so funny and weird.
Funny. No, she hasn't particularly mentioned that. Like, I remember that. I mean, I don't know how true that is.
That's what I'm curious.
Sure.
Maybe it was a joke. Maybe there was like a joke. Oh, I would love to take this thing home.
Yeah.
But now, speaking of other people who really came full force, David Miller. I mean, I remember he brought I think 280 some photos to the set, and they were, some of them literally were the never before seen makeup tests from Freddy. It was really fantastic stuff.
I think we're gonna pause, guys.
No, we can keep going. There'll be a couple little pauses inevitably in the in the commentary.
I don't know.
You hit the
I must
video
have
button, but
said
it's not
this.
going back. I don't know what to do here. TV.
Let me just pause it.
Wilson, stop it!
Don't you pause it? It's gonna fuck everything up.
How's it gonna fuck everything up?
Can you? I gotta get through here. So that's.
How is it gonna fuck anything up if I pause it? So I just gotta stop that and stop that.
It's easier just from an editing purpose to. There we go.
Everyone, we're back.
We're back.
Technical difficulties.
We're online.
By the way, that's my favorite moment in the first segment when them talking about Jacques screaming like making noises no man should ever have to. For some reason, Jacques and what's
Joel Soisson.
Not Joel Soisson. Why Joel Soisson?
I don't know, because everyone always talks about how much they love Jacques Aitken and Joel Soisson.
No, Jacques, his relationship with not David Miller. We went to his office, so we're makes the
Jim Doyle.
Jim Doyle. I was like spacing on that. Yeah, Jim Doyle and Jacques, they had a great little like back and forth throughout the documentary. I mean, that was all you because they.
I just want to say that I think it's the coolest thing that we have a clip from Break Into Electric Boogaloo.
Hell yeah!
Oh yeah!
I just want to. The fact that was the same revolving room used in a Shabadoo film. Shabadoo, who directed my first feature film, Rave. I might add, which no one has ever seen.
This is
thankfully,
but it is available. Remember, I found it.
I think it's available somewhere, but I don't even want to know where.
And this is another thing that I always wanted to go into or see somebody talk about is Wes Craven's fascination for booby traps.
Yeah. That was.
Well, he does talk about it. He even says, he goes, you know what? I've reached the point where I can no longer do booby traps.
Booby trap.
No more booby traps.
There was something like we just wanted to cover that in the documentary, like the whole booby trap thing of this movie, and then it goes back to Last House on the Left and people under the stairs and. I know it was A Deadly Friend. All of his movies had booby traps. Definitely Hillside of Eyes, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
So, but we just thought it'd be a fun thing to kind of... Another drink, guys?
Oh, yeah.
These are the two that are drinking.
so-
Tommy and I are going to be the only sober ones by the time this is over.
So shit-faced when this is done.
So,
I don't plan on being
I'm
shit
just-
faced, but I'm relaxing.
Okay.
It's hot in here, so
Yeah. Yes, it is, but I don't know. I thought it was really cool that we got the DPs, the screenwriters.
DPs had all the best stories.
DPs
Those
had great stories.
Those were the guys who really opened up and would tell you everything. Because Buzz can even attest to this. Directors of photography, they see everything.
We see everything, and we pay attention. So we kind of collect all the great stories, but no one ever interviews DPs.
Mm. I mean, here's one of my little bones of contention with the show is that we have Bob Shea shot in front of a plant in his office.
Yeah, I take responsibility for that one.
No, we had no
really.
choice. I mean, we walked into his studio, and Bob Shea obviously is a very busy man, and we didn't have a whole lot of time, so it was like, okay,
5-minute setup.
Drop this in, interview him at his desk, and move on. So I'm amazed that we got as much out of him as we did in the amount of time that we had. And that's the scary thing too, when you sit down with some of these more major people who are very pressed for time. There were literally times where Dan and I would have to like pull each other aside and look at a list of questions, which sometimes be 2 or 3 pages, and go down and be like, okay, we only have 30 minutes with these people.
Mm-hmm.
What can we get through? And literally, whoever's doing
stressful.
the whole crew is on pins and needles because you never know.
There. You just know what you're going to get, and sometimes you got to have them. Repeat the question so that it sounds like a complete sentence, and there's a real, I won't call it an art, but there certainly is a technique to interviewing people and getting what you can out of them so that everything registers well, so that when you go back and you read the transcripts or look at the footage, there's something that you can cut in.
Well, I mean, both of you are an amazing interviewers. Like you guys are really good at it because you can pull a lot of great stories out of it. Because I was always in the room with you two when we were doing the interviews. It was us three, and it was always amazing. I was like, wow, they actually can pull that up, because the whole art of it is you literally have to make it sound like you're making the question up.
Right.
Except for one time with you, Dan,
Oh, no.
where you read it right off the page,
Oh yeah,
and I
did.
lost my shit.
Oh, it was with Jack or
Marshall
Bell.
We can hold off. We don't need to tell it now. We can wait until Marshall.
I
Bell
had
pops
to
up.
write that question because I'm like,
Well, let's go ahead.
I just didn't even. I think it was one of those days where we had a lot of interviews back to back, and I think I didn't get to read all the questions in advance.
Oh my god!
So I just, took Tommy at, because I know he always came up with great questions. There's this one particular question in part 2 that I couldn't even paraphrase it.
we'll
I had
get
to read
there
it just like
because
it was.
Well, let's go ahead and bring it up while we're on the subject.
But people at home can't see that we have the subtitles on, so we'll be able to see
Oh, when we're talking
what
about.
we're. I know exactly where it is because I remember reading the transcript and I remember reading it and thinking, "What is going on?" Just ask the question, and then Dan literally says, "Okay, you know what? I just have to read this one as it's written." So.
And
We'll leave you hanging.
I didn't laugh at all through. I mean, most of the interviews I was silent. The silent observer with the camera. That was the one time where I completely just lost. I mean, it was completely my fault. Like no one else was laughing, and I just lost it. And I'm like, wow, I have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old, but. Oh my! Just the fact that it came out the way
I had no other way of approaching it.
I wish we could have kept it in the
read it the way
documentary.
it was. Anyway, we'll get there.
Watching Charles Bernstein. I mean, God, so much love has to go out to him. I mean, the fact that he just did that incredible theme for us, and just being in his studio. Where he actually recorded the original Nightmare on Elm Street score.
In this room, this very room that we're in here.
It was really cool.
And then he'd sit there and he'd play out the little, the notes for us and just give us a little flavor of what the theme is. And just seeing him play it, there's just something about watching these people who I think are kind of masters at what they do.
No, totally.
I just watched, speaking of Charles Bernstein, the classic The Entity.
Oh.
And I had forgotten that he had done the music on that. It has that driving, really
it's
kind of scary.
Scary
music.
He talked about it a little bit with
did.
us when we were there.
Mr. Majestic is one of the best action scores ever done. If you haven't seen that, it's absolutely
These were also these little animations, by the way, were also done by Michael Benny Pierce. I mean, all those little tiny the narration.
And that goes back to the conversation we had. Like this was like days before
delivery.
What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And at the end of the day, I think it worked just perfectly.
No, I mean, that was the one thing that was really freaking me out because I mean, it was like I think we were 2-3 weeks away from final delivery, and then finally, we had the foresight to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna have narration. What are we gonna do with plates? And I remember just sitting there going,
well, no, it was in the back. It wasn't something that I thought of last minute. It was something that was always there.
No, yeah,
we figured it out.
And I just remember thinking, we have these great plates. We have thousands of photographs, and hopefully Heather's narration will be engaging in a nice buffer that we're really paying attention to what she's saying.
It really did work, but I remember that was one of the few times I was sweating, like because we were
sweating a lot.
Yeah.
We were down to the wire,
and it was sweating it, and it got really frantic and really
Oh,
stressful. But I think, it's a testament to this group of people, not only the ones here in this room today,
that we can sit in a room together,
that we can sit here and have a couple drinks. But no, but that everybody still, we're all really good friends. I think this experience made us closer.
What doesn't kill us made us stronger.
But that's not true for every show, as we know.
No, it's true.
But I think it's, but that's something to be said about this team, is that we were all in it to make the best show.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we were about. And if we got on each other's nerves, or if somebody had a moment, or somebody had a fit.
Oh, we all had our
moments.
Yeah.
I probably had more than my share.
I'd like to point out I never had a moment.
That's true.
I'm just kidding.
That's true. Never had a moment. Who didn't have I don't think Lito ever had a moment.
No, I think Lito was. He had when the whole when the picture catalogs or like all the cataloging when he was told he had to redo it, but it was a miscommunication.
Oh shit!
I remember he called me and was just like, what's going on? Like why is this happening? And I'm like, I really don't know, Lito. I've been on a computer color correcting for 9 weeks.
Yeah, and this guy, who he's did so much hard work. He did a lot of the work that just was agonizing kind of stuff, like cataloging every photo. He actually transcribed this entire show for us recently. He's just one of those. He's just such a stand-up great guy, but he really loves the Nightmare series, and that's why he's doing it. He loves to be a part of the creative process.
This, by the way, is the best segment. It's sad that it was so early on in the documentary.
I know.
I mean, the rest of the show is great, but this one
But
is...
this is a highlight because we kind of just really went there, I might add.
Well, it's really funny. It's really entertaining. And we have Mark Patton. We have Kim Myers. I mean, we have people who really never talked about their experience.
Angel
Let's talk
System.
about the search for Mark Patton, which
That's all
Dan,
Dan, yeah.
really led the charge on.
Well, it's a good thing
That
it's
was-
a 4-hour commentary. One day. Well, look, I mean, we knew what we were approaching and that we wanted to get, at the very least, the leads of all of the films. And so Mark, obviously, being high on that list of people, Mark Patton was one of these guys he had done this movie, he had done Come Back to Five in Time, Jimmy Dean, and he had done a couple of other things, but I don't think anything notable, I could be mistaken, but after Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, he kind of just dropped right off the radar. And I think in what we've learned after having met him and now that he's resurfaced or come out of the closet, he made a really conscious decision to leave the business. And I think there wasn't that trail of breadcrumbs that often can lead you to these people. Like, Tommy, you tried every route you could think of. Managers, SAG. I mean, right? You
We
unturned
did
every
people
stone.
searches,
People
and there,
searches.
it just we couldn't find him.
Couldn't find him. And the way that I found him was, and I'm not to get all the details, but I found him through a connection where he had been living. I'd heard that he had been doing a job redesigning people's homes in Florida. And I just happened to find an ad online through 1,000 pages of Google searching for a Mark Patton design. And the call that number was disconnected. Somehow I found an address that was connected to that business. And that address, I think I Googled the address, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I find the landlord of this particular place, and it turns out to be an old apartment or a duplex he was renting with his sister. And the landlord, not knowing who the hell I was, very kindly looked up his old rental application from 5 years prior. And it had a couple of local references and I think a relative. And I called the local reference and they said that they hadn't heard from him in a couple of years, but they'd heard he'd been living in Mexico. So I'm like, oh my God. So anyway, all these sort of connections with this sheet of references on a rental sheet is how I found Mark. I ended up getting in touch with his sister-in-law in Kansas, I believe. And Tommy, you kind of filled in the rest of it. You got him to fly out here, and I had one conversation with him on the phone, and then you made all the arrangements. And
yeah, I remember I was so excited when I got the call that Dan had talked to Mark Patton, and I thought, here we go. I mean, we got him. I mean, this was a big deal, and it was, kind of a small negotiation just to figure out the timing and getting him out here. And
luckily, he was planning on visiting his family, right?
That's the thing. It ended up being the perfect storm of timing because he had already planned to be coming into the States, and I said, well, please do a stopover in Los Angeles and talk to us for 2 hours.
And if anyone can get somebody to stop to partly their trip from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico to Kansas City to stop in Los Angeles, would be Tommy. He can get him to do it.
And just watching,
Oh, there's this. We got to talk about this fake Freddy.
Yeah,
second.
this was one of the things that I love most about the documentary, and it kind of ties in what I was just going to say is, obviously we have seen the transcripts, so we know I can pretty much remember almost everything everyone says, and there's all these little in-between things that aren't in the main show, and some of them are in the extended interviews, but there's a lot of depth about the fact that, Robert Englund was recast with a stunt guy.
Yeah, the stunt guy.
The stunt guy's watching this documentary going,
Yeah, exactly. He's like, God, well, I screwed myself. But I think it was really important that, to bring up the fact that Robert is a huge A-list #1 reason that Nightmare on Elm Street is the success that it is. It's because of what he did with that character.
Absolutely.
It's because no one else could truly do
replicate it.
what he did.
And there's Mark
Patton.
come back
With
Dancing with
Cher.
Cher. I mean, how perfect. I mean, if you're going to say that you have a career in the movie business, and he danced with Cher.
I mean, he danced with Cher. He's in the gayest horror movie
of
ever
all
made.
time.
He has a lot of things to, kind of top that trophy case.
And this was the most the gay subtext of Nightmare 2 was the one thing that everybody wanted to know. We all wanted to know about it.
Yep.
And of course, according in Chaskin's own words, for about 20 years, everybody was pussyfooting around it, and not owning up to it.
And we got him to reveal
Yeah.
it.
David Chaskin was the screenwriter, and he very much talked about in the documentary.
Finally, because,
Yeah.
well, all the other documentaries ever done on Nightmare 2, on the encyclopedia and all that, just no one admits it.
Right.
No one goes.
Well, they act like it was this weird sort of like
coincidence.
Like people were reading into it. There's Kim Myers. She
great.
looks so great. She's beautiful, and she's such a sweet woman.
She aged like a fine wine.
She looks better now than she did.
Yeah.
But the Meryl Streep thing I thought was unfair.
Yeah.
Somebody, actually, Mark also compared her to Annette O'Toole.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Which I can kind of see a little bit, but it's definitely Meryl Streep. I just wish we'd gotten a better, younger picture of Meryl Streep. We just couldn't license one, but we got that one from our friend Stacey Lane Wilson,
but
who we love.
It's funny, when the second this documentary came out, because we answered all these age-old questions, I think every gay magazine and website did an article on this documentary about finally they're talking about it. Finally, all our questions have been answered.
But I thought it was great that Mark was so open about it. I mean, he doesn't live his life in fear. He doesn't live in the closet. He is who he is, and but that being said, the fact that they did cast a young gay actor in the lead role of a sequel that the studio had a lot riding on
he's cast in the heroine role.
And the heroine role, that's a female role.
And... But one of the I saw this movie on home video, so I can't really say what it was like to see it in the theater or reading reviews.
I gotta date myself.
But I really would love to really go back and read all the reviews, because I do think that most people probably really didn't pick up on it as much as we're picking up on it now.
I don't think so as a teenager when I saw it.
That's what I mean.
I don't think
that's
so.
why
I remember thinking, that was a little different.
Well, I'm much younger, but when I think I was about maybe 12 when I first started to discover all the Nightmare movies, and I watched this. I think I'm maybe a little younger than that. But I remember even at that age seeing it and going, there's something odd.
But you have to remember, though, at that time, I think gay being in the ether was way more pronounced than it was back in 1985.
Right.
I don't think anyone really thought gay this, gay that, like people can today with all these shows on television, all these characters.
Right.
I think that people, Dan just said, that was a little different. I think people thought, okay, I guess this is what they're doing. Looking back,
right.
It's
more looking back. But I think what it was there was this little subversive group of people who made this movie. I'm not talking about on the above the line Bob Shays and the Joel Soissons and the guys who are really working on the above the line stuff on this movie. I think those people in the trenches, day to day, like Rachel Talalay and the production designer on this film and set decorators and all the people, I think they had their own little inside joke going.
Oh, totally.
I think that's what it was, and I think that's why they were placing these little funny props like the probe game in the closet and the note sign on the door. I think all these little funny visual cues, I think they were deliberately planting them.
Wait, but it's not just that.
I think Rachel did say, and I don't think it made the show, but I think Rachel said, if there was something subversive on the set, you can be sure that I was involved.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask her because, and even Robert says it, she comes from the John Waters school of that kind of, oh my God, this is, I'm sorry,
Clu Gulager.
The whole documentary is Clu.
This
little montage.
That montage, when I first saw that, because Andrew didn't tell me about it.
Right.
I just heard about it, and when I saw it,
it's
almost
hilarious.
pissed my pants.
It's hilarious. Watch.
Repairing a home is equally dangerous. I remember there were a bunch of... I think, Andrew, I was pointing you out to all the funny, little household things that were going wrong, because the whole theme through the movie was he was fixing the house, and the house was just like the money pit.
It's funny. Jacques Aitken actually kind of summed up all the little subtextual things that were going on in Nightmare 2 with the heat and all this stuff that I never really picked up on. But it is thematically, it all kind of...
You know what?
It makes a little more sense.
Nightmare 2 is a good movie.
You know what?
I don't care
holds up. The first time, it's, you know what? It's like Alien 3, kind of like what Buzz says. It's a horrible sequel, but as a standalone movie, especially over time, it holds up. It ages well because it's got all these little undertones to it because of, Mark Patton's really good in it, and it's got Christopher Young's score, which is arguably the best score of them all.
Kruger is actually evil in it.
Yeah, Kruger is scary.
That's the last time he's truly pure evil.
No, I'm a fan of 2. I don't think it holds up to 1 or
no. Or 3.
You know what? They did something different with it though. Whereas after part 3, every sequel since then, up until New Nightmare, was trying to be Nightmare 3. This
Right.
one had its own voice.
Right.
It went down its own direction.
Well, I'm always a big fan of when they go back to the original location.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the fact that they had the house and it was the real house and it wasn't like in Halloween where they always try to pass off some sort of like gothic mansion as the Michael Myers house.
Scared the shit out of me.
Parakeet.
I know.
I love the
I
parakeet.
still don't
The
get that.
parakeet scene is one of the greatest scenes in cinematic history.
No,
and I love how Jeff Katz has to come in as this sort of like voice of the family.
He's the Greek chorus.
He's perfect
Yeah.
Greek
He's the Greek
for the
chorus
show.
at the show.
No, I
yeah.
mean, and people talk about this. I think the whole concept of Nightmare 2 being a movie that, does hold up in its own way, on its own, is because there was no franchise. I
Right.
think Joel Soisson says that. At the time, it was just another Nightmare on
Yeah.
Elm Street movie.
Right.
There wasn't any, it doesn't fit into the canon. There was no canon.
Right,
It
didn't
was-
exist yet.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can't fault them for. And in fact, I have to kind of put these guys up on a little bit of a pedestal just because they did try something new. They didn't just replicate the first film.
No.
They took
No.
some of it, but I think where they went wrong was, and I think where most people point out the flaw of the movie, the big flaw is that they pulled Freddy out of the dream so that he's visible
They broke
and a threat
the
to the kids
rules.
at the pool party.
I
and all
will
over.
admit that even when I saw this movie as a kid, I didn't get that. I didn't understand. I was like, Freddy isn't real. So even for me, thinking back on it now,
Mhm.
I can see why so many people had a problem with that as being a flaw because I accepted it, but I still questioned it.
Joel Soisson was great.
Oh, he was
He was so
hilarious.
He
funny.
did a great interview, and by the way, I love the way you shot his interview, and I love the background for him.
And that's what Buzz was talking about, the heroine role.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right there. It's
Yeah.
that,
But he's
Mark Patton
screaming
played
like
the
a
Scream
girl,
Queen.
right?
No, it's true.
I love that he called himself the first male Scream
It's
Queen,
true.
and it's true. And but he did it well.
And we just
I counted, by the way.
He screamed better than our lead in Halloween.
Well, we
Recently I had to, because my girlfriend, I showed her the show, and she watched this part 2 segment and was so, like, enamored with it, like, I must watch this movie, so I showed her, and while I was watching it, we were drinking every time a gay reference came on.
You were
That's the whole-
probably
you were
drunk,
drunk
in
by
the
the
first
time
three
you-
hours.
Okay,
Okay,
I
but
was
this
snapped.
this is where they start talking about really going into the gay subtext, and they just
right. And where there's some people I never saw it, I didn't get it.
Well,
and
and
then Clue.
and one of the things I mean that's just ridiculous.
So funny.
But one of the things that didn't make it in was
Kevin Yeager.
Kevin Yeager's reaction. I mean, just even the transcript alone. Wait a minute, what? Wait, the movie's gay? Wait a minute. Maybe I'm just a farm kid from Ohio. I remember his reaction. He really
Had
did
no idea.
not
Yeah.
He didn't
get
get
It's
any of that.
It's him and what's her face, the second female lead in it.
Carrie. Sydney Walsh.
Sydney Walsh. Her reaction was
She was pretty
absolutely
priceless.
priceless.
Yeah.
Like,
She's like, what?
what?
But then looking
But the
back,
thing
they
is,
all
it's-
say they're glad that they were a part of
Right.
something
Oh,
that
yeah.
was breaking.
Well,
it broke a
Joel
barrier.
was the most proud. Like, he was so
Oh, yeah.
ecstatic about it.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
he was just like, I made the
I mean,
gayest
of course,
horror movie.
like here on camera, they're all kind of having fun with it and kind of going along with it. But I think they all were. I think what you're saying. I think there is a sense of being proud of something that was a little bit. Maybe it was kind of subversive, or at least it's remembered. That's the thing. Is this movie is remembered?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
so
totally.
it's not just the sequel that got flushed down the toilet and nobody remembers. I mean, some people don't remember part 5. I hate to say, or 6, but a lot of people do remember this one because of the subtext and because of all that. Robert Russell was.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say,
Oh,
we
yeah.
should point out Robert Russell.
Robert
'cause he
Russell
was
did a great
so
interview,
funny.
and he was so giving, and he came back to do the Horror's Hallowed Grounds.
Oh, yeah, no,
bit,
he
and
was-
he's just always really cool and
Can we
a lot
talk?
of fun.
Can we talk about the Marshall Bell thing? No,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
coming up.
Is
It's,
it- oh, is
it's
it-
going to be when they talk about.
There's the
there's
probe
game.
in the closet.
The
I love
also,
that Jeff Katz was able to point out all the games.
Well, no, I remember
What does that tell us
it was
about
it was
Jeff?
you and I telling him. I think, yeah.
We
And
don't want to give away all our
no,
secrets.
he
Give away
knew
all
most
our
of it, but I remember telling him like, oh yeah, Jeff, there's
No,
there's
Jeff-
37,
Okay,
37 shirtless scenes, and he was like, but then people are gonna think I counted them
Oh,
when you're
Jeff-
the one who
Jeff
counted.
Katz is fighting it. I'm sorry.
John Gulager was also pretty instrumental in this whole entire part 2 section because he knew a lot of the stories through his dad about what went down, and he I think he was on set, and witnessed a lot of things firsthand. But John Gulager really helped us put this part 2 section together.
Yeah. No, I mean, just so many people were willing to come forward and talk about it. Again, it's just so cool for me to see. There's Mark Patton, like all grown up now, obviously, but here he is talking about this movie. I never I think that's one of the coolest things. Is like I just never thought we would ever get to hear some of these people talk about these movies.
And the Bob Shea bit.
Oh, no, it's true, and that's I mean, the fact that Bob Shea
is here talking
the
about
head
his
of
the CEO, let's say, of New Line Cinema,
who was staking his reputation and his company on this movie, really,
right,
decides I'm going to get into this. I'm going to do this.
I'm gonna put the leather gear on. I'm gonna go to the pleasure chest.
In fact, there's a Joel Soisson quote that didn't make the final cut where Bob was supposedly wearing assless chaps.
And he probably would. Bobby's these pictures of the pleasure chest. These are I have to go out and take these photographs, and here I am in the pleasure chest, like sneaking my little mini digital camera in, and the flash going off inside the store. Let me tell you the looks I got.
Well,
nobody
probably
said
not as many as when Bob Shea brought his 2 young daughters in with him.
Probably true, but that was kind of interesting. Me taking these photos, I'm like, like Clue said,
No, yeah, Clue was definitely one of the funniest interviews.
I think he's the highlight of this whole thing.
Every
He
review
just went
mentioned
with it.
him.
He just
Yeah.
went with it. You know who didn't really get much screen time? It wasn't really mentioned, but she was talked about a lot in the interviews. Was Hope Lang, who played the mom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had a lot of great things. In fact, Mark Patton had a really funny story about her, how she liked to kind of drink a bit. And she took him out for a long lunch one day, and they both came back kind of soused a bit.
Exactly. And then they did the scene.
Yeah, then they did the scene where he comes back from the rain with the blanket on. I just thought that was a hilarious story. And I guess there was a costumer on this show in part 2 that didn't. Oh, there's the. Okay, let's just.
Okay.
I'll skip this story and we'll get back to it. But Marshall Bell and his balls.
We have to talk about the fact that Marshall Bell gets killed in the way he gets killed, and I thought there's no other way to pussyfoot around. How do you ask this question? But he's getting attacked by his balls.
And I'm reading this question, and I read it in to myself first before I approach it with the person. I think about how will I say this when I, because they're answering the last question, and I'm looking ahead to the next one, and I read this thing. Do you think there's something symbolic about Coach Schneider's balls being involved in his death? However it was written. And I just was trying to, like, going over in my head, how am I going to say this? How am I going to say this? And I'm like, I'm just going to read it.
But
you did it with a straight face. That was the best thing about it.
But the thing is, when you look at that scene, he was attacked by his own balls.
Yeah, but Dan reads it completely with a straight face, like, do you think there was something Freudian about Coach Schneider's balls attacking him? And we all fucking lost it.
Well,
I
could bring some levity to the room. I will say one of the other greatest things about this documentary is we have it on camera, all about the dancing.
Oh,
because I mean, and look at David Chaskin.
He's just dying. He's dying. I love that he says that it gets played at the gay clubs, and it's probably true. And he also
Well, that video exists of all of us doing that dance with Mark Patton,
which will never see the light of day.
I hope that doesn't end up as
it's
an Easter egg
embarrassing.
in this new version of the show.
I really don't care about that video because while I was in it, I saw it, and I'm actually out of frame.
Yeah, it's Andrew that's in the foreground.
Oh my God, my dance
Andrew's
was
in the foreground.
I see another Easter egg.
I do too.
Well, you know what's funny? That wasn't the first on-camera dance replication.
No, every time we work with Dan, he makes us dance on.
Because we all did the robot for Friday the 13th Part 5.
We did with Tiffany Helm.
Yeah, there's footage of us doing that too. So when we all die, all this dance footage is going to get released of us throughout these numerous documentaries.
It won't be pretty. And Jeff, I was just teasing about Jeff Katz, but Jeff Katz is a great guy. I mean, he really is. I relate to him in many ways because I was kind of that kid too who lived far away from Hollywood and just had these dreams of working in these movies, and then I got to.
Sjostrom,
and then Mark Sjostrom.
I felt so bad for the guy because he has all these stories of creating these really cool makeup effects throughout the series, and they all would get cut for some reason or another. And it was like,
hey, but this is a great chance. Like that's another cool thing about doing a show like this is we finally get to show fans the stuff they didn't get to see. Look at these storyboards behind Bart Nixon here. I mean, these things are just sitting in a closet collecting dust, and we put them up behind him, and you get to see the transformation scene.
The thing is that in this transformation scene, I think it still works today.
Oh, no,
it's
really
the way it was directed and all those great
cutting,
effects,
the editing
and the
was
cutting,
great.
it really does misdirect what you're looking at, and you completely believe that Freddy Krueger is coming out of.
And of course, all this would be done with CGI today.
Oh,
I mean, you wouldn't even attempt this level of
it's
makeup work.
It's a bummer, and it's kind of what made the Nightmare series the best subject to approach from a documentary standpoint, is because there was this ingenuity that went into every one of these movies that you never see anymore, you know?
But they had to invent it, you know? Like,
Yeah.
the stuff, you couldn't just click a few buttons and a computer and create these effects. You had to figure out how you're going to do them in the moment. And these effects guys, can you imagine the stress they were under? Their effect, which they might have prepped that thing for 10 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got to carry this thing to a set, which they haven't been to before, and make it work on cue with, like, sometimes they get one take, maybe two if they're lucky.
But
there's something about that whole way of doing it. I know Kevin Yeager told that great story about Robert's contact lenses going missing.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, it's just stuff
like
like
today they would just color his eyes in with a computer.
that transformation and things like the Freddy worm and whatnot. I know from their own experiences it was hell, it was crazy. They didn't know if it was going to work at the end of the day, but it holds up better today. I mean, you compare, you know, the simple act of Freddy poking through a latex wall to the remake where it's this really bad CGI haunting effect, you know, and I mean, there's no comparison when it's physically there. You know, I don't care what hell they had to go through to make these set pieces work; they hold up.
Yeah.
You know, whereas you know the newer films, the remake, 3 months, you know, it's dated at the time in its theaters.
Well, I just think that's it. I mean, you know, it's always tough to remake something, and I think with something like this, where it's still so part of this generation, to remake it now, as opposed to, say, 20 years after the fact, after we're all really old, or Robert's passed, or Wes has passed, you know, all these people have passed, and it's a completely different generation. You can kind of see, okay, you kind of give that a new face, but to do it in the middle of still a successful run with Robert, I mean, Robert had played Freddy in Freddy vs. Jason, which was the biggest hit of them all. And then to just sort of summarily dismiss all of that, and then just go back and rewrite the original, I didn't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing if you're remaking King Kong, which is, you know,
again,
several eras removed of
that's
what
I
you're
mean.
doing.
It's too
Even
close.
Wolfman,
It's too close. It's too soon to do a remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, I felt.
Well, if they're remaking Halloween, then...
Well, they already did.
No, nothing's sacred anymore. Let's be honest. It's a
but
trend.
Even now, it was too soon. It's too soon.
Well, I mean, to the modern era of remakes, it's all about marquee value. As we've seen by all the remakes that have come out in the last couple of years, it's just to slap that on a marquee, get a good opening weekend. You don't have to put any thought behind it, which they.
Well, I mean, in a way, I hate to say it, but it's like they're recession-proof movies for the industry. Because they know that they can make a certain amount of money, and it's safe. It's a safe investment in a really troubled financial time.
But it's so fucking depressing, and the fact that they won't...
just wish they would give it to somebody who really got it.
I mean,
really got the series and wanted to do something.
You do something different with it too. You don't do this. You remake Freddy Krueger. You reinvent him from the ground up. You don't do the hat, the fedora, and the striped sweaters and the glove. You completely make him his own character. If Jackie Earl
then
Haley,
why is he Freddy? I mean, that's what doesn't make.
Just make a new movie at that point.
Well, but again, you look at all the best remakes, things like The Thing. They had their own voice. They had their own style. They reinvented it. You know, if you just duplicate something as is, it's like they say in the documentary, like Jim Doyle says, you're just duplicating. It's like a cover band. It's like, you know,
well, that's what it is. I mean, it's like you can cover a song in a million different ways, and a million different artists can do it. And I think that's kind of what it is. I think somebody just put a different set of clothes on it, and whether people liked it or they didn't, I think these remakes do have their fans. So I'm not going to sit here and get on my high horse about it.
But I don't think they're going to last.
In a way, though, I'm grateful for it because it gave us a window of opportunity to make a show like this, which gave us a chance to go back and celebrate the original series. Without that, I don't know if we would have had the momentum behind this.
It did, and it does open up these originals for a new generation. That is the good point. But on the other hand, are you going to see retrospectives like these about these remakes? 20 years down the road, I don't think so.
No, but that's okay.
But I also think that that's a sign of the times. These movies had an impact because in 1984 and 1985, this was new. This was incredible. This was scary. Those makeup effects. Nothing's new and nothing's groundbreaking anymore.
Right. But that's because nobody's trying.
Well, we have such expectations. I don't know if you can ever blow someone's expectations out of the water.
You can. There's still a lot of ingenuity, a lot of original stories to be told. Unfortunately, it's a lot of it has to just do with the market, I think. I mean, you've got lots of great, I think the foreign filmmakers right now are really paving the way and breaking the new ground, but of course, it's the market. You don't see wide releases for a Takashi Miike film or something like that. So I don't know. I wish you could see sort of these. I think it's slowly coming back with a lot of horror filmmakers in our groups who grew up on these kind of films and really want to, make their own franchises in their own voice. I think it's slowly coming back, but I think the remake trend needs to sort of die out before,
I don't know that it will, though. I think there'll always be remakes, and there'll always be sequels.
They're remaking
but...
Little Darlings.
Yeah.
They're now remaking movies that aren't even genre movies. They're remaking dramas and comedies, but
that's always been done, right? I mean,
it has, but it wasn't a trend behind it. Things like movies like The Fly and The Thing that really redefined the genres and broke new ground. You just don't see anything like that anymore because I don't think they have those unique voices behind them. Everybody just wants to sort of ape what worked before.
That's true. But, it's still show business and people want to, they got to make their money. Understood. But, I think one of the points is that things like the original Halloween, the original Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th in its time, they were something, like you said, Tommy, something different, something a little bit groundbreaking. And
which is, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just like you, it was funny you were saying that as Sarah Risher was just talking about, they were trying to do that different original thing.
Right.
And I think, we all get this question, I think, every time we're interviewed. So, what documentary are you going to do next? And I think the answer is, what franchise, what movie has enough weight behind it to do this?
Yeah.
To look back.
Yeah.
That hasn't been already done.
Maniac Cop.
I don't know. Leprechaun, I'm thinking.
Carnosaur.
But no, I mean, that's the thing is, there have been documentaries on Halloween, Friday the 13th, and now Nightmare on Elm Street. And I mean, those really are...
Alien,
Alien, the thing is that the box set of Alien that
they did
Fox
actually
put
a
out,
great job.
Charlie, who did those, did a phenomenal job and fantastic.
That's what I mean. It's kind of already been done. I look at the one franchise that hasn't had like a true, beginning, middle, and end look back is the Scream franchise, but it's too soon.
It's too soon, but not only that, but I mean, in a ways, Elm Street was sort of the holy grail of documentaries because you could go into more things than just making the movie. I mean, a freaking movie studio was built on this thing, and so there's so much more to talk about around it.
I just love Clues.
That's a great way to
line
end,
there.
Yeah.
Well, especially with Justin, our amazing sound designer.
Oh yeah,
Justin
Cruz.
Yeah.
That little noise he has at the very end.
Well, and now we come
great
to
little touches. Now into Dream Warriors,
which is inarguably one of the most popular sequels
personal
in the
favorite.
Entire franchise for so many fans. I think that we were able to get so many great people to talk about their experiences of making this movie, which, as everyone who's watching the documentary realizes, it was a real tough movie to make.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, we learned a lot about the trials.
Well, because, you watch that movie and it's so much fun to watch. In fact, at the New Beverly here in Los Angeles, we do a lot of revival screenings, and where you will find Clu Gulager on any given night.
Oh, yeah.
Front row. But the New Bev, they did a screening of Part 3 about a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago, but it was so much fun to watch it with an audience again. And I saw it, again, dating myself, the night it came out, the night it opened in, I think, February 1987. And I remember being there opening night, and it was a real party atmosphere of a movie. People were just there to have a great time with it, and people loved it.
And you look at the people who worked on these movies. I mean, Frank fucking Darabont. I mean,
not just Frank Darabont.
Frank fucking Darabont. I mean, who was really busy prepping The Walking Dead at the time that we were doing this.
But Frank was really nice, right? I mean,
he was photos incredibly gracious. Yeah, he sent in some really great photos that we could use.
Yeah,
but I mean, these aren't any names that are attached to these to really any of these movies. There's some really cool people, and everybody. What kind of stands out about this series more than anything is all the people who were making them really cared. Some of them were good, some of them weren't, but everybody really jumped into it. Yeah. And
I think everybody was out to make the best movie they can. I don't know of anybody. I mean, I've worked in this business a lot of years, and projects I've done, they're some better than others. nobody goes into it thinking, let's make a shitty movie. I mean,
No.
sometimes things just don't happen.
But even with some of the other retrospectives and documentaries that we did, there were always lots of people who were like, man, I don't want to be remembered for this. I don't want to talk about
Right.
it. Nobody involved
Nobody
with
was
the
like
Nightmare
that,
movies was
right.
like that at all.
Well, no, there were some like.
Well, even Chuck Russell, I think Chuck was a little nervous about doing the show and doing an interview for the show because I think he had a difficult time making the movie. And not to quote anybody who was on the show or try to misquote anybody, but I think there was Rachel talks about how what they learned was how difficult it was to work with him. But I think he had a lot riding on his shoulders. It was his first big directing break. And, he had a lot riding on the movie, and I think he was really stressed out. And I think he was tough on some of these younger actors, Patricia being one of them. And I think Kenny Sagos talks about, who's hilarious in this too,
Kenny
about
Sagos
how
was
difficult
best
it was
in
working with Chuck. So I think Chuck was a little bit nervous because I think, years pass and you hope people have forgiven you for, maybe some of your not so proud moments. But I think Chuck was cool, and he was really nice to come in and do the interview for us.
This was also the first segment we, I think, locked and finished.
I think so, yeah.
It was the first one
That
we
was
finished.
the first go around.
Yeah, we were as further. I mean, it was like if we can just make the rest of it like part 3, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
There's that push.
One of the things too that made it so interesting is just as a whole series is it's the Nightmare franchise isn't like most franchises where you have that seminal first film and then it's all downhill from there.
Right.
There's highs and lows. Comeback movies and things that it really. When they made a mistake, New Line acknowledged it, and they did everything that they could to fix that mistake. So you
Except
really
for
got
Freddy's
to.
dead.
We'll get there. Heather and her coming back to this movie because
that's what I was just going to say. I think even part 2 aside, it's a franchise that actually tells one gigantic story.
Mm-hmm.
Part 1 has Heather's story, and part 2, even though the characters aren't in it, they're in the same house, like Dan mentioned. They find Nancy's diary, and then you have her coming back in part 3, which was, a big decision for Heather to do because she was doing other things, and she wanted to, make sure if this was the best thing for me to do. But when you look at the movie, I think it really holds that movie together and makes it feel like a Nightmare on Elm Street.
I was so glad. I remember the night it opened, and then she showed up with her "Never
that
Sleep
great
Again"
line. It made it feel like special. It made it feel heavy and weighty and important.
Continuity. That's why I think you don't have any major horror franchises like
I
these
love the
anymore.
editing on this, by the way. This cracks me up.
Yeah. But honestly, these movies had a continuity that you don't see in modern franchises anymore, and I think that's why these 80s franchises lasted, as long as they did. Even Friday the 13th for a lot of those movies had that continuity,
right.
Pick up exactly.
If I could just say, Rodney Eastman's interview was probably one of the best interviews we had.
Rodney is incredibly smart. He's so he really knows what he's talking about.
He's really intelligent.
Very smart. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Really great interview with him. Penelope Sudrow. Oh my gosh, she was
interesting.
She was very sweet, and she came in. She did an interview.
Well,
I want to talk about these script pages.
Yeah, I was actually going to point that out.
Shannon Solis was a guy that we found.
Yes.
I mean, literally, I think on the internet.
Yeah.
I don't know how we found him, but we found this guy. I think he's in Texas, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
He did all these great animations, these script pages, and we sort of took the original script page and he created these really cool kind of moves on them. And it was an idea that we got, I think, from maybe something else we saw in another show, maybe like Intervention.
Yeah, no, it was like a way to kind of just showcase who these characters were. And I remember, definitely I have to give props to Shannon because I'm sure he has 1,000 emails from Tommy Hudson going, where are the script pages? Where are my script pages?
Right.
Are they done? Are they done?
Right. But I thought they added something, and we got a lot of props in the reviews and stuff for the show. I know there was kind of like, we couldn't decide whether to use them. I really like that we used them. I
thought
that
was enough.
I was the biggest skeptic on that. I was like, this is not gonna fucking work.
And it worked.
It just makes
I'm glad to hear it.
It just kind of gives it a little visual, like kind of fun little flair. Yeah, that, instead
and
of...
it's a great way to kind of very, very succinctly and quickly move through it and introduce who this person is and who they played in the movie. And it's a good little reminder for people who don't
because
remember.
also some of their characterizations are a little different than what was written in the script, and I don't think you really would get that if you didn't see the script page.
And honestly, I think the Dream Warriors, all the people who played the Dream Warriors, there was so much of them in the actual characters.
Iroh is so.
I mean, he really was the Wizard Master kid.
Yeah.
Like, he grew up playing the D&D, and I think that role was literally the role he was meant to play.
Yeah.
In this world.
It was. Yeah.
I mean, it was literally like talking to the Dream Warriors, not actors.
It was really
so
cool.
it was-
I mean, and
when he started going into his love for Dakin, I mean, that was...
I love it. He's like, all I cared about was
Dakin!
But,
wow, we're quoting our own Dakin.
But again, here's that's a good example of a Crash Cunningham, just a fake sort of like change your child's behavior, because we couldn't find any of that stuff, and if we could, we probably couldn't.
And I mean, how great is it that we get Priscilla Pointer to recount her Elm Street memories? I mean, she's a legend.
She really is. She's the mom, the real life mom of Amy Irving.
I remember when Dan and I were talking, and how is Priscilla getting to the set? And I said, her daughter's bringing her. And we were like,
Amy Irving's coming
bringing her to the
set.
set. It wasn't. It was
the former Mrs. Spielberg. So, But her sister Katie Irving came.
Yes, exactly.
And drove her. But there had been this rumor that Katie Irving had been the one that sang the theme song for Carrie,
and it wasn't.
And it wasn't that Katie Irving. She was very quick to point that out to me that it's not.
I remember the moment that just passed where we have Heather saying, that moment with Brooke Bundy's character is just so tawdry and sad. And I remember I really fought for that because I loved the weight that Heather's.
Well, there was a little bit more that I remember. Like, we cut out a sentence of that because I remember being there when we were.
It just gets a little dark.
I mean, all we needed was that. I just
tawdry and wrong.
Please give her the tawdry and sad.
And then talk about mothers and daughters and connections in the business. The fact that Brooke is the mom, the real life mom of Tiffany Helm, who was in Friday the 13th Part 5,
who you
I had
dance
just
with.
interviewed and we had just danced with on the last show we'd done. So it was really easy for me to call Tiffany and say, can you ask your mom to do Elm Street? And
she was great.
Within a day, we got a call from her.
She was our first interview.
Brooke was our first interview because she was the easiest for us to get to. But Brooke was super cool, and she was fantastic. She was really nice.
And then I of we have John Saxon.
Who's the main? I mean, that guy has worked with everybody.
I mean, the fact that we got him to do this, I thought of all the people, I just thought he wouldn't.
He'd be disinterested,
and he just came in, and he was, and he came with his wife, and he was very nice, and
he's fantastic, man. And I think he's one of the interesting characters that goes back to why the Nightmare series in particular actually had something to say and had longevity. He had an arc. I mean, he was the guy who was part of Freddy's killing mob.
Right.
And then in part 3,
probably the
he
leader
becomes
of the
a
mob.
nobody.
Right.
Yeah. And it's because of what happened.
Right.
And I think that you just don't see a lot of that arc in a franchise in the genre.
And then when he comes back in number 7 as himself, but then he kind of is that cop again in the dream sequence, and he becomes Thompson again. It's just a great kind of circular thing that Wes created in the Wes Craven trilogy, if you want to call it that.
This is slightly off topic, but Saxon, I've done a lot of demo reels across Hollywood for a lot of these guys, and one of the things that I've noticed is that there's so many movies. I mean, John Saxon has done like 200-300 movies, but there are so many films, I think at least a dozen movies, where John Saxon, Franco Nero, and David Hess are all in the same movie. And in each one of those movies, without question, they will all end up killing each other, and only one will remain by the time the movie is over, without fail, in every one of those films.
Kind of Hollywood cowboy sort of maverick characters. But I mean, this footage, too, I think is so great. I mean, to know that was a real pig that they picked up at some, slaughterhouse downtown, I mean, just nasty.
And I think it's kind of just, it's always fun. I know that a lot of people probably knew the pig story, but to watch the director, Chuck Russell, tell that story, to watch the director of photography with the look on their face, they are remembering what that smells like.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what I love about
Roy Wagner
the show.
was completely, you
could
almost smell it.
We really get their memory. Visually, we can see that they are truly remembering everything.
And here's this great moment, again, talking about Mark Shostra.
Oh, this is so sad.
Design work, and he had created this skeletal, desiccated little girl that Patricia was supposed to be running around with, and here's the effect as it was supposed to have been.
What were they thinking?
And then they put this little fake, thrown together in 5 minutes, little plastic skeleton together with a couple of hairs coming out of its head, and There it is. That's
would
the
have been
final one that they chose.
so
Over the effect.
chilling.
But that's the kind of stuff that, wow, that we get to learn this now and see it. And I think that's the value of a show like this, too. It's almost like film school in a DVD,
Yeah, totally.
package. It's,
You know,
it's kinda neat. For
I
me,
mean-
if I was a fan and I got to watch a show like this with this many people and giving us this much of an inside scoop, I'd be
I mean, I went to film school, and the professors there would always tell you, "Oh, you're going to experience the School of Hard Knocks when you go to Los Angeles." Well, these guys actually show you the School of Hard Knocks,
right.
and they show you examples of what they.
There's nothing like really living that school as we did on this show,
Yeah.
and on any show. But anyway, you were going to say, Buzz.
Oh, with Kevin Yeager, he's talking about the penis thing, and it's unfortunate we didn't get an actual picture to show what it looked like. But I remember of a penis. Of the actual snake. What it looked like from above. But when we were at the Kevin Yeager studio, Andrew and I think you were off talking to Kevin, but Andrew took
Kevin
he
gave me this
I remember.
statue.
I was there.
Oh, you were there for that? Yeah. He gives Andrew the model of like the original sculpt of the snake, and Andrew puts it between his legs. And I remember him and I were taking pictures of Andrew with the Freddy Krueger snake between his legs,
And I'm like,
and
kind
it
of
really
stroking it.
and look for those photos at Elm Street Legacy.
And it's almost frightening when you see that raw footage of
when you do look at it.
But look at this
from
stuff, how
above.
they had to do that in those days. I mean, with like a real snake on set,
Like
and
eating
Bill
Patricia
Bristol
Arquette.
and eating Patricia Arquette. No wonder she didn't want to talk about this movie. But no, she, I think she would have done it had there been time.
Yeah,
in her
I mean, I
schedule.
think
we came close.
We
We
did
came
come
close.
We came
a
very
couple of
close. Again,
times.
they were, one of the teams that were very cordial and very friendly and very accommodating. And I worked for months with them back and forth. It just, again, Patricia, Johnny, they're stars.
Yeah.
They're busy people. And
But-
I think that I have to thank their handlers for being so gracious and even paying attention to what we were doing and being supportive.
Yeah, no, they were
know,
very supportive. But on the other hand of that, there are those fans that are like, well, they could have taken the time to do it because it should be important to them that this was their first film.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I can't say what should and should be important to anyone, but at the end of the day, the decision was to not do the show, to not do the interview. And I think the show, as great as it would have been to have them, I still think it stands on its own without them. And I think there's enough people referencing their performances and referencing the things even that went wrong, with them. I think Patricia had a really hard time on part 3.
Mhm.
I mean, for a lot of us who are hardcore horror fans, which would be anybody watching this documentary, I mean, Depp is cool, Patricia Arquette's cool, but the rock stars are people like the filmmakers and the makeup guys.
Yeah.
People like Kevin Yeager who would, we'd go into his studio and he'd show us the Crypt Keeper and give us tours and everything. That and Kane B and all these other people who are like, if you're really interested in this kind of subject, these are the guys that you really want to get up close and personal with.
I love this story about Zsa Zsa Gabor because that was one of the funniest things, the way Roy Wagner told that. He's like that Dick Cavett thought she was one of the dumbest people he'd ever met, and if he ever had her on our show, he'd want to see her killed.
Honestly, if New Line is listening to this and they put out, they dig into their vaults for special editions and whatnot, because Wagner was talking about that all this raw footage exists of the interview where Cavett is just tearing into her, and she didn't understand it. She didn't get it at all.
The reason she was in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 was because Dick Cavett wanted to see her get slashed.
I would kill to see that unedited interview with her.
That would be hilarious.
Roy Wagner's interview was actually really funny too, just because I think it was his daughter.
Except his daughter fell asleep.
No, that's what made it so funny. So, like halfway through, we're sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear a.
Yeah, we're picking this stuff up on the headphones. I'm like, what is that? I think I was interviewing him, but somebody was picking up and then we hear her. It was his teenage daughter.
We all turn around, yeah.
The night before, but she was in the room with us, shooting, in the stage,
And she just
passed out. She's in the chair with her head back, and she's snoring at the.
So funny.
There. So anyway, that's why that one went a little bit over.
Oh man, Yeager was one of the funniest people I think we interviewed. I mean,
he's so nice and
very
who
sweet.
Has such a huge career. I mean, and it all kind of started with Elm Street. I want to say this was his.
It was his
Elm
first
Street
big
2?
job.
Was
It was his
big
first
job,
big, but
too.
he was telling us other stories about doing Child's Play and all the
Well,
insanity.
he met his
that-
wife on Child's Play.
Yeah,
Catherine Hicks.
and all the crazy stories that went down behind him directing Hellraiser 4 and just things that you could have made a documentary just about him.
Well, he and I had a lot to chat about on the Hellraiser 4 because when I was doing Halloween 6, they were having all of those problems
Oh, that's
on
right,
Hellraiser
yeah.
4, and they were allocating money from our budget to that movie. So we were watching our movie go like that in order to fix Hellraiser, and I think they had let Kevin go by then. It's a whole lot of drama.
You guys were pretty much like swapping war stories.
Yeah.
Because
It
we
was the
all
scene
were
in
the
Jaws
same.
where you're like, I'll drink to your leg. You drink to my leg, and we drink to each other's legs.
You think you had it tough.
I think another a Mark Patton-esque story is Stacey Alden.
Oh my god, yeah.
You know, we got the nurse.
I know, it's crazy.
I would really like to point out I didn't shoot this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was.
I so wish I would have.
She's a little
I
dark.
know. Well, in retrospect, I wish we had been able to, with time and money, been able to shoot all of these interviews. The vast majority of them we did shoot, luckily, because most of the Elm Street people, unlike Friday the 13th people, have remained in Los Angeles, which I was
a lot
very
of Elm
grateful
Street
for.
people are still working in some capacity in the business.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
But the thing is, there were people like Stacy and Toy Newkirk, who comes up later in the show.
Tracy Middendorf.
These are people from New York and who live in different states, and we had different crews working on those shoots. And, you know, it's very difficult to match what you're doing from one place to the other.
Although, the foreign crews that we had, we did Ronnie Yu in Hong Kong.
Thing. I Skyped the interview with Ronnie Yu in Hong Kong.
And
it turned out beautifully.
Steph Hutchison, who directed Halloween 25 Years of Terror, did Stephen Hopkins in the UK.
Yep. And literally on a moment's notice.
Yeah.
On a moment's notice, Steph Hutchinson put that interview together for us. So thank you, Steph.
Well, this is so sad because I think we twice.
But she's
shot the interview twice.
But Stacey
sad.
Alden. But the fact that we found her,
Yeah,
I mean, that was now talk about that was another weird.
Well, because
one.
of her name.
Well, because she has a different name.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is we couldn't find her at all. Like she wasn't right. She wasn't listed with SAG. She had no manager. She was unfindable. I looked on IMDb one day, and there was a post on there from somebody who said, "Oh, not only is she still around, but I know her." And I responded to it, and it turned out to be her boyfriend.
Oh.
So that's how we
There we go.
connected with
That
her.
was the cool thing, is that we kind of opened this documentary up to the fans, and they would send us material and give us leads and things like that. And like, just
Well, Will Watson from Nightmare on Elm Street Films.com. We have to say thanks to Will because awesome. I mean, he was such a great. He not only created a forum for us on his website, right? A forum for all of our, the fans of the Elm Street movies, and specifically for the show to go and chat and exchange ideas. But it became a real fan thing.
Yeah, and even like we were keeping people in progress to up to date.
Jennifer Rubin. That's why we're chuckling.
Yeah. But even people like Whit Hertford, who played Jacob in Dream Child, like just contacted me out of the blue on Facebook and was like, "Hey, I hear you guys are doing
really
this."
Good buddies with Whit. It's so weird.
Oh, Whit is hysterical. He performs at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater.
He's so funny.
He is one of the funniest local comedians you will ever see.
Whit's a great guy, and but it's just it was funny. After a while, here and there, we get contacted by the people
were like,
themselves.
I want to be in it.
We want to be a
How do I
part
get
of
in
it.
it?
How do I get in on this? So that was really cool. That's her leg. I still can't believe that that's her leg.
Yeah.
That is still just the most
disgusting
thing in all of the movies.
It makes me cringe.
I can't even picture. I can handle anything on screen except when a needle is inserted into like a vein or something.
Right.
Like I have to turn away.
Yeah,
so
no,
that scene was my
little
ultimate.
puckering little mouths on her, which is supposed to be her arm, but they actually used the back of her leg for the shot. I don't know if that made the show or if that's in the extended interviews, but
you can do
trivia.
Martyrs level torture porn all you want. I won't blink. But the second a needle in a vein is.
I think that's really...
and Jennifer Rubin, how cool we got Taryn.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love what she says there,
But she's so different from what I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
If there was one person you were to ask me, who was not...
It would be Jennifer.
It would be Jennifer Rubin.
She
because
really acted her butt off.
She acted her butt off
totally.
because she's very shy and very soft-spoken, and I had to kind of get her to come out of her shell a little bit with this interview. She wasn't comfortable with doing it. She wasn't comfortable in front of the camera. I don't think at that moment, or whatever it was, but it was really, really coaxing that interview as much as I could because she's very shy and very, what's the word?
She just has...
She's demure.
Yeah.
She's demure.
And it's just...
which is the total opposite of the girl she's playing in this movie.
Yeah.
Who's,
well, and
ballsy
who is the total opposite of someone like Ira Heiden, who is one of the funniest, most gregarious people.
I love this story right here of just here you go, kid. We're gonna just slip this little 2x4 underneath your vest,
and then we're gonna stick a knife in it.
Yeah, like
and let's hope for the best.
That would never happen anymore. The unions, everybody would just like crucify all these people. Yep. So it was, that's I kind of miss this era of filmmaking. I kind of
it's almost like see what you can get away with.
But that's the thing. That's why I think it goes back to it's so simple now. I think it's so hard to really do something that's so brand new that's going to wow someone. Mm-hmm. Because back then it was, oh my God, how are they doing that? Now they're doing it with computers.
Right.
Like there's no limit to what you can really do. Mm-hmm. I don't think anything is going to come along anytime soon that someone literally says, how did they do that?
Right.
The answer is simply CG.
CG. But CG changed the whole face of everything. And we'll talk about that in the show. I mean, look at this stuff with... Like, everything was just these little simple composite shots, and they'd have a blue screen, or but all this, I mean, I love the story of the set and the hell set in this movie, and how they talk about how difficult it was, and how, tensions were really, really rising with the heat in the scene, and people were very open with us in their answers.
Well, we sat them down. The first thing that Dan and I would say when we get them in the chair is like, okay, this is not studio controlled. There's nobody watching over you. Just speak your mind.
Right.
And and most people did.
Yeah, most people did. Not everyone. Some people I think were still playing it a little bit safe. Because it's a small town, and everybody still wants to work. So you don't want to trash everyone you've ever worked with.
But nobody, to everyone's credit, and we do, and even if they had said stuff like this, it wouldn't have made the documentary anyway. But nobody, it wasn't shit talking. It was just like, here's what we went through. Right. This is what happened.
Yeah.
Nobody was bitter or angry or pissed off at a certain individual.
Yeah, no, you don't see anybody holding a grudge. I never got that, but I definitely sensed that, people were remembering how tough this stuff was. Mm-hmm. Especially this scene.
Oh, yeah.
That I can feel that heat coming off the pictures. I mean, that must have been miserable. And I think they shot it in the summer, right, Tommy?
Yeah, they did. They shot it in the summer. They had no air conditioning. And Heather even talks about it. It was like that fog, that thick, smoky, probably not good for you fog. And it was just a really tough shoot. And and look what they're wearing. I mean, she's wearing like a sweater.
Let's talk about that outfit.
Come on, it's a pink sweater with pearls. Heather always argues with me, and she's like, "It wasn't just a sweater; it was cashmere or something. Like, it doesn't matter. It's pink, and it looks like a sweatshirt with pearls.
Pink sweatshirt with pearls on it.
I think all of us who were involved with post production the last month of this film can relate to that hellish boiler room set, because that's pretty much what the editing bay became like.
It did. It was tough.
We're talking.
But here's the thing. I mean, this was just done with so little money, and the fact the show I think just looks really good. I mean, Buzz, you did a great job of color timing all these interviews that you shot, and just the blend and Benny who had to chroma every single one of these out. I mean, that was not easy work.
No,
especially working with such a limited crew. And
I mean, our bodies and our brains were so insanely beat down by the end of this, to the point where I even almost get a little physically sick when I look at the documentary, because I'm instantly taking back to on my fourth day of no sleep, barely eating, sweating, and panic attacks, gotta get it done.
Tough. And it was really one of the hardest things. I think this was the real test. I think anything after this is going to seem like a cakewalk.
The funniest thing was the second that I was done, I didn't have a day to recover. They, the Shout Factory and Red Shirt Pictures threw Buzz and I the Galaxy of Terror documentary, which was a feature-length documentary, again shot on green screen with half of the Robert Englund and Chris Biggs, and half the people in that documentary were green screen interviews from this documentary, and so we instantly had to jump back on it, no time off.
I couldn't have done it.
It was a 90-minute documentary, and we were like, oh, yeah, well, we did it with our eyes closed because of this, all because of working on this. Everything is a cakewalk.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that the production of this was actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was.
Post was difficult, but especially for me, because, the backgrounds you're seeing and stuff on all the plates, John Saxon's already passed, but that car and, purple light in the background, that was the auto shop at my high school that I went to.
Yeah.
And I knew one of the janitors still, and I just asked him, I was like, can I break in on a weekend? And I flew up north or drove up there. It was in Chico, California. Literally snuck into my high school on a Saturday and just got... That
All those
boiler
great
room that's
shots.
behind Wes Craven,
Yeah,
Heather
and
Langenkamp, and
yeah.
Robert.
You never
That
know
one
it's
right
the same
there.
shot though. It is.
No. I
flopped
just
and colored and-
flopped, recolored, whatever.
Yeah, so
Different
cool.
lighting scheme. That
Yeah.
is one boiler room at my high school
Wow.
that I repurposed like I think 6
But
times.
you know what? That's the kind of stuff. And look at, and I love like the textured green and red
Mhm.
stripes when we had the old film.
Well, and again, I just have to keep going back to, he was just saying, the mirror thing was like manipulating Mylar. I mean, this was all real.
Yeah.
They
Oh,
were
yeah.
really there
Yeah.
with a real mirror, real Mylar. It all would be done on computers today. I
I
will
love
say
it.
one thing about that scene that always, even when I was younger, when the mirrors shatter and they all jump out and they hug and Nancy's like, he's gone, it's over. I'm like, really, Nancy?
Yeah.
Is it that easy?
Yeah, she walked into her death a little too. Like, okay.
But I love that we could reference movies like House of Dracula
yeah.
and and just these little clips of these. I just think it
I-
adds so much richness
Because
to
I
the show.
think that also the richness of our show is really on the coattails of the fact that the people who created these movies tried to do something smarter.
Right.
They
right.
did try to do something that would harken back to
Yeah.
the mythology and
Mhm.
and the storylines
Yeah.
of the movies that did work in the genre, as opposed to just let's have a killer killing everyone.
This whole section was really hard to place. It moved around a lot. The whole
Yeah.
talk about Freddy's mom.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I mean, even though it doesn't sort of where we have it now, it doesn't sequentially fall in where Freddy's mom appeared in the movie because we kind of really tracked the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
But it just felt right because we were talking about the religious symbolism
Yeah.
of the movie, so it felt right to us to put it there.
And the little side note, Nan Martin, the
Yes,
wonderful
who
actress who
played
played Amanda Kruger, we did try to get her. We were not successful because of things she had going on, and as many fans know, she has since passed on.
So kudos to, and here's to drink to Nan.
Cheers.
To Nan Martin. Clink, clink.
Clink, clink.
And,
we actually had a clink.
two. But,
I did not find it appropriate that Nancy Thompson died at the end of part 3 because I
Really?
really liked Nancy.
well, I like Nancy
I
too.
know.
But I thought if they're going to pass the
Dramatically.
torch, I thought Kristen was a great one to pass the torch to. I just wish it had been Patricia in part 4.
Yeah. No,
And I wish,
dramatically.
for me, I wish part 4 had been better.
And honestly,
I'm not a big part 4 fan.
more horror movies need to take a cue from this because generally, Heather today would not live past the opening sequence
Oh,
if
yeah,
she
she'd
came back
be a
from a
cameo.
sequel.
You're right.
Yeah,
No, that's what I'm saying.
cameo,
But
yeah.
Dramatically, it works completely wonderfully.
Right.
I just
You
love.
just didn't
I
want-
didn't want her to die.
Of course.
I'm gonna
dream you into a beautiful dream.
Worst line ever.
Harmony. Let's try that again. But actually, the one thing we didn't get to cover was I don't think they ever shot it, but there was a scripted ending. Dokken.
Dokken,
I'll
we have
pause.
to talk about Dokken because Annette Slomka, our production manager, we're like, I was really like, we kept talking back and forth. I was like, we gotta get Dokken, we
Yeah.
have to.
Andrew was the one pushing
and,
for Dokken.
and she was on the phone with their manager nonstop.
Yeah.
And finally, we nailed Alice Cooper down. So she called them back for like the 20th
they turned us
time.
down,
They
right?
turned us down, and she was like, we got Alice Cooper, and the manager's like, goes quiet. He's like, let me call you back in 2 minutes. And then instantly,
Wow.
bam,
Right.
Dokken, and that was like the heavy metal day, the last day of
Yeah.
shooting. We did Alice Cooper in the morning.
It was
and
so
then we,
beyond
Yeah.
the last day of shooting. We had wrapped shooting.
No, that was
a month
January.
Yeah,
before.
don't get me
Yeah.
started on
Yeah.
last day of shooting.
No
No
such thing.
20 last days.
but this was the final day
I'm
of
like,
rolling.
no more.
Well, that was a really cool one too because I really like the way Dawkins' interview looks a lot in the back. We shot at the rainbow.
That's at the
room.
Rainbow Room. In
Yeah, and
Sunset
that
Boulevard.
isn't green screen. I've actually had
No.
people say, "Was Dawkins green screen too?" And I'm like,
Yeah,
no,
and
that
Kevin
was-
Yeager wasn't either. That was
Yeah.
I
really
love that where they're
shot
lip
and-
syncing.
That was a tough one to light in Kevin's studio, though you would think it wouldn't have been because it's
No,
a
it was-
studio,
it
but
was-
not an easy setup.
It was difficult. Well, because Kevin has glasses.
But
and a little ring light.
the ironic thing is, this is where we're at is in the Rainbow Room in the upper level in a Rockstar VIP lounge called the Lair of the Hollywood Vampires.
Oh yeah.
And we had interviewed Alice Cooper right before we had interviewed them at his radio station. We came here, and there's this big plaque on the wall that says Lair of the Hollywood Vampires, President Alice Cooper.
Oh, wow.
And I think Dokken is listed right underneath them.
So
So we're like,
weird.
this is so bizarre.
And I do have to point out that Rachel Talalay has a platinum
She has the
album.
platinum record, and she thinks it's hilarious because she's
Her
like,
white
Jewish rhythm.
yeah.
And she's someone that we haven't really talked about.
No.
I mean, talk about a trooper.
I love Rachel.
Before the interview, before she flew in from Canada, she sent us tons of stuff. I think one of the coolest things about looking at all these people talk about how Nightmare on Elm Street became such a success is it's obvious that fans love this movie for a reason. And I think this movie was the one that we know the direction Freddy did go in, but I think that it could have gone in so many directions. But I kind of like what they did with it in terms of, like Dan said earlier, the Kristen story, and she was, the logical choice, I think, to pass the torch.
This was the best direction I think they could have gone in, all things considered.
Yeah, oh yeah. And they got a great cast. I mean, all the kids were really likable and relatable, and I think that's why the Dream Warriors are popular to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's why the demographic for people like Freddy Krueger is people tend to be like my age and my generation and whatnot.
And how old is that, Buzz?
Yeah,
and the thing
early
is,
20s.
They're all really
12.
relatable. I think you all have the Wizard Master or Dungeons and Dragons fan.
No,
the
they're
girl
all-
who wants to be.
I mean, they're all types, but at the same time, they're types you can totally relate with.
Yeah.
And it's funny
they're-
how after 20 some odd years they haven't changed all that much.
Oh no,
I mean,
they
the clothes have changed a
Yeah.
bit, but
Oh.
Well, I
But
mean,
the-
these days you see they're not, they were genuine. They're not the GQ model types that you see in horror films these
Right,
days.
totally,
they
yeah.
have personalities and
the seven
real,
Penance stars.
well, they look
Yeah.
like real kids,
and they have
Yeah.
chemistry. They have really intense chemistry
Right.
together, which is great.
Yeah, no, no, that's one of my beefs with sort of modern horror films and Scream and all that came along was just everybody has to look like they were carved out of cream cheese.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
they think they've got it down to a formula, but they've braced all the wrong aspects of that formula to where they don't. Nobody really knows how to make a successful horror
I love this bit coming up here, by the way, with Roger.
Roger.
Oh, it's
Ebert.
great.
Such a funny little.
So funny,
Like,
and what a find that was too. I mean, it's one of the rare clips that you can find on that.
I feel
And
so bad though because when we finished this documentary, then they announced that big article with him where he's you see him
I
now
know.
and it's like, oh, poor Roger.
Well, but the thing is,
Whoa.
though, I think the interesting thing is the difference between what the fans thought of the movies and what the critics thought. And
Yeah.
I just remember Dan and I had a conversation about what can we do with this Roger Ebert interview that isn't just showing another clip. And it was like, hey, let's talk to Michael Granberry and see what
Yeah.
he can come
yeah,
up with.
no.
that
That was
was
one of
I
the
mean, that's
first
so great.
claymation things we got, too.
Yeah, I think
I
it
mean,
was. And it was just funny. And then
picking
Andrew
TV.
Sepperly, who's also a great part of this team, unsung hero of this team. Not an easy guy to track down these days. He's pretty busy.
He's
so,
really busy.
But he did a lot of the graphics work for us on the show, and he did that in particular. He took the animation that Michael did, and then we handed off to Andrew, who kind
Put
of
it in the
superimposed the
TV.
TV. Yes, right. Put the image on the
You
TV.
know, I've been kind of curious. I've been wanting to send the documentary to Ebert because Ebert's a very big presence on Twitter, and if you follow him on Twitter, he's absolutely hysterical because
Right.
he's always talking about stuff, and he seems to have a really good sense of humor about things, and even himself.
Does he ever re-review things
Yes,
and say
he
I
does.
was wrong?
He absolutely does.
It's-
I wonder what he would say about Nightmare 3 in retrospect. I mean,
he
because
probably
it's
would
such
give it
a
better review.
it's such a
I don't know.
it's
He did it with Halloween.
Here's-
He did
yeah,
it with
this
Dawn.
is-
I mean, maybe
No,
not
he
Dawn.
liked Halloween.
He liked
Yeah, he liked
Halloween.
Halloween.
There was
He
another
liked
one.
Dawn.
He
It was
re-reviewed
Predator.
Did he
It was-
recant?
he hated Predator when it came out in his
Huh.
Predators review. He was talking about how the original was a classic or something like that.
I mean,
So-
I think
No,
the best that
time
anyone could
to-
hope for is he would look back and go, you know what, for its time,
Yeah.
it broke a lot of new
I mean,
ground.
here's the
and-
thing with Ebert. A lot of people give him shit, but not only is he super, super intelligent, one of the few decent critics left in the world, he's always been a fan of good, intelligent horror movies. In fact, because thanks to Ebert, I went out and saw Dawn of the Dead because I read his review of it, and
Well, God, he loved Last House on the Left.
yeah.
Mm.
I mean, critics hated that movie, but he's the
Yeah,
one
I think
that
you'll give him a
looked
break
deeper
when they
as a movie.
have when he sees something else going on. I think with this one though, I don't
He
know.
gets a little too on his high horse.
Yeah,
you know,
especially with
of
this
the
movie.
morality.
I mean, just talking about the whole that this movie should have been X-rated. I mean, come on. You
Oh,
know?
no,
I mean,
now
I
we're
guess
on-
it's because
now
of
we're
the
on
whole
4.
the sexual. I know we're into 4, but I just the whole idea that there was so much sexuality. But I mean, that's every teenage boy's fantasy, you know, with the nurse. I mean, it wasn't playing in some perverse way. These were what normal kids think about and fantasize about, and the movie tapped into that.
And no one knows what teenage boys want more than
Rennie Harlan.
Rennie,
I
and
think-
good segue,
I
but
mean, all the directors are great that we got all the directors, but I love that we got this incredible from nothing story.
yeah.
It's
You
my
know,
favorite. I
it
mean,
is, yeah.
It's one
Harlan-
of the best stories of the
Yeah.
whole doc. Listening to that.
Well, it's an emotional story. I mean, he really does get choked up
Yeah.
when he
Oh,
talks
yeah.
about,
and
you know,
he's one of the few filmmakers that came from the genre that overly appreciative of where he came from. Like, I mean, he's very, like, cause, you see these actresses like, yeah, I was in such and such, and, I did that, and whatever, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Rennie is like, hell yeah, I did Nightmare 4, and it was awesome.
No, he really holds it up. I mean, he's, because you never know, he's had a huge career since this movie. And a lot of directors, from other series who've gone on to other films, they don't even want to talk about them. I won't name names, but there are those from who started their career in these kinds of movies who literally will not give you the time of day if you want to ask them to talk about the movies. Rennie jumped in with, guns blazing, and he gave us a great interview.
And he was us?
But he's continued to follow up. He's been really supportive. I think he bought like 5 copies of the DVD.
Someone else I just keep seeing over and over who we should be thankful for, Sarah Risher. She's been told some really great, gritty,
great to get
in the trenches stories. I mean, she, just like Bob, she saw New Line
she saw it from the beginning. She was there from the beginning, and she was kind of Bob's right hand through a lot of those early years and even later years. I think she was really the person who opened their West Coast offices for them.
The one, I just saw the script title page, the one person I'm still sad about is Brian Helgeland.
Yeah, you tried to get him a few times.
We were this close.
Oh, Brian Helgeland contacted you.
Yes.
I know somebody who knows him personally, so
Heather knows him too. I mean, they did a movie with him. He was, it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
I'm just so sad because it would have been so great to
it would have been
his
cool. Yeah. Because this is this the one where we don't have the writer? We don't have a writer on this one, in this segment, do we?
I don't know if Nightmare 4 had a concrete writer.
It was just like you saw in that clip. I mean, it was right in the middle of the writer's strike in '88, and this movie was like,
it's amazing.
Script by committee. I think they all just kind of jumped in. I think Andras was talking about how he wrote a scene, and everybody just kind of wrote a piece of it.
And everyone talks about, like, there's no story, there's no script, there's no this, yet it was the most popular of the franchise.
I know. But I think that was also coming off of the success of 3.
Yeah, no,
I think people were ready for more.
It's a gorgeous, fun movie. Like, Rennie really did the most action.
Yeah.
And he did the most everything.
But I think, though, the argument is that he turned Freddy into that real wisecracker.
Yeah, I think Harlan was... The great thing about Harlan is he's so unpretentious. About everything, and he's funny as hell.
Yeah. No, I like that he was cracking jokes about his own stuff. I think Dan made the best joke when we were interviewing him. When you were like, we could have Freddy Krueger riding a shark while John McClane fights it with a jet or something. You said something along those lines, and he was laughing his ass off about it.
What's funny is we were just at a screening of Prison, his first movie, down at the New Bev, and they showed a Rennie Harlan trailer reel before the movie, and after every trailer, Rennie Harlan was in the audience. He was sort of in the back of the auditorium. After every trailer ended, he'd shout, "Genius!"
Speaking of other hard-to-find people,
Danny Hassel.
What a great find!
Didn't think we were going to get him.
Talked about the movie. Went off to the war.
Yep, he volunteered to join. What did he join, the army or the Marines or something?
It was like some top secret mission or something.
He worked for this. He worked
Black Ops, Gulf War.
He worked for us in the trenches of Afghanistan. I think.
And then he came back, and he was really excited to do this because he
lives up in Washington somewhere now.
He's an incredibly nice guy.
Yeah, very nice, and just it was really cool. For me, it was great to see the leads come back and talk about the movies because we haven't seen these people in years. Some of them, and Danny being high on that list of people, I think that we tried to get.
This was really exciting because Part 4 was our most complete cast of any of the films that we covered in the documentary.
I gotta say, Buzz, Rennie Harlan's interview looks really good.
It is.
I'm very happy with Rennie.
Really,
I like a lot.
I like
of
the background a lot.
My favorite one out of the entire show has to be, I don't know if he's popped up yet, but Danny Hassel's interview with the motorcycle in the background.
Oh yeah.
I mean, just as a plate alone,
that was cool.
Is just I look at that and I'm like.
But I just think awesome. the contrast on everything just blended really.
I do wish I would have shot Rennie a little bit lower since he's like 7 foot tall and you can't really tell.
Well, it's tough, we're shooting green screen on most of the interviews and we didn't have reference to the backgrounds that we were going to be using, so there was no way on set. It was all guesswork in terms of how you're going to light them.
This did a great job. We never got a straight answer about the Patricia Arquette story. That was the one thing that we were going into, like, we're going to find out, damn it.
Yeah, but you're never going to know. Everybody's going to have their own take on it, and there probably were multiple reasons she didn't do the movie. Well, I think all of those reasons were probably valid. If we would have talked to
Patricia, it
would have set the record straight.
We could have got at least a little bit in the right direction.
Well, and I think it is interesting that we get to talk to the woman who, ended up portraying that role. And I think Rodney and Ken really kind of gave an honest opinion about the change and how it affected, I think, their performances. But, I mean, at the end of the day, what you see on screen completely seems to work. But it's interesting that we got to kind of dig beneath the surface a little.
Mm-hmm. I love the pissing Freddy back to life.
This was another thing that I was like, what the hell? We have to address this head on.
And one of the things that didn't make it in, I don't think, maybe it's in the extended, is the fact that the first dog caught on fire. Remember Chris Biggs?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He says the first dog completely
lit on fire.
It was a fake dog, unfortunately.
Tuesday Night does the funniest Rennie Harlan impersonation.
Everybody did their Rennie Harlan impressions when we came in.
It comes out beautiful when you do it that way. I think this Ken Sagos just this down home, say it like it is.
Ken Sagos did his.
You're an infection like hell.
Ken did his own Rennie Harlan impression, which is hilarious. But then afterwards, he's like, "Man, you released this, ain't none of us gonna work no more."
It just dawned on me that Robert came on and he did a quote is through the magic of editing and the toiling of you really got Robert to talk about almost everything in every segment when really Robert had like 5 hours of talking about everything under the sun.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really incredible that we were able to find all those nitty gritty details that we could cut in for every movie because he's so important to the franchise, and it's great that he talked for so long and there was all that rich material to draw from.
Yeah, no, Robert.
This is not Robert.
This is not Robert Englund. I think on this version of the DVD that's clarified. The original version of the DVD that came out, we got a lot of reviews saying that Robert Englund was the one yelling at the crew behind the scenes on 4.
I will
it's not
say
true. That's his stunt double.
The stunt double does channel a good Robert angry voice, though.
I guess so.
I didn't even
think about
angry.
it.
I can't imagine Robert.
I was really surprised that
if
people
Robert
thought...
was to be angry, I think he kind of had that timbre of Robert's voice.
When I first saw the first cut of it, I walked in and was just like, "Wow, that's amazing! We have that clip of Robert being pissed off."
I never thought
like, "No, it's not Robert." I'm like, "Oh, well, maybe we should clarify that." And he was like, No, people will be able to tell. Don't worry.
And
sure enough, all the reviews start coming.
Yeah, Buzz, we should have listened to you.
I totally thought it was Robert.
See, I said, I told you, I knew.
It was all my idea. Guys need to listen to me more.
But she was really funny.
I had the biggest crush on Tuesday Night when I was young. I did. I did. Everyone got really quiet there.
Did you tell her?
No.
I will.
I mean, she was so different from Patricia. Her energy, not just because she kind of when she was young she had the blonde hair and all that, but she didn't. It wasn't a good recast in the sense that she didn't really remind me of her.
I didn't know what was going on. I was like, "Who's that girl?"
Yeah, it was a little confusing.
That's not Patricia Arquette.
I mean, I think she, that's a hard thing to step into. I mean, I know, we recast Danielle Harris's role in Halloween 6, and we got a lot of flack for that. And, I think sometimes the people in charge, the money people, as they call them, they don't sometimes realize the value that fans place on the original actors.
Well, especially back in this day, it was all it was so much more disposable as sequels.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Now look at somebody who has dipped in the fountain of youth is Lisa Wilcox.
I was just going to say, looking at her now and looking at her hair, they really did a number on making her frumpy.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to make Lisa Wilcox look bad.
Yeah.
She's
but
gorgeous.
she looks amazing
looks
today.
I love that photo of her.
In the Ripley, sort of.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because she totally channeled.
But you can tell she and Robert had a good chemistry. I could tell they really respect each other.
They really did.
Well, as Kat says, her and Nancy, it's almost like a tie between fans who they like better, Nancy or
Alice. And I love this scene that she points out about the wig.
Well, it's so bad. Even when I saw the movie the first time, I thought, who is that? It's like a dude in a wig.
Probably was. It's probably Rennie. It was probably just Rennie's hair.
I think the thing is, Andrew, going back to what you were saying, the Nancy character and the Alice character, they're so different. I mean, the Nancy character is that tough as nails girl next door, pull herself up from her bootstraps and face her fears, where the Alice character becomes this mythic, almost warrior.
Well, none of them
there's so much to like about both of them.
None of them are like mopey little emo kids.
No, you're right. They're not.
My God.
Subtle little reference there. We won't go there.
We interviewed John Carl Beekler in the past.
I know, John Beekler.
Ridiculous. For everything.
And he's tough to track
He's
down,
tough
but
to
he
track
always is up for the occasion. Like he never really.
Once you get him,
Once you get him and he goes, and John's always entertaining, and he always gives a good interview. And
no matter how many times I see John Carl Beekler, I will always think of him in the Halloween party last year where he was dressed as the Cowardly Lion.
Yep.
He was so dead on.
William Butler's classic annual Halloween parties that he throws. They're kind of a legend here in Los Angeles every year. And William Butler, who was one of the kids in Friday 7, he was in Texas Chainsaw 3,
Night of the
Living Dead remake, and he's definitely had a career in horror and is directing horror now.
This bit is probably my favorite bit in the documentary here, where they're talking about how Robert talks so much in the makeup chair and gives his stories out.
Yeah,
this right
hilarious.
here is
and thank you to William Forsh for this footage.
Yeah, because it lived or died on Bill Forsh's
and
footage.
Speaking of people, we were super close to getting an interview with Screaming Mad George, because he's now, I believe, back
somewhere
in
Japan.
And but it ended up not working out. But Steve Barton was really instrumental. He had communications with him, and we were close to getting an interview and some materials. But then I believe Screaming did a job or something and was unavailable.
Crazy, but it's funny. I mean, for this little minuscule budget, if you want to call it that, we had on the show, and the such lack of resources, but we literally we shot this on like 4 continents.
Oh yeah, no, we did. I mean,
with other crews, obviously, but a lot of people just stepped up and really just wanted to help and.
I really just look back at this, and I've heard from so many of the cast members that they really look at this as the living video yearbook
of
their experience. It's like now their memories are preserved and added to by so many other people, because we've taken their memory and then we've added someone else's memory that coincides with theirs, and they kind of watch it with this big smile on their face. They never have to worry about forgetting how great their experience was. It's right there in full color.
Well, that's the thing with horror movies and the fans. It's like they're so loyal and they always seem to find a new life. So that was a very cool shot.
Really
I remember
cool.
shooting.
I totally don't remember.
I remember shooting that plate though.
No, I know. We were having fun with that one because I think we were like going.
Yeah, we were walking past that cloudy window. That was in this old air conditioning factory down in somewhere downtown. Horrible place we were in, and it was miserable, and we were choking for days after that.
No, I remember I got sick.
Yeah, you did.
I got really sick.
Then Don Crandall. We got to talk about Don Crandall for that. I mean, Mr.
Crandall.
Crazy Crandall. Mr. Crandall, who kept us all laughing in some very, very difficult days. So, and then Toy Newkirk was great to do this. I know she was tough to get. She's really busy. She's a producer in New York.
Sad that I couldn't have shot this interview.
Yeah, I just wish she'd have come out better.
Yeah.
I know she feels the same way, but it's unfortunate when you use other crews that you haven't worked with before and they don't know what you're going for. And I think the lighting here was really off with her interview. But anyway, she gave a great interview and she told some funny stories.
Oh, she was hilarious.
And I love how Rennie completely throws Bob Shea under the bus
when he's talking about how she wasn't black enough and this whole sort of race card thing. Which is, I can tell it was troublesome to her at the time. Maybe she has a little sense of humor about it now. I don't know. Maybe it still bothers her. I'm not sure. But
some of these questions that we were
kind of going
down, like a little sweating, like right before you asked this question.
Yeah.
Like, I hope they take this.
See, I guess
right
the
way.
thing is, for me, it was like, oh, let's ask this, let's ask this, because I'm not asking.
He was so backed into a corner with the question. He could do nothing but just sort of laugh his way out of it. I thought his response
sounds like Bob Shea.
Was really funny. It sounds like something like Bob Shea.
I love Toy's response. She's like, I would have said that too. I wouldn't take the heat.
Apparently, we had interviewed him, I think, and then we were prepped for her questions and said to her, "Well, this is what he said."
Uh-huh.
Now, Tommy, please answer me this because I know Rick here, Anders Jones, has this radio show called The Magic 8 Ball, and
Radio 8 Ball.
The Radio 8 Ball. Robert Englund and I appeared on it a couple weeks ago via Skype, and I have no idea what that show was about or what they were asking.
I just remember seeing your face looking huge on some screen.
Like a Japanese game show.
What is his radio?
He has a little
show?
wheel thing.
The whole idea behind Radio 8 Ball is really just asking the 8 Ball a question. What do you really want to know? Oh, is so and so my true love? And as opposed to shaking the little 8 ball and getting it is certain. He has these really great, fantastic original musical guests, like Rodney Eastman. Because he's a fantastic musician. And you ask your question, and you spin the wheel, and the song that comes up is played and sung by the musical guest, and everything is interpreted by what that artist believes the song is, meant to be, and then the person asking the question kind of reads into that, so you kind of get this kind of mystical answer. It's really
It was very
Well,
sad.
what's mystical
it
is this scene in Nightmare 4 where they completely gutted his death scene.
and Andras and I have had a conversation about this, and he's like, yeah, Rachel said that my death is the most lame in the series, and I tried to tell him that, well, there's more that he didn't see in her interview. It wasn't necessarily that his death was lame, but what she was saying was it was just lame that it came out to be the way it did, because they
had something such
the
big
elaborate
planned,
idea. And I told Andras, I was like, no, it's not that your death is lame. It's all relative.
Right.
Compared to what they wanted to do, they were not.
Yeah, they just didn't have the budget or the time to do this big elaborate, which you could see in the storyboards, which was he was in the elevator that was going to disintegrate around him, and he was falling into this abyss. And today, again, computers, they could have done that easily, but you know. Let's do the special CG version of Nightmare 4.
But now the thing is, I'm so glad that we wouldn't have to go back and CG, Brooke Feast's cockroach arms, because I love the fact that that girl really has cockroach arms.
Right, no, it's a great
her
effect.
Her face peels off.
Screaming
I
Mad
just
George.
Think it's
That's
great.
why I wish we did get to interview him, because I'd love to have talked to him about that effect.
And I love that we found that weightlifting set that was in the air.
It was sitting right there when we were shooting
these. And be like, oh, it's for Cockroach Girl.
I got to give credit to Mike Mendez, who helped us out with editing. Like that cut of Screaming Mad George laughing maniacally is my favorite cut in the entire documentary.
When she's like, I don't know why they call him Screaming Mad George.
Yeah, that was all Mendez.
Oh, it was? I didn't know he edited this piece.
I'm gonna go ahead and point out that one of Dan's favorite moments is coming up with Miss Thies describing her trials and tribulations of
5 hours. She sounds like the quintessential Valley girl to me. And I love her. She's great. She's hilarious. She's super nice.
From sitting in the
but she's definitely the 80s. This is the 80s Valley girl grown up.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Well, from sitting in the editing room and the color correct coloring this and whatnot, you kind of start to watch these clips on repeat.
Right.
30
Here
times,
it is. I'm sorry. Here it is.
She goes, for 5 hours.
It becomes ingrained in your head.
It
literally does.
The thing is, you repeat these scenes, and then you just end up with your favorite lines from the whole show.
Totally.
And we have a few of them. That's one of them.
Won't do it. Can't do it.
Can't do it. Don't have a penis.
Arms are flipping and flopping.
Yeah. It just looked ridiculous.
I just like how Rennie Harlan says the word movie, like in the movie.
In the movie. It's very kind of Arnold-ish sort of. That had to have been miserable at the time.
Oh, that would have been so nasty.
I don't know. I remember her saying, though, she loved it. She was like, I'm getting paid.
Yeah, but she's sort of like a sport.
And...
She's one of those people. I think she's a total sport. Nasty. But
Beekler's interview was hysterical. I mean, Beekler's always
he's always funny. I always just, it's always one of those things when we did Friday the 13th Part 7 and having to go to him with the news that Paramount had tossed all of the
that was awful.
Cut footage, and he was really upset.
Yeah.
So, but at least he was nice enough to do this for us still. They didn't cut all his work out of Nightmare 4.
That was a really hard day when because we were searching for months for that footage, and then we find that memo. It was all incinerated two decades ago.
Yeah,
and we're like,
yeah, it was a tough
By
one.
the way, if I may point out, he has one of my favorite looking interviews as well.
Yeah, you made all the cinematographers look really, really good.
Yeah, wonder what that's all about.
I remember the first cut of Part 4. This whole movie theater effect went on really, really, really long.
Yeah.
I remember an email. I think you had sent it. You're like, no one's gonna get this. It's so complicated. We gotta whittle it down. And I think what it was boiled down to is perfect because it explains the effect.
You get it.
It's a great effect.
Honestly,
cool effect.
The whole gay subtext discussion of Nightmare 2 was like originally like 30 or 45 minutes.
It was.
In our first cut.
addition to the actual.
We should talk about the early cuts of the show. I think the first beginning to end cut of the show was probably 6 hours long.
It was. We sat the whole crew down.
Maybe longer.
Yeah, we sat the whole crew down, and it took all day to get through it, just to get notes about what should stay and what should go. And by the end of the day, we were all so beat up and worn out.
It wasn't being colored or green. The key,
it was all just raw.
So it wasn't
hard to
visually
watch.
stimulating. You were just kind of listening to.
I remember we augmented the diner thing because I was like, let's put a little more of Lisa in here because we had the great behind the scenes photos of her in that makeup.
In the makeup,
and she talked about
it was tough with Lisa, trying to get the best bits of her, and it's
because again with Nightmare 4,
sometimes people just don't say it the way you want it said when you're in the editing room. Like if they had just said it this way, or if we'd asked the question another way, we would have gotten what we wanted. But you don't learn that until You're
and
sitting there
also
with it.
you have to have someone to either set it up or finish the thought, and if no one's doing
and sometimes
that,
you didn't
it ends
have
up becoming one person over and over again.
And it's hard when you're dealing with this many interviews and this many questions. You don't always get that overlap that you want. But I think we got really lucky, and we had a really good editor. So
thank you. But
like one thing I remember. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Well, a lot of it too was Dan and I would, after 50, 60 interviews, we knew exactly what we were going for. So we would literally sometimes put words in people's mouth, like, "No, say it like this," so it can cut with what we're doing.
There were moments where I would tell the interviewee, like, we need somebody to say this or to cover that. So but I mean, it's not like coaching them. We just had to have them say it in a way that would work well in the editing room. It's one of those things that just it's really you have to really know what you want going in. And you don't know, and that you can't predict. That's the thing is when you can't say, "Oh, I'm going to schedule a 20-minute interview for something like this."
Remember we tried, we were like, let's do 15, 20-minute interviews.
Some of them you knew you could.
40, 30-minute. I don't think.
But some of them you could. Some of them we really held to that schedule. Like there were a few people that we could get in and out pretty quickly.
Yeah. But then there were some that were supposed to be 20 minutes and they were an hour because they just don't.
It's really hard to predict how it's going to go sometimes.
Talk about getting
but you have to schedule it too. You have to, like a movie, you only have so much time.
This ending of Nightmare 4, which I never got, talk about going really, really, really deep into the meaning of it all.
I know.
I was like, I never would have thought that or put that together.
Right, with what was it,
this big holy image of like...
What was the statue that they modeled it after?
Passion of Saint Teresa and God filling her with ecstatic grace, and that's why she could get, like...
If the script had been that deep, like if we'd gotten that from the movie,
I must have some kind of like deep buried subtextual nostalgia because I love the end of Nightmare 4. They literally tear Freddy apart.
No.
Oh no, it's a great effect.
No, but I think what they're talking about, there's the Steven Spielberg, the cinematographer, talks about the symbolism of all of this, and then how it's rooted in religion.
But for me, I got that when I saw it because I was growing up Roman Catholic and going to church like 5 days a week.
I'm the son of a priest. It went over my head.
I don't know. I like the kids in the balcony. I'm like, oh my god, this is just like Jesus.
If I could tell this story really quick, right
moment of silence
for Michiko.
For Michiko, who we absolutely love wherever she is.
There she goes. But let's see it again in slow motion.
Oh no!
There was literally we were literally just like
no. It was about, I think we were on one of those days where we hadn't slept in like 2 days or something.
Maybe 2 weeks.
Dan was probably on 3 or 4 days of no sleep, and he's sitting in the editing bay, and I just hear Andrew and him cackling, but mainly it's just Dan. And I walk into the room, and Dan is sitting on the couch with tears in his eyes, and I'm like, oh no, something exploded. But then Andrew kind of turns around and starts laughing too, and I'm like, "What's so funny?" And then Dan's like, "Little Michiko!" and they start playing the clip for me.
It had to be there.
We're all laughing at poor little Michiko's suffering.
Her suffering, and
she really took a dive.
She took a dive, but it's like I think it was just the whole idea of hearing this, like.
But if you listen to Howard, is it in the extended?
No, it's not in the extended interviews. Nobody said it in interviews, but Bill Forsh told us the story that.
No, it was Howard.
Howard
was the one.
Yeah, well, Bill Forsh backed this up, but apparently when she fell from the rafter, according to everybody, she rolled like a ninja and was like unharmed, like completely. Yeah, like
she did this
big weird dive.
I'm gonna laugh again and stop. I don't want to laugh at this poor woman's misery. No, but that was one of the funniest things.
She came
it's one of those things you can't help when you see somebody walking down the street and they stumble. I mean, it's just funny.
yeah, you can't help it.
If it happened to you, it's embarrassing.
Hey, it's not you.
As long as it's not you.
It's always funny, but it's you.
Yes.
I remember looking back at Wes in this part 4 section, Dan and I, how we scoured for Rennie Harlan told the story about how he had heard from Wes that Wes enjoyed the film and everything like that. And we finally came to the conclusion that the camera wasn't running when he told that story. Do you remember we looked for it and it wasn't in any transcript because he told us the story, but we was on a break.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it was just on a break.
Well, I guess if you had heard it, then
I was in the room. That's why I know it was on a break.
Have been a break. Yeah, because you weren't. Usually,
I wasn't in the room most of the time.
So there's always those, things that you wished you'd gotten on camera. There were a few people we asked them to come sit down.
Yeah, we were walking them out of the studio, and they would be telling us these crazy things. We were like, "No, you're getting back in the chair right now."
Don Hanna was one of them.
Don Hanna, but no, the better one was Robert Russler. I think
Russler and Jesu Garcia.
And Jesu Garcia, both of them, who always reminded me of the same guy. Like, it seemed like in both, they were playing the same character.
Well, they had that
sidekicks
tan, the
sorta.
good-looking, dark
Yeah,
hair,
I don't know.
bad boy-ish.
Yeah.
I like Grady.
Grady was hilarious. But Robert Russell was just
He's so
great.
funny. And he's still, like, when we did the
Just
signing...
a totally
he was so
approachable
great.
guy
Yeah.
who's done a lot in his career and just one of those people who's just such an average, cool guy.
Yeah.
Who was just talking about how Rennie became a star here kind of overnight after this movie.
No, he
You know,
This
he's
is-
directing Die Hard 2, then, you know, the next
most
year.
Well, and then this
amazing
movie,
rags to riches stories
Such
ever.
and this is
Oh
the
my God.
find
Bollywood.
of the
Bollywood.
century.
Oh my god! I watched this film just all the way
Did you
through
watch
for
the whole
research.
thing? I
Yeah,
didn't.
It's 2 hours and 45 minutes,
God.
and
That's like-
half of it is really bad musical numbers, but they steal from every movie in the franchise up until that point.
We should get to start referencing some of these clips like Dragnet of like these little jokes and all these things. Some of these are like fake.
You know, even recently on 30 Rock had an episode where they bring up Freddy.
Did
Yeah.
they?
Yeah.
We could have. I mean, this section could
I
have.
love
gone
that
on
Ronald
forever.
Reagan
Oh, I
is
know.
talking about Nightmare on Elm Street.
President
I
of the
mean,
United States.
I mean, if it got to
referencing
that
the movie.
level, you knew
Yeah.
it was a pop culture phenomenon.
No, it was huge.
But I love how everybody. That was one of our main goals in the doc was to address how really bizarre this whole pop culture fascination.
Well, the whole thing with the
was.
fact that he was a child molester,
And that-
he's being marketed to kids, and I love Bob Shaye's reaction, the Freddy doll.
the Freddy Fright Squirter is
That's my
probably one of the
nephew,
most-
my nephew Michael, who always
Yeah.
makes a cameo in these shows.
There's some really phallic, disturbing Freddy Krueger toys. It's
Yeah.
just,
But this is one fan's home.
God.
I mean, people
Yeah.
live amongst their Freddy collections, and
Barton's commentary, not his commentary, but when he would send us the clips and everything, the notes he'd write on those things.
well, we don't. Barton did what? People don't know that.
Steve,
well,
Uncle Creepy from
Uncle
Dread
Creepy,
Central was reviewing all the fan submissions because
Yeah.
we put out an open call to the fans, and Barton would just put really funny notes behind,
Yeah.
next to each of their
He
collections.
sent
which-
them to us. Yeah,
hilarious.
Oh my god, he must have watched
the
so
Freddy
many.
Valium.
The Freddy
this was
Valium.
the weirdest fucking thing. I think
Andrew
I've
was
ever
obsessed
heard.
with this.
It's so bizarre. Freddy Valium. That is overboard. That is without a doubt.
It's I don't know. It seems like natural marketing to me, right?
The pajamas, I think, are still the
The
weirdest,
pajamas are the
creepiest,
weirdest thing ever.
bizarre thing. I mean, literally, it's a child killer. You're dressing
Yeah,
your
it's
child
just
up
so-
as a
and this was
murderer.
like all these the Freddy's greatest hits. Oh my god, do the Freddy. That song stuck in my head
forever.
for days upon days
Don't
upon
even
days.
mention
And the
Bad
Fat
Boys,
Boys video.
who, by the way, we almost got.
We
as
almost
well.
got to, and
They
then
were in Florida at the time, and again, it's a lot of scheduling. I mean, people don't realize that. We had 10 interview days.
Mhm.
And,
the one video we didn't really highlight was the Will Smith.
Yeah.
DJ Jazzy Jeff.
Yeah,
Just
that
because
one.
it's so rare, it's hard
It
to
is
find
rare.
a decent version.
we
of
almost
it,
got the
and-
Fresh Prince as well.
Yeah.
Scheduling precluded us from
Really,
that.
we were close.
This is one of my favorite
Yeah.
I had
animations
no idea we
right
were that
here.
close.
This is such a cool
That would have been
animation.
amazing how we got the Fresh Prince. In
And I'm just glad that we got a chance to cover the television
Oh my god!
series.
I
This
got,
was the
Or
first
did I
one we
say
finished.
Fresh Prince? I meant DJ Jazzy. Which one is who's
Jazzy
who?
Jeff.
Which
Will
one?
Smith is Fresh
Okay,
Prince.
no, we
did
DJ
not-
Jazzy Jeff is.
Correction, we
DJ.
did not almost get Will Smith.
I was gonna say like
We got
really?
the other one. Almost the other one.
I knew that we had gone really into the deep end when, for about a week, I sat down and I literally watched every single one of the Freddy's Nightmares, like a marathon
Yeah,
for a
I'm
week
sorry.
of both seasons, like all 100 episodes.
I'm really sorry about that, Andrew.
Oh.
No, my brain turned to fucking jelly. It's
They're the strangest.
it is the strangest, most
television show
bizarre.
ever made.
It's like you watch more than 5 of those in a row. It's like being
Yeah.
stuck in a David Lynch nightmare.
Yeah,
mean,
I also think the Lori Petty decapitation, and then Justin threw in these little funny sound effects. Plop.
I have to say, Mick Garris, I think, was so important to the TV
Right.
section of
Oh,
this
yeah.
documentary.
He really kind of
He
carries
really
this whole
had
piece.
so much great stuff to say about the show, the state of television,
Yep.
why the show was made, why it worked, why it didn't. I mean, it was
Right.
really great of him to
Yeah.
bring all that stuff up.
Mick's great, and Mick is his whole background is making shows like this. He
Yeah.
started his career doing these things for Universal and
Mhm.
these little like behind the scenes reels.
I mean, he worked on he worked on Freddy's Nightmares. He worked on Amazing Stories.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
talk
huge.
about
but,
two
but
totally
my
different.
point with Mick though is that he knows how to give a great interview.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like he knows when to start, he knows when to
Yeah.
stop, he knows when you're going to ask. I mean, it was so crazy to me. Like,
Well,
He's
now
a
he's
pro.
doing an
He's a
interview
total
show,
pro.
you know?
Yeah, he's got his own interview show
yeah.
now.
He's
and
fantastic.
Bill Malone is
I'm-
really cool too. And he came in with that hilarious VHS tape of Robert singing "Happy Birthday"
Oh,
to his
yeah.
daughter
Yeah,
when
which
she was
is
15,
best,
which is
yeah.
like so cool that that's what another cool aspect of the show is that people bringing in stuff from their personal collections like that happy birthday video. I think just it's priceless stuff that
And I mean, this thing.
I mean, that is
so
truly
many,
never before seen.
never before seen that I know of.
And this launched so many careers that it even goes into the television series. Even the TV show launched some major careers.
It did.
Brad Pitt, being in
Mariska
it.
Hargitay was in it. Tons of people were in that show. But yeah, the show was it just was a really weird show. I think they never really knew what it was going to be or what it was going to be about. But it was.
It's that weird like.
I'm sorry. It's Bob Shea being like, I stopped paying attention.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was a really, really bad show, but bad in a surreal way, which is the most bizarre combination of mental bombardment that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah. Well, it was fun though, just being able to have even though this is a short segment of the documentary. Again, being the completists that we are.
Yeah.
We just felt like, it's not. I mean, you can't pretend that one of these things didn't happen. You can't leave one of the movies out. You can't pretend there wasn't a show that was spun off from this. I mean, this is all part of what the Nightmare on Elm Street phenomenon was about. So we had to spend some time. I wish we'd gotten a little bit of Tobe Hooper in here talking about it. I think we did try to reach out to him.
But it didn't work.
But it's okay. I mean, he did this. I think the pilot was kind of supposed to be the launching pad for the rest of the show tonally, and I think everything kind of spun into really weird directions after the pilot.
Yeah, and just because something is very insignificant in the grand scheme of things, there's not a big part of that universe. You never want to gloss over it just for that fact. If it's a complete clusterfuck, at least go into why it was a clusterfuck. Right.
And then this like the Friday the 13th, the television series, which was its competitor at the time. They were kind of vying for the same time slots, but both of these shows were killed by kind of the religious right who really didn't understand them, and especially in the case of Friday the 13th, which was a story about good and evil. And this is hilarious.
You describe that creative.
This is tell about this clip.
That was Scow gave us that tape of
David Scow,
David J. Scow, who wrote that episode, and he had a bunch of dailies, and it was just dailies,
weirdness.
Just raw dailies, and I just edited them together in the weirdest, most sexually suggestive, creepy way that I could.
Well, the fact that he's riding the naked teenage boy, I mean, that's something I haven't seen in Freddy before. That looked like it belonged in part 2.
Right? It was originally just that clip of the riding on the guy, but then you found a clip later in the episode or before that.
I think he's getting a blowjob from somebody. It was supposed to be a different clip.
Yeah,
I just cut those together.
It worked so perfectly.
That's hilarious. But I mean, it's true. I mean, like the parental groups really got on this show's case because the show started, even though it was intended for like these really late time slots. I think it ended up being shown. I remember it on at like 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday.
Oh yeah, no. Some places were showing it at like after the 5 o'clock news.
Right.
You know, it was accessible to everyone.
It was
who had
all
a television.
over, and it was just
I remember the random TV,
but it wasn't scary. It was just, I mean, you see worse stuff like that on CSI today, and it's just ridiculous how people got. Just times have really changed.
Well, look at the original Nightmare on Elm Street and Satan's Death
Sorry.
versus
that is so ridiculous.
something in Hostel.
Right.
I mean, Hostel is an R. I mean, that makes Nightmare on Elm Street look PG-13.
Right. I mean, it's the things have really moved in a different direction now, as far as what you see on television. But I guess it's more palatable if it's on network and you have a big star like a David Caruso or whoever is in these shows, legitimizes them.
It's a double standard, really, that continues through television and the MPAA.
Love this transition, by the way, Andrew. That was a great transition between the Laughing Crypt Keeper and Laughing Freddy.
And now we go into the Dream Child.
It's a boy.
This is actually probably one of my favorite segments.
Well,
Justin did that hilarious sound design over that animation. He had some great material to work with, but he did some really funny stuff.
People say that generally the movies that they like the least are their favorite sections of the documentary, because that's when people really don't hold back. Our interviewees and whatnot about what went wrong. Because if you're watching a documentary where everybody's talking about how harmonious everything is and how much everybody loved each other and it was exactly what we wanted to make. It's, you take away the drama and the investment.
Well, it just becomes another kind of
it almost becomes like a
piece, bonus feature on a
piece.
DVD. That's not the show we wanted to make. Cool Martyr, I was really obsessed with finding her. Not because she was a huge part of this, but because her name was Cool Lusby. And she was the associate producer of the original Halloween. And I always wanted to know whose name is Cool.
I'm glad
and she explained to us why her name was Cool, and it was some sort of nickname she was given as a kid. So
I'm glad we got her, because I think she really helped bridge that Part 5 gap of
I agree.
What went wrong and why it went wrong, and that kind of thing, as
Yep.
opposed to just, well, we know something went wrong, but
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
This
No,
was-
everybody ended up with a really interesting. Everybody had something interesting to say, whether that they were behind the scenes, in front of the camera. That everybody brought something different to the table.
Part 5 was really what I was really interested in exploring, more than any of them, I think, aside from part 2, just because I was always curious what went on with the whole splatterpunk authors that came in, because it was sort of a who's who if you read the, who's credited on the script writing and whatnot. The splatterpunk, I'm completely obsessed with that era of writing, because I still think it's probably one of the best eras that horror has ever had, and the authors like Scow and Skip were just huge trailblazers and wrote some really, really killer work. And it was just so bizarre to see all their names on one project, but there was never you never had any story of what went down with all those guys and why they were all brought in. And actually, one of the biggest treats was I got to read the Skip and Spectre draft of Nightmare 5, which was really, really good. I still don't know why they didn't go down that route, because they almost did the Harry Potter thing of maturing it, with the audience, and they had some really killer, twisted set pieces in it that I think were a little much even for New Line standards, and it could have been on par with 3 had they developed that script, but as you see, things went really off the rails pretty quickly.
This movie, I think, was just a lot of cooks in the kitchen and never really having a solid idea what the movie was supposed to be. But that being said, it's interesting when you hear all these people talk about it, that they all came in with the right amount of passion, and I think everybody set out to make something good and watchable and along the lines of what, and trying to continue what the last movie had done and set down before.
And what we learned was it was rushed.
Right.
They didn't have a finished script. It came off the heels of part 4 so quickly. I think it was get another one in theaters. Let's capitalize.
Right.
And it suffered. And Sarah Risher particularly talks about that. Was one of the big problems. It's
right.
The quickness.
This was, I think, 5
suffered.
really became Sarah's movie. It kind of was her statement about motherhood, and as she talked about, and I loved how she said that her child could very well have been the Omen, Rosemary's Baby. I'm like, God, that must have been a terrible baby. Anyway, but this is great stuff. This is all like Stephen Hopkins' original artwork and storyboards, and
of course, all Buzz and I really cared about was Predator 2.
Yeah.
Can we just ask him?
Really bummed we never got to actually physically. We didn't get to interview him because that was done over in UK by
Steph Hutchinson. Yeah,
which
they did a great job. And in fact, I think it was the
absolutely.
best sounding interview that we got back. I think wherever they shot this at a green stage somewhere in London.
No, they did a great
They
job.
did a really good job. Cool Martyr's interview looks really good too. That weird wall that we found in the hospital.
That one's
it's upside down.
Yeah,
I remember that.
It's also girl on bus number 2 from part 2's
Joanne
background plate.
Yep.
You'll notice throughout the entire documentary, I had to repurpose a lot of plates because I basically ran out of time to shoot more plates, and we were.
But I think it's a
frantically trying
good
to fill
mix
it in.
of you don't really feel like everything's repetitive. Everybody has their own environment, their own look, and I think that's what's cool about this show. It's like, and that was the thing that freed us up with the green screen is it gave us a lot of choices.
No, totally. Yeah, we got to do a lot more different stuff with the way we wanted.
We didn't lock ourselves into one look, and
No.
But
But yeah, I was bummed that we didn't
But
get to personally interview Stephen Hopkins because I would like to have picked his brain on Predator 2.
We're big Predator 2 fans. It's so underrated.
and there's the motorcycle.
I love that. That background is my favorite. It just looks. It just has a plate and a shot alone. No interview, in it. It just looks cool.
And again, these script pages, continuing that idea of introducing the main cast with those, and Kelly
There's
Jo.
that's your pool.
That's my pool, yeah.
We actually shut down half a circuit board
Yep.
trying to shoot
We
that.
did.
Almost
We did.
blew out the power of the
Absolutely.
entire complex.
Exactly.
Mark was also Joe Seeley was also
Seeley.
a nice find.
Mhm.
Yeah.
He had kind of disappeared from the Elm Street universe, and finding him was great because this is another where we have the main cast.
Yep.
Which is, I think, important to tell this story because, again, part 5, a little light on anecdotes, and other than it was rushed in a really problematic shoot, it's nice to hear from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The wardrobe in part 5 is so
Yeah, I
weird.
don't know
Yeah.
what the character of Mark is wearing and why, because I don't.
Did we try to get to the costumer? No.
I don't know.
I don't remember 1989 being what he looked like.
Particularly,
But
yeah.
someone did, so.
It didn't make the final cut, but I really wanted to know what the hell was up with Joe Seeley's ADR. I think he's got the worst sounding ADR in movie history.
Yeah.
And
I love it. It's
so
like
awkward.
Erica Anderson, who's like totally cool, and she's
great.
beautiful and all of that. But she was really like a sport about it all.
Mhm.
And, like,
No, totally.
and I mean, anybody who would have done a death scene like that has to be. And she was very nice. And she came to the signing when we did the release of the DVD in May. And we had a huge signing at Dark Delicacies bookstore in Burbank, who have moved now and have a great new location. But we were one of their last big signings before they moved to the new store. But we had, how many people came to that signing? At least 50?
Oh, yeah, I think 50 to 60 or something like that. I remember I asked Sarah Risher, and she's like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, Sarah, you need to come. She's like, really? I was like, trust me, you need to come to this. Fans will love seeing you and meeting you. And she had a great time, and I thought that was really nice and special that we could kind of show her all the love that fans truly have for this franchise, which is, decades old now.
Yeah. I think some people forget, and they've moved on to different careers or different lives, and I think sometimes, especially if they weren't in front of the camera at the time, I don't think they ever got a taste of how much the fans love these movies.
Yeah. I love
that's a great looking scene, by the way.
All the sets in Nightmare 5, I mean, say what you will about the movie, but the it's like
beautiful,
this awesome gothic hammer orgasm.
It's production design.
I've often wondered how Weston Hills transformed from an exterior at UCLA to this enormous castle. Like, it's just like you were saying in Halloween, the house, a 2-story house turns into a gothic mansion.
Right. Only in the movies. But Stephen Hopkins was cool. I think he has a good sense of humor about the movie, and he knows what it was and what it wasn't. But I think, again, like all the directors, I think he came in with a vision and trying to do a job and make it work. And, it's just sometimes the results aren't what you'd hoped for. And I think, there's some people, I felt like there were some of the writers who were involved in this that were really bitter about the outcome.
Well, I think they have every reason to be, seeing what it could have been and where it wound up. To be honest, it's very.
But you know what? The one thing is, we'll never know what it could have been because just because it read on the page doesn't mean it would have worked.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
who knows?
You never know.
What goes from the page to the stage is not always the same thing. I mean, it'd be interesting to see, but I don't. I mean, it's like after all these years, I think you just have to kind of let it go.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah,
for
thank
that.
you for that.
Improv.
But I think this is, some of the, like that stuff, like these photos and stuff that we got, I thought were really cool. Like, who gave us those? Was that David Miller gave us some of those
that
photos?
was David Miller. I mean, David Miller came in with a treasure trove of photos. I remember when he showed us the very first photo of Robert Englund and Freddie makeup, and he's like, this has never been seen.
Wow.
I mean, it was great stuff, that we had access to. I mean, that was...
And I'm sure his photo is the authentic first Freddy photo, because there were other people who would come in and say, this is the first.
Yeah, no, his truly
was. It has to be David, because he created the makeup.
He took it after the application was done, and he then carted Robert out to have everyone look. Another great find, Beatrice.
Yeah, but okay, I'm going to go on record with this story. I'm going to tell it. I'm going to tell the story, because it just makes me vomit.
But I still kind of wish it was in there.
Okay, well, I'm outvoted. You guys all wanted it in. It just made me sick. She told the story of how when they shot Freddy's birth, she was on her cycle, and she wasn't sure if it was the fake blood or her own blood coming out of her.
I wanted that in so bad,
and it really, like, every time I heard it, it just made me so, like, wanting to vomit.
I could see Dan on the edge of the couch going.
I'm sure that Beatrice
upchucking
was more than happy it did not make it in, and I'm sure she's probably equally as not happy that we're
talking about it.
It's on disc 2 already. It's too late.
Is it on disc 2?
It's on disc 2.
Oh, it is, okay.
But there's Whit Herford, who's also known as the little kid at the beginning of Jurassic Park.
It's funny, I didn't geek out over anybody coming in for us to interview.
Except for
Whit.
This
was the one interview. When he walked in, I literally walked right up to him with my Jurassic Park DVD in hand. I was like, Spielberg? What was it like? Sign? Thing?
Oh my gosh.
That's hilarious.
He
was so
He
cool.
but he was like, oh, you like Jurassic Park 2? I love it.
I just remember not really having time to really feel like I could geek out, because my whole thing was, okay, you know what? We need to get them in the chair right now.
Yeah.
And someone else is not walking down the hall.
Tommy runs a tight ship, let me tell you.
Get him in the chair. Someone's coming. I don't want them to run into each other.
He was the first of that day, though, and I remember. Yeah. But that was the only one I was like, I have to geek out on this one. And now I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he talks to me all the time about this documentary and stuff.
Great stuff. I mean, it was just nice to be able to make these kind of personal connections with these people. Andrew's got a relationship with Scow and Skip and like all these great guys, and and it's
kind of cool. Like
it's nice to be able to kind of connect on different levels and
everybody you sort of grew up loving, and the reasons why you got into this business in a lot of ways to form friendships and talk about other projects and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really cool experience. So
yeah, it's been really nice, and everybody's been very vocal about, as Tommy was saying, their appreciation for having kind of a living record of the series and their work on it. I think probably some people thought, God, who would ever do something like this? I remember Wes Craven when we had these posters that everyone kind of signed and created some great little keepsakes for the crew. Mm-hmm. And a couple lucky fans who won them on our website.
Yeah.
But as Wes was signing his posters, he was just sort of like, I think, mystified as to how we were doing this, why we were doing this. And it was just, I think when he heard that we were doing it purely out of passion, because there was certainly no money involved, I think he was kind of impressed by that. I got a sense from Wes he was very touched by the whole thing, and he seemed really appreciative that day of it.
Yeah,
and he really gave us a lot of time.
I think, he did. And I think it kind of, you have to really stand back and look at the big picture. I mean, some of these people were only involved in one movie, so to them, it's like, well, why bother?
Right.
But you have to look at the big picture that this is not just one movie. It was a franchise that did, in effect, become a phenomenon, and we got all these fantastic people to talk about it. So it's different than just, oh, well, I had my part and I got killed first, and why would you care? Well, it's not just about that. It's about 8 movies, 25 years, that kind of thing. And I think I just look at it and I just love the fact that we got all these people, out of the woodwork to talk about their Elm Street memories.
I do love the motorcycle scene. That's the one thing in part 5. It's like,
but that was
cool.
A killer to edit. That one I thought nearly drove us to our early grave.
Yeah, that was the hardest section in the entire
this
documentary.
This whole piece right here was just a nightmare, and it looks so like, well, why was that so difficult? But if you had seen this in its infancy, it's the amount of work that went into getting this sequence to play this way. And I'm not saying it works, it's beautiful or brilliant or anything, but I think it plays pretty well.
You got to be careful with, because it was so tough. Much. It was like information overload, and what do you include, what do you not include, and it was just, it was. And
then I had wanted this split screen idea, and that was tough to figure out how to do it, make it work, make it fit in here, and it's just, it was always like we'd get 2 steps ahead, and then we'd 3 steps backwards again, and it was like. That was the most frustrating of all of it for me, I think, working on that motorcycle scene from 5. I'm glad we did it, because it was
you guys were really nervous about 5, I remember.
Well, it felt very thin and not as interesting as the other segments to me. But I think now...
when I watched it, I remember walking in and being like, part 5 is awesome, guys. Even without saying it was...
It's hard, when you're so deep... I mean, Tommy, you're a writer, too, so when you get so invested in, like, tunnel vision on something, you don't see the forest from the trees.
No,
you don't know
really
what you have.
know what you want, and when you don't get it, you just continue to focus on it's not there, even though someone coming in completely blind,
right.
hello, Erica.
I know, I love the chipmunk
is going to say it's great, but it might not be what you want,
right.
and it can be greater.
Mm-hmm. But it was like we were always pushing each other a little harder, a little more into like, let's try it this way, let's try it. With as limited time as we had, we were still kind of pushing every little element, and it was literally like, I remember just night after night after night at being at Andrews and just literally combing through line by line through all the transcripts to find those best lines, the best lines that we could. Here, find a place for this, find a place for that, and just finding those. I mean,
sometimes it came down to scouring for one line. You think you heard that is going to make it all work.
Yep. And sometimes I'd email you, and you'd be searching for hours to find something. You'd find it, and we'd put it in, but. It was really just it was like taking the world's biggest puzzle and throwing all the pieces up.
Not knowing how it's going to
land. But I mean, luckily we had a structure. We had, we knew how the story was going to flow. It was just finding those pieces and finding ways to make them connect. It was tough.
And I'm glad that, we did talk to some of the people and we did ask the questions, Kelly Jo talking about her food poisoning. And I don't think anyone is going to look at that scene and go, wow, she looks like she was really sick. Like she had food poisoning.
Right.
But
it makes you look at the movies in a different light. Yeah. And I'm glad to hear, so many fans and even some of the reviews and people, we've done some podcasts about this and just always across the board, I keep hearing, this documentary made me want to go back and rent the other movies or buy the box set. And so, You're welcome, Warner Brothers.
I love the stop motion stuff that they did throughout the series. It's just something I miss so much in film today.
Yeah, that stuff was great. Doug Beswick. I mean, such a awesome.
I mean, God worked on Star Wars.
Yeah, he worked on
you
Star
know.
Wars. That's right. But and who also was really generous with us as far as digging up old sketches and all his concept drawings for this movie and in part 3 as well. I think he gave us some materials. He also obviously Doug also did the Jason and the Argonauts sort of nod and
this
part
is
3.
one thing I wish we had a little bit more time to nail, because the original script where they had the art loft of horror sequence was so vivid and so awesome, and I would have killed to see that, where it was this big mixed media thing with claymation, metal statues and clay and different paintings coming to life, and Freddy attacking this girl this way. I wish we could. That was the one thing I wish we had a little bit more time to depict in
that
comic
all sounds
form.
a lot cooler than the Aha video we got.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
But I mean, but that being said, I mean, the way that they had to construct the scene and literally creating
very cool story.
they created a set in black and white.
yeah.
I mean,
Nobody's knocking it technically, but just generally, it is a very even by Hopkins' own admission, it's incredibly preposterous and stupid.
In the homage to the black and white scene, I made Michael Bailey Smith's background all black and white, and that worked.
Yeah, that was awesome. Great.
No, we had worked,
and I
with
love the little sound effect he put in with the gun. But that looks so cool. I mean, you got a black and white. But look how perfect example of how easy that is to do today.
Yep.
And back then, they had to literally paint that set to look like that.
Yep.
So
the Michael Bailey Smith, we go pretty way back with that guy.
4 or 5 years.
A good 5 or 6 years. I've worked with him on a number of projects and whatnot, and he starred in a
Look
film
at that outfit. I'm sorry.
wow.
That's why Freddy killed him. Said, what were you thinking when you got up in the morning?
That's still a
fashion police.
But that's a cool effect with the one-dimensional piece of paper that gets sort of. I still think that kind of holds up. No computers involved.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
I
think
love Michael's whole.
Michael's hilarious.
He's so funny, and that was me.
Super Freddy.
Super Freddy.
He got a lot of props in the reviews too. Everyone's like, they even got Super Freddy.
Right. Yeah,
and this was his first gig. He'd just come to LA. He'd fallen into this by accident.
Right, like he was a bodybuilder coming up to LA with a friend of his.
And what we didn't have time to discuss was that he went on to be associated with Wes Craven a couple of times. He played the lead villain in both Hills Have Eyes, the remake and the remake sequel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. A lot of people, and then who else worked with Wes? I think it was Kelly Jo.
It was Kelly Jo.
Yeah.
She was in
People Under the Stairs. So yeah, it's weird. It's just,
we could have
the horror community is small. I should say first, Hollywood community is small. Horror community much smaller.
Oh, horror, yeah.
And then you get into all this because everybody ends up working together somehow on a project.
I mean, you can
later.
at least connect everyone in 1 degree or 2.
You got to make friends early.
And beware enemies.
Try not to make we know about those.
Oh yeah.
Something I always think about when I watch this is a question that I should have written down was they essentially killed Freddy the same way they did in part 4, where the souls come out of him again.
Yeah.
And it didn't dawn on me until after I watched everything that I should have had you guys talk to Stephen Hopkins and the producers about, you kind of just aped part 4 in a really small way.
Right.
Well, they had, by their own admission, they were just, making it up as they went along at some point, and they had no ending to the movie, so they just kind of just did some visual stuff.
I'm just curious, because Andrew, you read some of the other writers' drafts. What were the other endings, if you remember?
The original ending for the Skip Inspector draft was there was this whole concept called the Dream Pool, and Alice was going into sort of it was sort of like the subconsciousness of the universe, and she was going into Freddy's dreams, and it sort of picked up with the backstory of part 3 a little bit, where she was getting flashes of Freddy Krueger growing up in the nunnery, because he was raised by these nuns who were looking at him, of course, being the bastard son of 100 maniacs. Freddy, who wasn't quite so evil off the bat, the nuns would lock him up, and they would be like,
just blame it on the nuns, of course.
Yeah.
So how silent night, deadly night.
Yeah, exactly. So it ended with this whole thing of her going into his dreams and destroying him that way.
Right. That's cool.
I barf on him.
I barf on him.
That was the creepiest room.
That scared me. That room freaked me out.
When we shot that play. But
it was also like the most miserable day. It was pouring rain. This is the most decrepit, awful place. But then we walk by, and there's like smoke coming out of this room, and it's supposedly a haunted location.
Yeah,
you know?
and
like,
that teddy bear was just
that teddy bear is just sitting on a mattress.
Oh, it was so creepy.
It freaked me. Well, it's used for a lot of movie locations, but yeah, it's definitely got a reputation.
That room and the other room that had all
scared the crap out of
it.
Yeah, the graffiti.
Catch
and let's talk about the morgue.
Oh yeah, that morgue was creepy. There was a lot of really horrific.
We went through a lot of not so pleasant places to make this show look this way.
Yeah, but, a lot of them end up looking really.
And you can, that's the thing. You can buy background plates that move and stuff, but I don't think anything quite had the quality we were looking for. I mean, we looked through those libraries of things for stuff. It just there were some good ones, but I think the stuff we got was just so specific to this.
That was literally just a room that we had a fog machine.
Yeah. I remember.
Made it look
everything was like done for $1.25.
Yeah. Though that fog machine that we have, oh my god, the little Halloween fog machine we pushed to.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like a little $30 fog machine that you buy at a novelty shop.
Dreamchild got beaten by Uncle Buck.
Oh, did
I just noticed
Listen,
that.
Uncle Buck is a great movie.
Uncle Buck is a great movie.
I do love Uncle Buck.
Don't bag on Uncle Buck. Yeah.
Hey,
when he's not around to defend himself.
You know what a hatchet is, Bug?
But yeah, this was just wasn't the, I think this was where you saw the series really start to go into decline. I mean, 4 had hit that sort of zenith, and
yeah.
But what's great is that everybody involved with this acknowledges what this was. Nobody was like, well, shut up, man, it was good. That's the one thing.
Yeah, nobody was trying to convince you that it was the best one. Mm-hmm. I mean, Erica's talking about how I wish it could have been a little scarier. It should have been a little bit more true to the origins of the story.
I love that we got so many of the newspaper articles for all the movies. It was really cool.
Well, Rudy Scalise, who I have to say who's a friend of mine, and I think one of the biggest horror fans out there. He produced another horror documentary called Going to Pieces. Mm-hmm. But Rudy has this amazing collection that from the time he was a kid, I don't know what gave him the foresight to create literally scrapbooks of all the newspaper ads of every horror movie that came out through his entire childhood, probably through his mid-20s. So he just kind of gave us access to his amazing collection. So that's how we were able to get some of this old stuff. So,
and there we have the Dreamchild. That's done.
Dreamchild.
I love that it's a map. That kills me.
The map.
Because the map says we're fucked.
So hilarious.
I don't know why. I'm the only one on the team that really appreciates the horrible badness of Part 6.
It's not boring. I'll give it that.
But I don't think it's horrible. Is it
this
really
is a tough one
badness?
for us to to criticize, because it's like, look, I know, and the reason we made this documentary and the reason we did it the way we did is because we realized that every one of these movies has its fans.
Yeah.
Including 5, including 6. They're not my favorites of the series, but I'm interested in hearing about what went into them.
I liked that they tried to do something truly different and not just have a bunch of teenagers. I mean, I liked that the story revolved around something that was different. It wasn't just the Elm Street house.
Although in the case of 5 and 6, the way that these, the other concepts that were pitched early, I think were far more interesting. But at the same time, if they had hired Peter Jackson to do Part 6, we might never have had Lord of the Rings. So you never know.
Yeah, because that could have killed his career. Who knows? But but this is great. Like this kind of stuff, like Jason Craig, this artist who's done some of the Elm Street. Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash comics. He works with Jeff Katz, and he volunteered to create some panels of some of these Peter Jackson scenes that were in the Peter Jackson draft of Nightmare 6, and so it's really kind of cool to bring a little visual flair, we thought, to what people are talking about in these scenes, give you a flavor of what the movie might have been, brings it to life.
We never got our hands on that script, though. That was one script that I really would love.
I think Mark
read.
Rudetsky said he had it. Right?
I don't know.
I think he did. I think he did say he had it. We could always call him.
But
Mark Rudetsky was like one of those people who, again, it was like one of the presidents of New Line. Mm-hmm. I mean, his career went, he rose through the ranks at New Line and became like the head of production. I want to say president of the studio at one point. But again, just such a down-to-earth guy. I think for me, he was
Oh,
one of my
really
favorite
cool.
parts of the Lord of the Rings box set, because he's
Mhm.
such a smart and intelligent guy and
Mm-hmm.
just gives so many great comments. So I knew having him in would be a good thing for this.
Well, and then going back to what we talked about way earlier is the fact that, Rachel Talalay started on the low rung of the ladder, and now she's directing one of the movies of a
Mhm.
franchise that's really important to a studio.
Right.
And I think that the fact that they gave her that chance, I think, is pretty cool. That
Well, I
doesn't
think
happen
that
every day.
says a lot about New Line. I mean, we're friends also with a guy named Jeff Reddick, who wrote the first Final Destination, or the first draft, and the story for the sequel, and really, it was his idea, that whole franchise. But he was working as an assistant at New Line
Yeah.
when they bought that from him.
I think that
So it was that kind of studio. Like, they would really promote from within.
The genius
And if you
of
had a
New
good
Line-
idea, they'd use it.
the genius of New Line was they knew a good idea.
Right.
And they weren't going to say, well, you're not an A-list writer, so it can't be good.
Well, they were very-
took a good idea.
They were very
Mhm.
much in the sort of Corman-esque world.
Yeah.
They were really good at recognizing talent and being like...
They were the
"You."
big budget Corman.
They were. They
I
really
mean,
were.
And there's nothing like that anymore. The more
Exactly,
time
yeah.
has gone on, the more studios just want to be elite and shut out everybody on the outside. Or if a guy from the mailroom would pitch a suggestion, they just look at you like you were stupid.
Well,
Did
you're
you
not
really
on
do-
the
Did you
approved
direct a
list.
music video?
Yeah,
There is an
okay.
approved list, and I think that's what's different. And I think that's also what this documentary, it's kind of sad to me when you, at the end of the show, where you see it all kind of come to an end. Like, all stories have to come to an end, but the New Line story, I think, ended in a way that was just unfortunate for a lot of people. I mean, like 900 people lost their jobs. It became it became a smaller part of a bigger empire, and I think that's what we wanted to talk about. But you could really see the emotion, especially in Bob Shaye's eyes.
Hoverboards don't walk on water.
But
I love the Ricky Dean.
Getting him was a bit of a trial and a tribulation, though.
Was
I
it?
remember you guys
Yeah.
went through a lot of back and forth.
Yeah, we had to do a lot of
convincing.
convincing and phone calling and emailing to get him in the chair, which
Once he
ultimately
came
we
in,
did. So
When he came in, he was...
yeah,
totally
no, he
for
was.
it.
I mean, he's fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
it was great.
Sometimes it's that thing of getting over that hurdle of that phone call or the email that's impersonal, and then when you meet in person, you feel comfortable. Oh,
Yeah.
you see that you're all just doing your thing, and you're all,
Here
oh,
we
boy.
go.
Oh,
And
boy.
then there's Leslie.
And
Dean's
then
interview.
there's Leslie and her
Can I just say that...
her staring
After-
human puppet.
After this, we did our first DVD run of this. I have been hit up at least 20, 30 times from friends and fans.
Mm-hmm.
And the first question I am asked is, so yeah, man, love the doc. What's
the
up with Leslie Dean?
hell, man?
Well, yeah, but let's tell people that when we first had her interview filmed, again, we didn't film this. This was the Texas crew. When we got the footage back, it was just Leslie Dean made up, but it
Yeah.
was only Leslie
yeah.
Dean.
Mhm.
But the sound...
The sound was
there were
bad.
some sound issues.
So we had to have the interview redone.
Yeah, their
and I
interview was. Yeah,
remember
she had to reshoot the whole interview.
getting a call. I don't remember from who, but
By me.
they said, "Tommy, did you approve another person being in Leslie Dean's interview?" And of course, I have no idea what anyone's talking about. And I said, "Of course, I would never approve that. What do you mean?" And then maybe it was Dan. Oh, you'll see.
Oh, you'll see.
Was it
That
you
sounds
and-
like me.
Andrew, was it you and me? Because I remember when you first got...
Well, you guys saw it before I did.
Yeah, okay, so we saw it first, and I remember Andrew and I were watching it, and we're in shock for about 30 seconds, and then
Silence.
and then
Yeah.
we just burst into laughter, because there was nothing else you could
Right.
do.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where and I think, Tommy, you kind of like put all of our anxiety about that to rest by saying, or at least for me, you said, look, if this is how she chooses to appear, that's her choice. It wasn't our choice. She has to sort of live with that.
Well, yeah. And the other
And-
thing is,
I mean, look, I disagree with it. I really felt like that person added to it is distracting from her interview. It was not respectful to us as the filmmakers because she didn't ask our permission. And I'm just going on record as saying it. That said, she gave a great interview and she told some really interesting stories, but I just really didn't appreciate having that kind of thrown
well,
at
and
us.
my stance was, you know what? It's either going to work in our favor, and people are going to be talking about it in a way like, "Oh
Which
my god,
they
you have
do.
to see it," or
Yeah, they
she's
definitely-
going to look like a fool.
Right.
And it ended up, I think, being the former, which
I mean,
is to our benefit.
I kind of, I know, I mean, to explain to those who are listening to this, or if anybody is, what that was all about was she is in a band, and I think it's kind of a goth punk band, some kind of, right,
Something. It's like a
But-
roller derby
roller
goth
derby
punk
goth
band.
punk,
Yeah.
punk
Scary
vampires.
Cherry Bang Bang.
Scary Cherry Bang Bang. What is it?
Scary Cherry Bang Bang.
There.
Yep.
That's who they are. So, so I think she's the part of it is promoting that, that element of her life and everything. But I just, the whole human puppet staring into the camera.
Break eye contact.
It's so weird and so off-putting. But that said, people will remember this part of the documentary.
At the end of the day, I kind of came to embrace it just on the sheer fact that we're 3.5 hours into this documentary. We're on Freddy's Dead, which is already sort of a batshit crazy movie to begin with.
Right.
Just if this had come in during part 1 or part 3, it
Yeah.
would have been like, oh my god,
yeah.
no. But at this point in the documentary,
I guess it keeps your interest.
It throws something when you've had 100 talking heads thrown at you to have this image. I think actually works is kind of beneficial.
I agree. Point. I just wish we'd been consulted about it before they just did
it was definitely a bomb that was dropped on us. But I'm glad we chose to embrace it rather than like try and CG around it.
CG around it or punch in or honestly we could have cut her out of the whole show.
Yeah.
Which I think would have been a problem. And we realized that because we didn't have all the cast members that we wanted. Which speaking of going back a few moments, I tried so hard to get Roseanne.
I know you did.
It just was not going to happen, but I was just really bummed. I mean,
and I tried really hard with Breckin Meyer because my friend Paula, who works at Robot Chicken, who hooked us up with Michael Granberry, our stop motion artist, she really kind of put it out there to Breckin that he should do it. And I think at the end of the day, he felt like he didn't really have a lot to say about the movie. Like he didn't have a lot of memories because he didn't work on it for very long, according to what Paula told me. So he just ultimately passed. I wish he'd have done it because I think if he'd seen the show. And how in-depth it was. I think he'd have a lot to say about
there
it.
were a lot of people who said, I don't have anything to say, and it was that convincing and coaxing of just come in and we'll see. Mm-hmm. As we're going to learn, Fran Bennett from New Nightmare, I mean, I had to have multiple conversations with her just to say, just come in, you remember more than you think you do. And my goodness, she gave one of the best interviews on that movie because it allowed us to do so much with the material. Mm-hmm. But some people just don't think they have anything worthwhile. And it's like, you do.
At the end of the day, though, part 6 was the hardest section to cut because everything did go off without a hitch. They made the movie. The way they wanted to make it. There's, everybody got along. Everybody liked each other. And they made it and they moved on. And when it comes to really juicy details about how things were going and the hardships and trials, there was really nothing there. So it's part of why it's the shortest section of the documentary, I think.
It's funny, too. One of the things that we didn't get into, and I know we asked the question, because I know a lot of fans have asked, we didn't really cover the TV version of Part 6, which had a lot of, alternate scenes and an ending or something. A whole bunch of scenes that just didn't make the final cut. And it's not really dealt with because we did ask Rachel a question. She honestly didn't remember a lot.
Yeah, a lot of cast members didn't remember what had been cut and what hadn't.
She hadn't remembered it. In retrospect, I would have asked Rachel now to have gone back and watched that version if we could have found it.
And we were trying to feed them things like, there's this scene and that scene and that. But it wasn't genuine when they were saying it. It was like, I think I can kind of recall that this was severely cut by the studio or something.
Yeah, but there were some pretty heavy cuts.
I remember the questions I wrote. Can you tell us about the following scenes which were cut? And we would list them.
Yeah, and she's like, I really don't remember that, or I can't recall. It might have been in at one point. I don't remember.
So to fans,
I don't think
we didn't try.
Yeah, we did.
We did. We tried to get the people that we didn't get. We tried to cover the stuff that wasn't covered. Sometimes it just isn't possible.
Right.
Or sometimes, it all depends on whether or not that info slows it down the dock or if it
it's still a movie. I mean, this is still a movie in itself, and it has to move and it has to have momentum. It has to be entertaining, and what they're saying has to be interesting and relevant. And if it's not, you have to make those tough choices and
we were
let it
pretty
go.
Close to getting Yaphet Kotto too. I remember.
Yes.
We
actually had Yaphet. No, we had him scheduled.
We had him scheduled. We would have had to have done it in the lobby of a busy hotel.
Same thing with Kelly Rowland too. From
Kelly Rowland was one we tried for as well.
Yeah, Kelly was great. She wanted to do it.
Yeah. But we did get Alice Cooper.
Yes, we
did.
That
was cool.
And
Alice Cooper.
And was probably the coolest human
super
being
nice.
I have ever met.
So nice. And we met him the morning he was doing his local radio show. He doesn't live in LA, but he happened to be in town, and he just said yes. I think kind of on a lark. I don't know how you managed that.
Well, originally we were going to go to Arizona. We were trying to figure out a way.
You
guys were going to drive over.
I remember that.
Just going back and forth with the schedule, it turned out that he was going to happen to be in LA, and again, it was like the
Late in our
27th
schedule.
last day of filming.
Yep.
And I'm just like, do whatever you want.
Right. But you know, it's good we did. This is
Yeah,
a
it
great.
is, it is
This was a
good.
score for the show, and having
Well,
Tobe
it was the
Sexton.
same day as
Tobe.
Dawkins.
Tobe.
So
Yes.
Tobe was cool.
Tobe Sexton is such. I just gotta talk about how cool of a guy. I mean, he's not in it for that long, but he's such a cool dude.
Mhm.
Like
Yep.
he came to the signing, and he hung out with us after the signing. Him and his wife
Yep.
were drinking with us after we signed and everything till we all left. Like he was one of the very last people standing.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really really cool stand up guy.
Just to give you an idea of the lengths that we went to, Dan and I even went to a DGA screening of The Lovely Bones with
Yeah.
a camera in hand, trying
Trying
to
to get
corner Peter
Peter
Jackson,
Jackson, we
for
did.
like to answer a question about Freddy's dead,
Yeah.
just so we could get something.
I was standing right next
But-
to him, and his publicist handed me her card. She said he was basically touring around the world trying to promote Lovely Bones, his latest movie at the time, last year, and making the rounds. And he's Peter Jackson. He's biggest filmmakers in the world, and I think he's cool enough of a guy to have done it had he had the moment to pause and focus on this. But we just ultimately didn't get him. But it's not for want of trying, because Andrew and I literally we got into this screening, and it's not like we had to sneak into the screening, but it was a very packed screening. It was our first screening of it, and we tried our best, but it just for some reason it just didn't happen. Like a lot of these things, but I love the 3D stuff here. This is hilarious, and the fact that at the end of the show we get Lisa to put the 3D glasses on.
Oh, I know.
She was
She was mystified by this whole thing.
Yeah.
She was like,
Oh, yeah.
Suzanne was like, I think she wanted to interview us more.
She
Oh,
did.
yeah.
She did. She was definitely throwing more questions our way.
This footage, we have to say thanks to Casey and
John Gray.
and John Gray,
Yeah.
for giving us this footage. It was a screening they did at Part 6 sometime, I don't know, in the past few years in Texas somewhere. And anyway, they were kind enough to give us this great
you
footage.
always, when you put on your mystical Freddy Vision glasses in the dream world, look at your arm
Your
and do a
hand.
hand.
I'm in 3D.
Yeah, exactly. And I love, though, that Rachel and, other people talk about, like, they wanted it, all right. Maybe
Right.
we don't really get it. It's going to be a lot more difficult, but if this is what the studio wants, and we'll do it. And I don't know. I mean, we'll never really know, but I think it certainly helped people go to the theater at the time because there weren't a lot of 3D movies.
No, but just
So there were
wish
none,
it just
but-
was
I love Rachel's
terrible.
glasses.
I
It's
know,
like
they're
those,
hilarious.
Is it just me or do those
They're
things look like
awesome.
sea stacks?
They look
With the
total
Freddy
like sleeve
semen?
stacks.
They look
Yeah,
like
the
piranha.
Freddy's-
That's what it looks like.
They do. Like, you think they're gonna be like?
But it was early. I mean, what she's talking about here is about this was really the beginning of CG.
And
that
this
whole
is,
world.
again, going back, this is what the Nightmare on Elm Street movies did. They took the existing technology and then found out what was on the cutting edge and they tried to incorporate it.
Right,
They always were doing something when it was new.
right.
And I think, again, today, it's so tough
Yeah,
to
do
do
anything
something
new.
that's so new that it's going
Right.
to rock your world
Mhm.
because...
Well, you can always rock your world with just well told stories and
But I'm just talking about
good
technology.
execution.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
like Lord of the Rings. We all saw Gollum. We all knew he was CGI, but he was so lifelike and real that we were like, oh, how did they do that? So it's that capability is still there. I mean, the tricks may no longer be secret, especially to people like us who go out and make documentaries about these things and spoil all the trade secrets.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you can still mystify and excite people, I think.
I have to agree with Jeff. Katz right there, 110%.
Yeah.
that is ending.
All the
deaths.
previous deaths
Yeah.
were
Were
so
better.
much better than that
Yeah,
one.
it just wasn't a great send off.
I don't know. Part 5's death,
I'll take that over 6.
I don't
Mm.
know. I'm on the
Look, I
fence
just
there.
I just think this was one of those points in the series where they just didn't know what to do or where to go with it.
Well, and they were done. Effectively.
They were pretty much done,
The thing
and-
we learned from everyone is this wasn't a gimmick. They were
Right.
done with Freddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like, let's move on. We have other things happening.
Right.
And then, of course,
And the funeral that they did,
Yeah.
which was all gimmicky, and I remember that. I remember being at an event in North Hollywood when this movie was opening, and Rachel was there promoting it.
Oh.
And
The best is Robert Ressler right here when he starts
That's
crying. It's funny. I brought that up to him. I was like, "We have footage of you at the Hollywood Center," and he goes, "Oh, where I'm crying."
Oh, that's
He
great.
totally remembered
That's
doing
great.
it.
But I don't know, Leslie Dean. I appreciated the interview. Actually, she was candid in talking about her abuse and the childhood abuse.
Yeah,
she
I mean,
went
if,
through,
if
and
there's any revelation to come out of a Nightmare on Elm Street documentary, it's probably that.
probably,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
just wish there wasn't a
pet staring into my soul.
Yeah, the human pet. But I get, like you said, it certainly livened it up, made it different.
The human pet actually crashed the IMDb message boards when people were arguing back and forth about the Leslie Dean interview and her lap dog, and I guess the dominatrix lady came on and just went, "Hello, this is the dominatrix girl, arf arf."
Oh my god!
And that was it. And that was it.
That's hilarious. But actually, Lisa ended up being a sport. I think she was hesitant also to do it because she didn't know what she had to say. She was a little nervous about it.
Lisa and I had quite a few conversations, and finally, I just kind of poured my soul out to her.
Yeah, but she was really nice, and she looks great.
This is the best title card.
Love that.
This is the best title card of them all. I think
cool.
So great.
Okay.
What?
I don't think it is.
Oh, really? It's good.
It's good, but I don't know why it's the greatest.
I just
Which one do you
like.
think is the best?
I think the TV one.
The TV one for me is
The TV
one of the
one?
best ones.
Oh, we mean the one, the house
exploding
that
TV
goes,
in the arm.
The TV one's
that
good
was
too.
cool. I just love the way that one looks because
That's
it
neat.
matches so
Neat.
well
No,
with,
he did a great
with
job.
the New Nightmare.
It's
one.
very clever, just on a conceptual.
Yeah,
level.
that's why I like it.
And here comes Wes back to the series that he began.
And I have to thank Jeff Fenner, the associate producer of New Nightmare, who so
Yep.
graciously let us have use of his copious amounts
Oh.
of photos that he took himself. I mean,
Yep.
Everything.
incredible photos.
Well, we
of
didn't have the
himself.
budget to go to the studio and license, all the studio photos. And honestly, at the end of the day, it's better to have these because we've seen those photos published in Fangoria and
Back of the box.
press kits and the back of the VHS
Yeah.
boxes. And we've seen those photos. Who cares about those? We want to see the stuff that has never been shown before. And the best stuff comes out of people's private collections. Their Polaroid pictures, their behind the scenes shots, the special effects guys doing tests, and people like Jeff who just happened to be on set snapping his own photos. So there's tons of that stuff.
Yeah.
And the gag reel, I think I forgot who gave us. Was it Jeff? Somebody gave us.
It was
the gag
it
reel.
was Patrick Lucier who gave us the gag reel.
Right.
It was the
The
it
editor.
was-
So there were just a lot of people who were willing to just say, "Hey, I've had this sitting in a box for 20 years or whatever, 15 years."
and that was our goal. Like we said, we're not going to make this a clip show. This is not going to be.
I mean, we have the little clips, but it's just enough to make the point
Yeah.
and move on.
Mhm.
Patrick gave such a great interview. He
Yeah, he
talked about
did.
so much great stuff.
He did. Patrick's really intelligent, and you can tell he really loves this movie. I think this was a good experience for him. And he did a great job. This movie looks great.
It's a gorgeous movie. I think it's one.
It was
of the-
only an $11 million budget.
It's so smart and so clever, and I think
it's Wes's writing.
Yeah.
back
Nothing
to,
would
you know,
ever get made like this today. Nothing.
No.
No studio would ever take the chance on something like this film.
No, it was risky, and unfortunately, it was a financial risk that didn't pay off necessarily for the studio. This movie just didn't do great
Probably
business.
did in the long run, though.
I mean, it made its money back certainly in video, but I think it's a beloved part of the franchise. It's one of my favorite.
look how
ones.
great. I love that.
I think
photo together.
1 and 7, I think still for me hold
Yeah.
up as the best of the movies.
Absolutely.
And that's just the 10 of us girls were hilarious. I mean, it's just the fact that all these girls were all from Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but I know Andrew really loved the theme song.
Oh my god, the worst jingle.
He
opening
loves
jingle
sitcoms
ever.
He loves
Oh,
sitcoms,
I-
and he loves the theme song. To
I
this
have
show.
a burning fire, a hatred for
His
sitcoms.
favorite sitcom is Will and Grace.
Will and Grace,
God, no. Anything with a laugh track, I despise. And all those little musical and in the opening from Just the 10 of Us has. It's catchy in all the worst ways. In fact,
But most sitcoms don't have laugh tracks, though.
They don't.
They're filmed in front of live
Live
audiences.
audiences.
or no, they want to make you think that they're.
No,
It's
they
not
really
true.
are.
I've been to taping.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some, but a
I mean,
lot
I'm sure
them
some
are-
of them
Yeah,
sweeten the track.
Yeah,
but-
it's called sweetening. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff
Yeah.
Garrett used to do that. Anyway, so
As Andy
getting off
Kaufman
track.
says, it's the laughter of the dead.
Yep. But it was just really cool to revisit this movie because it's
It's just,
Such a
I mean,
smart film.
it's like this movie deconstructs A Nightmare on Elm Street, and we're deconstructing the deconstruction of
yeah.
A Nightmare on Elm Street,
Right.
and I think it's just a fascinating look. What Wes created
Mm-hmm.
was so different, and I almost think it's like, why not take that chance?
I
Because you
know.
can't say it won't work.
I remember when
It's
this
so
came
different.
out. I came out, I think it was in 1994,
94.
but I'm trying to think what time of year. It was
In
probably like
November.
November. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
fall.
October. It was October.
October or November. It was in the fall, but I remember it was opening day. It was Friday. I was driving through Westwood for some reason. I don't know why I was there, and I saw the new Nightmare is opening. Pulled over to see. No one was in the theater.
Yeah, I saw it in the theater with my friend, and I think there was 5 people.
Yeah, it
I
was
didn't
just-
know there was a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie.
Yeah, I don't think it was marketed properly. Probably, maybe that was part of it.
Well,
or
it
the
was
timing
ahead
was
of its-
off.
It was
and it
ahead
was
of
Pulp
its time.
Fiction.
It was Pulp Fiction, but also if this movie had come out during the internet generation, where everyone is so much more savvy, the
Yeah.
fans are so much more savvy about who all the people behind the scenes are,
Right.
then they would have immediately. You get the Anna Cool News generation. That's what this movie was made for, essentially. But before there was even an Anna Cool News generation,
Mhm.
so and it's held up. I'd argue that it holds up a lot better than Scream over time.
Mhm.
I mean, it's not everything about it. It's got a nice orchestral score.
Yeah.
It still feels subversive.
Mhm.
It did all the right things, and it's aged
Well, it's
a lot
really,
better.
really smart script.
Yeah.
He started with, it was a great script. He just knew how to weave the reality and the dream so beautifully. And, I don't know. It just seemed like there was a lot of good camaraderie on that set, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, you can tell that it was a big reunion for all of them, and they were happy to be back working on such a clever movie. And
Yeah.
I think it was just so different and so interesting. And I think that was also ultimately its flaw, is that a lot of people went in for the new Freddy movie,
Right.
and Freddy's not in the movie all that much. And,
Right.
But from a storytelling standpoint and a dramatic standpoint, I personally love the movie because it's not necessarily about Freddy. It's
Right.
about what Freddy has done.
Done to the
Mhm.
lives of the people.
Yeah,
who were-
and that's why I
Yeah.
think from that storytelling point, it's so fascinating.
And also for Heather, just the little props. Not only, who was our executive producer, our narrator on the show, and really was a driving force behind getting this made. But she did a not to kiss ass, but she was really good in this movie.
she was fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic performance.
Yeah. She did a great job. And playing a weird version of herself.
Mhm.
Kind of it was her life, but,
Yeah,
amplified.
that's not really her.
That's not really her.
Yeah.
And she's very quick to point that out.
There's a couple moments though, and I told her, I said, there's a couple moments of you in there.
Yeah.
Usually
Yeah.
when she's scolding someone, I'm like, when you're yelling at me.
I gotta say, David Newsom was probably the funniest person that we had come through.
He was great.
He was really
And
funny.
Miko, he was such a cool guy, and it's just nice to see a kid who started out as a young Hollywood actor just be a normal guy, living a normal life, not trying to grab attention everywhere he goes, not all screwed up. I mean, who knows how screwed up he is? We all screwed up.
I'm glad
But,
he
he's-
remembered
he's
as
a-
much as he remembered.
No,
But
he's-
being such a little kid, but clearly he came from a better background.
Oh,
than some
He's
of
not a
the-
victim of Hollywood parent
Right.
syndrome.
This is
so-
one of my favorite Wes moments right there.
Right.
When he makes that face and laughs about the Miko story, to me, that was just so genuinely Wes having an emotional reaction to a memory.
Right.
And I just think it's such a funny memory how
It
they would
is.
get Miko to cry.
There was a
Yeah.
lot of discussion over that too, because some people thought it was too heavy or too dark or it was too cruel to
But that's why
to
I
show
think it's
that
interesting.
story.
It's such a crazy
But-
story, and then you see Wes with that little gleeful
I know.
remembrance of it. It just
No, it's
makes me
good. It
realize there was a lot of emotional connectivity on that set.
Tracy Middendorf was another person. She's from New York and
Yeah.
works a lot still. And
Tough to get.
Tough to get.
I'm glad we did.
And honestly,
yeah.
I think it was one of those ones that she wasn't getting the messages from her management or
Yeah, we finally got a hold of Tracy directly.
directly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think it was one of those things probably ended up on her agent's desk and she's busy and
Yeah.
I don't think they were trying to be rude. I don't think they quite understood our time frame.
Yeah.
Is what
And
it
this was also, looking back, actually, this one we have the complete cast, I believe.
Yeah.
I think we have everyone in the main cast.
I mean, even the cinematographer again. it's just
Mark
Mark
Irwin.
Oh,
super
Who
nice.
I was starstruck. I didn't know who he was, but then I sat down and started asking the questions. Like, so you were the DP on all the Cronenberg movies? I love you.
You know, I also want to point out a special
I
thanks,
love
since
that.
we're talking about all these great people. Cynthia Charette,
Yeah.
the incredible production designer
Oh,
of this
man.
film, was so instrumental in giving us access to an incredible amount of behind-the-scenes footage, or
Totally.
drawings,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
concept photos. I mean,
Yeah.
the end set
Yeah,
that she created
the
was
hell set, and she gave us all the
stunning.
drawings, all of her
Incredible.
blueprints and concept
Beautiful.
drawings, and she was super cool and really nice to do that for us.
Buzz and I worked on the Pumpkinhead special edition with her, and
Mm.
she coughed up. I mean, again, she gave us about 80% of what we used in that documentary. Those are the kind of crew members are our documentarians' best friends, because
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
save
Everything,
effects
yeah.
guys and production designers and everything.
Yeah.
They hold on to everything.
Well, like some of those test shots of Freddy, it's all K&B like test footage that they just
Yeah.
lent us and let us use, and that's just priceless stuff. That's not something you'd find in a studio vault. This is just the people who were trying to get their job done and making little VHS recordings of things and taking snapshots on the set.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great. I mean, all that's just test footage from at the K&B warehouse.
And the new look of Freddy, I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I'm just, as I
Uber
watched
cool.
this footage, I just remember everyone talking about, was it a smart thing to do? Was
right.
it not a smart thing to
I
do?
like
And there's a
the
lot
look.
of
It's great.
different opinions.
But I love this comparison to Repulsion. I had never made that connection until Wes pointed that out.
Mm-hmm.
Where the walls open up. But I mean, this came out in the era right after the Northridge earthquake, and I lived through that. So this really brings that back to me. Every time I watch this movie, I remember exactly what was going on and what it was like to live in Los Angeles at that time. It was a scary time, you know. Although it was kind of a nice time. It was like one of those times. That's my neighborhood after the earthquake. All of these photos are these are my personal photos from the earthquake. So this is what happened in my backyard.
This was so.
That wasn't where I lived, though. That wasn't my house. Luckily,
I so desperately wanted to find like all this news footage that you'd see on YouTube of like the freeways, you know, cut in half and all this kind of stuff, but we just couldn't find any of that stuff. We dug forever, and nobody had any archival material.
Well, like this
back
stuff
then.
that was in the movie, though, like a couple of these shots were like Wes went out with a second unit, or I sent a second unit out and just shot the real stuff. So, but we were lucky to get just like again Miko bringing in his crew jacket and his old pajamas and the Rex stuffed doll and stuffed animal.
This is definitely the one movie I think we all agreed was. I think universally we were all in agreement. This is one of the best of all of them.
Yep. I think most fans would agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, over the years, it's definitely kind of resurfaced as being one. Because when it first came out, it wasn't. Not a lot of people. The critics loved it, but it's not a lot of people saw it.
Yep. This stuff is great. These scenes I loved in the movie of just making fun of the whole pop phenomena that was Freddy. And I love how Heather talks about, oh, and there I was standing there, which is kind of like the way my life goes. He gets all the attention. And Heather's making her own documentary now called I Am Nancy.
Which really explores that whole phenomenon of Nancy's popularity, and in comparison to Freddy, her lack thereof, you know.
Yep. But she's, unlike, so there she is, just chewing her gum, waiting. But unlike a lot of women, there are other people who've become big stars out of horror films, and, Heather's just always holds this up. Like, she never looks down at the series, or she doesn't, I don't think she ever really looks at it as being something she wished she hadn't participated in.
No, not at all. I mean, Heather is definitely someone who does look at the doors that it opened, the fame and career it did create for her. And again, it wasn't just a slasher movie. I mean, she truly believes that they were making something special, and she has fond memories. I mean, even the difficult times are still things that she looks back on, and she can talk about them in a way that's like, you know what, it's all part of the growing up process. It's all part of being a part of the business. I think she really does enjoy being a part of this whole franchise. I love that moment in the movie when Wes has already written what they had just said. I mean, I just remember it being so clever and chilling, because you didn't really see that kind of stuff back in 1994.
Nope.
Scratching the balls.
Yeah, this was hilarious.
Oh, he was so funny. Actually, interesting piece of trivia. His background plate is where they filmed Nick Corey's Rod's funeral.
Oh, cool! Right, I remember because you guys went to Hallowed Grounds and shot some stuff.
Yeah, so I grabbed that plate.
Cool.
That's the exact spot where where his funeral was.
How weird.
He had a ball stand.
Now I have to. Someone had to have say that, right? Or did he say that on his own? I don't remember.
He brought it up.
Did he just say that?
But then we asked him to do the ball scratching thing.
Yeah,
he was more than
willing to.
No, not David Newsom. Wes. When he said when Wes said we had. I think
we brought up the. I think we had already interviewed David, but I think we brought up the topic. But I think Wes kind of reacted to it.
It was really funny.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny about Wes is he's such a scholar
in
he speaks. So when he says something that's sort of off the cuff, it's much funnier. Just because, more funny just because you don't expect someone like him to say something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the greatest things that everyone should really think about New Nightmare, especially Heather, is her wardrobe just advanced so exponentially. My goodness, the girl finally learned how to dress herself.
Yeah, with the pearls and the pink sweater. But and I don't think it made the documentary, but we had really pointed out Heather's uncanny physical resemblance to the champion ice skater Nancy Kerrigan.
Which we want. She played Nancy Kerrigan in
In
a
a
television
TV
movie.
movie.
We could the only reason that we didn't include it was we couldn't find that TV movie anywhere.
Right.
It's disappeared off the face of the earth.
Although that
I
she has
see
a copy of it.
I see it every once in a while on Lifetime or something,
dear,
and I'll
that's
call Heather and just go, "Why?"
That's what we wanted. We
Why?
wanted to bring that up and just cut to her in the actual movie going, "Why?"
But she really, I mean, I remember the first time I saw Nancy Kerrigan, a photo of her was before the Tanya trouble began, but I thought it was Heather. I was like, the girl from
really?
Nightmare on Elm Street has become an ice skater.
Well, we all
And
know
her name was Nancy, and I think I didn't put two
how
and two
funny.
together yet.
We all know
I
and
was
love
young.
Heather that Heather would never have ridden on the Mickey Mouse float and uttered an expletive under her breath, which is what Nancy Kerrigan got in trouble for doing.
Oh, she did.
They
Oh,
should have
yeah.
hired Lisa Wilcox to play Tanya Harding in the movie.
Oh, that-
Oh,
At
my
it.
God.
You should have cast that movie, Andrew.
That
That
would
would
have
have been great.
hilarious. And here is the infamous
Yep.
me begging people, please stop trying to break it. Please don't undo the glue.
There's
You're
literally
really making
he
me
walks in.
nervous.
He
He
walks
wanted-
in,
yeah.
and there's like two of us on each end of this thing, like
Pulling
trying to
it
pull it
up. Oh my
It
apart.
was like
And
siliconed at the base.
And I know
I
that
know.
Miko was like, no, it's okay. And I'm thinking, oh
No,
dear
it's
God,
not
someone's going
okay.
to cut their wrist.
Yeah.
Miko's going to go, what have I done?
Tommy's thinking about the insurance risk.
I know. I'm like,
Yeah.
let's just take pretty
I don't-
pictures of it inside the glass, which
We
caused
did.
a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember because of
Well,
the
the lighting
fact that it
was
was a
an issue.
dome
The
fact that it was a
glass,
dome,
And here comes Fran Bennett.
who I'm
Oh,
secretly
Fran
in
Bennett.
love with.
Yep. And we all know there's something going on with you too.
Fran Bennett is just so. Look at that.
But I mean, you and I were always fans long before this show.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Like you and I, when we first met, we would do Fran Bennett. ones.
Yes, we would.
before we even started,
say all the Fran Bennett
You and I were
lines.
quoting.
Yeah.
it.
But I always have. I've always like. It's been one of my things.
and Fran Bennett is an crazy accomplished actress who's also an acting professor at Cal Arts and all
Mhm.
that stuff. And
Yep.
I mean, just a presence about her. I mean, she
Yeah.
walks into
Very
a room.
imposing, but not in a threatening
No,
way. but
not in a
she's-
threatening way.
She's a commanding
A very
presence.
powerful,
Yeah.
commanding presence where
Yeah.
you really want to pay attention to her. And
Yep.
I mean,
Well, that's
She's so
it's you
great.
totally get why they cast her.
yeah,
Well,
definitely.
that,
and
she's like 6'5".
yeah, and the original script, which I have seen, it
She's
was
a
a
man.
man.
It was a man.
It was a man.
Well, it was named after Dick Hefner, who's the head of the
but
MPA
actually, the
ratings
original
board.
script
Yeah.
wasn't named after.
Oh, it wasn't.
No, it was another. It was just a man's name.
Oh, so
Yeah,
he probably
in a
got.
revision.
He was probably thinking, "Oh, I'm going to stick it to someone here,"
Yeah,
and I don't blame him. I used to work at the MPA. I know all these people.
you know all their secrets.
I do.
It was such a great scene with Tracy Middendorf up in the.
Yep.
I mean, I remember seeing that when I was really young and being
So
truly
cool.
frightened.
It's just like
Because
the
the-
first one.
the
It's so
kid is there.
powerful. Yeah,
That's
and
why
he's
it's
just
so-
oh my gosh.
Yep.
And again, the original script had very different, stuff.
Yeah,
Where
she was a
she
bad
was
guy.
one of the villains.
Yeah, right.
In essence, and it was interesting to read that.
But
Yeah.
I think the movie actually works probably better, being that it is. When you're a kid, your babysitter's kind of a second mom in sort of a weird sort of way, or an older sister.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that literally.
Well, you liked her. I remember really liking her
No, yeah,
character.
yeah.
Isn't that Wes's daughter in one of your
yeah,
shots?
yeah. The nurse with the needle.
Yes,
his daughter
right.
Jessica.
Jessica Craven.
Is that the same? Is it the same one that picked Johnny Depp?
But
I wonder what it would have been was like for Miko when he was playing little Gage in Pet Cemetery, running around with a scalpel.
he said he
having to
doesn't have
carve
very
up-
many
We
memories.
asked him just in
Yeah.
talking, and he said he doesn't really remember that movie.
He remembers like two little snippets of things.
He says he goes, it's interesting because he sees photos of himself on set, and then it will at least spark him being there.
Isn't it weird?
But he
though?
didn't really
So
say
young.
he could
the
recall.
director's handing him a big butcher knife, like here, little Gage.
Well, and Heather's husband did the makeup on that.
I gotta, the freeway sequence
Really?
on this is like, I mean, for its time.
Oh, that was
Again,
insane.
really
That-
blending CGI, blue screen.
But even like the CGI was so primitive, even at this point, in terms of what they were doing,
Yeah.
that they pulled that off and it looked as cool. That was a really cool, exciting scene. I mean, for
Oh,
a Nightmare on
yeah.
Elm Street movie, that was like.
And the music is
the music is so
fantastic
good.
in
And we
that.
interviewed J.P. Robinson, who made it onto one of the bonus features, who was great.
I like the tonal change.
But I've never
there.
climbed as many stairs in my life
Oh,
to get to a
when we went and
location.
interviewed him, and
Oh,
it was
J.P.
Lito, Dan, and
Robinson.
I, all the camera equipment, the lighting gear,
Everything.
up about what was it, like 5-6 flights of
Yeah,
stairs.
he had one of those great sort of houses
Tower
in the hills,
hills.
but it just kind of was like a turret, and everything you had to go up these like spiral stairs into different areas of the house, and then you get to the very, very top, and there's this big music studio. But he was really cool, and he gave us a great interview, and I love the score for this movie. I think it was great.
Yeah, no, it really is good.
But the set, I mean, again, that's all the Cynthia Charette bowels of hell, and Heather got to put up a big fight in this movie, and I think she did a lot of her own stunts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she talked quite a bit about them
so
going
too,
really, against each other. Yeah, there we go, hand to hand.
A lot of people give the ending of this movie shit, like saying, "Oh, it's all great until the climax," but it's.
Oh, I disagree.
No, I really love this ending. I love it when...
And I love that it's very poetic, and it's like, you come back to the story of it.
Well, yeah, and I love when
the
she takes the torch and, she says, F you.
Yeah,
it's like...
Says what, Tommy?
Come on, Tommy, say it, say the word.
We have his run
it. This was what it was like throughout the whole production with Tommy.
Tommy's a very, very... well brought up young man. He's very polite.
He's very conservative.
Okay, Tommy.
I didn't say you're conservative.
I'm not conservative. I'm an innocent.
He's an
Tommy, can you at least say damn?
It's not something I would say, I can't just say it. I'd have to feel it.
Damn it.
Well,
like a nice Jack Bauer. Damn it. Just give us that.
I would probably say dadgummit.
Okay.
So.
You're one of the last, I think,
I have a few expletives in me.
I know, I've heard them.
It just
there have been moments.
When it's commentary,
it takes a lot.
When it pops
like
out.
Like Heather probably felt like saying one here.
Yeah.
She had that tongue wrapped around her head. I bet we could, if we wrapped that tongue around your head, you'd be pretty pissed off, I'll bet.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I would not like that, I'm sure.
We have the raw footage of like a 20-minute take of her with that tongue wrapped around her head, just and it's
pretty humiliating. I actually did feel bad for her,
and that wasn't in the original script. I don't think. I think that was a reshoot. They were like, let's do some more to amp it up, and that kind of thing.
The one thing I will say, that the only thing I do not like about this movie is Freddy's pleather pants.
His pleather pants.
His hot pants that he wears.
Yeah.
It's like, why is he wearing hot pants?
He went to Germany.
Yeah.
He went to Germany.
Like, I dig the trench coat. I love the hat. I love he's beefed up. It's all great.
But what else would he be wearing?
Just give him slacks, man. Just
like
give him
chinos?
slacks.
Do you want
what do demons wear these days?
He didn't fall into the gap.
I'm sorry. As soon as you see him in the hot pants, you're like, that's not scary.
I don't know.
He's going dancing.
Yeah.
Later.
What were demons wearing in '94?
Going back to the tongue thing, it's one of the other interesting things that I liked about us making this project and like that whole process of discovery was we had told Wes that Heather felt the way she felt about that tongue scene, and he was like, really? So I don't even think there are some things that some of the filmmakers and actors knew about the feelings of other cast members.
He did say he had to lecture them at one point.
But I don't think he really knew that at the end of the day. I don't think he thinks she still thinks about it, or that she had nightmares about it.
Right.
So, but I guess he now knows how much that affected her,
traumatized her. Yeah.
So see, that's another good thing. The healing can begin.
Yeah. See, like
involved.
there's we have a mission.
We do. We are trying to bridge the gap of.
Yep. It's like missionary work. It's
at play in the fields of Elm Street.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was a tragedy that this movie didn't do better, but
I love I do have to comment on how funny it is with some of the New Line executives playing themselves.
Oh yeah,
like Sarah and Bob, and it's like,
come on,
you're still rating.
I love
it
when
there.
Heather goes into New Line and she's like, "Hi, I'm here to see Bob Shea," and the receptionist is like, "Who are you?"
Yes,
and Heather gives that look like, "Hello."
Yeah, right. It's like you wouldn't be sitting at that desk.
I mean, look at the reviews of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and those aren't chintzy reviews; those are like New York Times, L.A. Times, Washington Post.
Right. No, Heather was very well reviewed.
Yeah, she was.
I think in New York Times she got a great review.
Especially this was a big revelation because this was in that real dead space where genre movies weren't up until Scream. Pretty much 90 through 97, where it was just crickets.
I know. I did one of those movies.
Before this, it was like Jacob's Ladder. Maybe was Prince of Darkness.
That was
before.
80s. That was in the 80s.
That
was like 88, huh? Yeah. It was Mouth of Madness. That was like 90.
That was 90s.
Yeah, that was 90s. Yeah.
So it was like Mouth of Madness and Jacob's Ladder. Those are the only two I remember from that period of time. You know.
Well, it was just kind of coming around again at this point. I think this was just the beginning of it all. I mean, that's where Dimension was born right after this. Pulp Fiction put Miramax on the map in a huge way, and Dimension came along and they picked up the Hellraiser rights and then Halloween rights, and we did that, and then Scream came along, and then everything changed again. So,
I love the Off to the Races.
This is great.
Here. It's hilarious.
Great. This is really fun.
Place your bets. Yeah,
and this was a tough call. I mean, there was a point in the making of this where the show was running really long, and we even considered for half a minute of dropping this.
I remember.
Not dropping it, but putting it as a bonus feature, because
yeah.
it's not really a Freddy movie.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, we're like, you know what? It is a Freddy. It's a Freddy movie. But it's not a nightmare movie, right?
It did 7 when we were cutting it. 7 felt like the perfect book
ending.
Yeah, like
and we really did. We stopped for a minute.
And it truly is the end, I think, of Elm Street.
Yeah.
It's still New Nightmare ends Elm Street.
But I think it would have been irresponsible of us as documentarians to not include this. And acknowledge that this was a part of how it all played out.
And we found that way in to tell the story that we're telling where, about Cain and Ronnie Yu and what he wanted to do and why he almost turned the movie down. I think we ended up finding that interesting material to go in and actually say something.
Yeah. And this was a tough one, too, to fill this one, because a lot of the actors from Freddy vs. Jason are Canadian and they live in Canada, and it was just difficult to make it work for them. That we didn't try again.
No,
I mean, we reached out.
The Canadian people weren't available. Kelly Rowland, we were so close, and ended up being in Florida filming something. I mean, it just didn't work out. But again, I think we found that way in.
It was a nice balance, and I think the ones that are the actors that we got, I think, have the most to do with the Freddy side of the story.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was great.
So I think that's why this kind of works.
He's the only one in the movie that gets killed by Freddy.
That's right.
Yeah,
so that's something I learned. I didn't even make that connection, I think, till one of you guys.
Well,
it's funny. I brought that up on when I was interviewing him. Like, did you know you're the only person Freddy kills in that movie?
Yeah, he didn't even know that.
And he's like, "Is that true?"
Holy
shit!
Yeah.
Oh my god!
And Mark Swift again, came back and did the interview for us. He'd also done His Name Was Jason with his writing partner Damien. And he's always just a really nice guy.
And Damien wanted to be a part of this, but I believe he was actually sick.
He was really sick.
But this whole sequence of this whole part of Freddy vs. Jason, I have to give Andrew a lot of credit for, because you really fought for getting all of the writers that we could get in that chair. The ones with all the different drafts. And I didn't know, I wasn't convinced this was going to work, or if it was just going to seem tedious. But I think the way it's cut, and the way that you hear about how this went through this crazy development process over a 15-year period, it's really interesting.
It is, and not only that, but we're huge Battlestar Galactica nerds.
Right.
So when Mark
Ron
Verheiden came in, we were going for Ron Moore. He was too busy at the time.
Moore,
I think Galactica just finished, but Verheiden came in, and I think he was a little bit like, who are all these Galactica nerds that just want to ask these questions?
I love this. Crash Cunningham did this conceptual thing of Jason on trial. Because that was in one of the early drafts of Freddy vs. Jason, and I just thought, what a great image, and so Crash. He's such a great artist when it comes to Friday the 13th. It was perfect guy to have do something like that. It took him a while to do that one, but I love the way that came out.
The ideas were so crazy with these early drafts. I mean, I'm an unabashed fan of Freddy vs. Jason. I think it's entertaining as hell, but part of me would really love to see some of these more bizarre drafts.
Well, when I always found the one where they believe that Freddy molested Jason. I just find that I actually find that really deeply disturbing, and I think that would have been a really creepy, dark way in.
Perfect way to go with those guys.
I'm shocked they didn't go with that, because it's so dark.
But it connected them in a way that, it was sort of, it's kind of an obvious choice for that character that he would have done something like that.
Yeah.
To molest the Mongoloid kid.
Oh, it's just really creepy.
Boy, don't tell anybody.
Oh, there's a good photo that we got at the last minute.
Yeah, we were scraping for a lot of material.
Images were slim on this one.
In the interviews, this was
a lot of
very
people
tricky.
didn't have stuff.
They didn't.
Yeah.
They were slim for a 4-hour documentary.
Yeah.
But didn't Bill Tarzakis,
he did
in Canada, he was the makeup effects guy. He sent us some materials at the end of the day. It took some time to get them. He was moving offices at the time, and it was tough. Zach Ward gave us some great things.
I love how we blocked out whatever we blocked out from 10 years ago. Those numbers even work anymore. I think that's hilarious. You never know. You never know.
God, has it been 10 years?
Oh yeah,
already?
Ronnie Yu. Okay, we have to talk about the pink chair. Ronnie Yu's glasses and the pink chair he's sitting on. He's in Beijing, China.
I think Ronnie Yu is the cutest thing ever. I first saw his interview and his little glasses, and he's so energetic.
Well, I'm Skyping this interview here in LA, and he's in Beijing, China. I found the one American cameraman working in Beijing in the middle of the winter.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I don't know how I found him, but
and we
I
went
did.
back and forth like, please stay available,
Yes,
please stay available.
yes. But we chased Ronnie from, I don't know, 4 continents. I mean, you
Oh
did.
yeah, no, because from here to Australia to Beijing. I mean,
In
it
Hong
depends
Kong,
on where he
yeah.
is.
He travels all the time, and he's always making films. So the fact we got, and this was shot in a restaurant, I'm told, in Beijing.
Yes,
Literally
yes.
in their sort of down. I mean, it's sort of like there's that kind of I don't know, midday thing where everything shuts down.
Yeah, exactly. It was the in between time.
Siesta
It was between
kinda.
lunch and dinner.
So I guess not siesta.
and I have to
Anyway,
say,
These cats.
oh, we have to talk about the Jeff Katz stuff.
Because Jeff Katz was so unbelievably shocked. We just found out 2 days ago he had just finished the documentary and was flipping out because, and it was just sheer coincidence because Rachel Talalay just gave us a stack of fan letters that she saved.
And some of them happened to be the letters that Jeff Katz, who as a little kid would write to Bob Shea, and she just happened to have those.
she happened to have the drawing of the movie poster for his idea. I mean, just
Crazy.
happenstance. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And some of the letters that she sends me, every once in a while, she'll find them. And I mean, it really is a testament to, again, what New Line was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They literally,
They would
these
answer
executives responded to fans. I mean, this
Yeah.
fan, one of the fans who ends up on our bonus feature, from the fans, he wrote to Rachel all these questions and everything, and she wrote him like a 2-page letter back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, you don't get that from
No.
movie studios anymore.
No. You write a studio now, they'll just
Yeah.
It
trash
goes in
heap.
the garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, she
Yeah.
answered
It's filed.
every one of his questions.
Wow, it's really cool. I mean, and honestly, I have to say I relate to Jeff's story of I wrote letters as a kid to Frank Mancuso Jr., the producer of Friday the 13th, and he took the time to write me a
Mhm.
personal letter, which if you go in the other room here, I've got that still. It's framed, and I've always kept that.
It's just
as
a
kind of a
different
reminder.
time now,
It is,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's sad. You know what? The studio system after the fall of New Line and everything, what we need another collapse, like in the 70s, where when Dennis Hopper and all the renegades sort of took over.
mhm.
I think the film industry is due for another.
Well,
one
I
of
think
those.
everybody's ready for something big to kind of turn.
Or,
things
I mean,
around.
looking at it the other way, what we need is someone to create the new line. We need
Right.
someone to
Yeah.
say,
Right.
I want to make movies I'm passionate about. I don't want to make them on a dollar budget, but I don't need to make them on
Right.
$15 million
Right.
either. I
Yeah.
can make a good movie for
Yeah.
$5 million. And we just need someone to take that chance because it seems like Hollywood today says it's either $1 million or $100 million.
Yep.
Anything in between is not going to work.
Yep.
And I think that's the wrong attitude.
Yep.
No, it is. I don't see the reason of paying your lead actor, the budget of like 50 films. I don't care how big a name they are. As the box office of Paranormal Activity and other movies like that have proven, and even Nightmare on Elm Street, it's never about star power with horror movies.
No,
it never ever is.
It's story. And Monica Keena, I almost wept when I got the call that she was going to come in.
Oh,
She
yeah.
was
So
awesome.
sweet.
Because if we didn't
You know
get
what?
Monica,
I mean, what a bright woman she is. Like, I have to say, I'm sorry, but she's very beautiful, and especially
Yeah.
if she's younger, like they really played up that very,
Barbie
look at
doll
her Barbie
image.
doll sort of look. She's nothing like that. She's
No.
extremely
no,
well
she was
spoken,
definitely
very
acting,
intelligent, very
Down to earth.
well read,
Yeah.
and this girl's got some
Just a
brains
great,
behind it all.
yeah, she
so.
really offered a lot, and I'm so glad we got her because she was the lead. She was the anchor for that movie
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of what the story.
But she was sweet
revolved
to come
around,
in, and I know it's it's always difficult to ask the leads to come in and just do a little
Yeah.
show like where we didn't know her.
No, we didn't, and she tried, and I give her thanks. She tried so hard to get Jason Ritter,
yeah.
and he just wasn't available.
Mhm.
So it's like,
But she was
again,
very gracious. Like I just remember the whole time her just being so
I think she thanked us
more than we thanked her. She really did. She was very just very sweet and
I think
I really liked her, and I was. There's some people who come in and you think, oh, they're going to be difficult, and she was so the opposite of
No,
that. She
yeah.
was so
So,
just sweet.
I think she
and-
was just so in love with the fact that we cared enough to want to talk to her about it.
Yeah.
And she was just anxious to talk about any of her work. Like I brought up
I mean,
Declared with her when she was in the makeup chair, and she started talking to
Yeah.
me about
Did she?
15 minutes
Oh,
while I was
yeah.
like trying
And
to go
I
to
talked
work.
to her about While You Were Sleeping.
Yeah,
her
she
first
was
movie. It was
totally
great.
stoked about talking about anything she had worked on.
Mhm.
She's really proud of what she does. And,
Yeah.
just a really cool chick.
Yeah, she
I
is nice.
love Brendan Fletcher.
Brendan
Yeah,
Fletcher
he was my favorite actor in this movie by far.
I mean, and when they talk about this whole Brad Renfro tragedy of what first of all, like that he got basically fired from the movie because he was in such a bad state at this time in his life, and then also him dying as tragically and young as he did. But we wanted to touch on that, but not dwell on it too much here. But
Mhm.
but I think Monica says it nicely.
Mm-hmm.
And poor John Ritter too.
I know.
Oh, he
Who was
died,
so weird.
like-
I got to tell you guys this. I mean, I was at the premiere of Freddy vs. Jason in 2003, and it was at Hollywood and Highland. They had an after party, and I remember I had a nice chat with Jason that night, and his dad walked in, and it was literally a week before he died. So
I'm just
It was
going to
really
throw
weird,
out
really
something
weird.
totally off topic and far more full of levity, but just what goes into all the technical stuff of what we've done for this documentary. Like, even those photos,
mhm.
it took me like an hour to get rid of Monica Keena's red eye.
Yes,
Like,
it does.
every little thing
Right.
we've done.
But you got to remember, and it was just it was us and a core group of people.
That's
This
what I
wasn't
mean.
this wasn't it was a cast of hundreds, but it was a crew of like 6 or
Yeah.
And that's what I'm
7.
saying. We all worked so hard
We were
on
doing a
every.
job
Nothing
about
was taken for granted. It
15
wasn't like,
people,
let's throw
please.
those photos. It was like, let's clean the photos up. Let's do what we
Right.
can. Let's make sure
Yep.
this piece edits smoothly. I think,
Yep.
we worked so hard to tell this great story and make it visually appealing and interesting. And
Mhm.
I think that's one of the strengths of this documentary for me personally is it doesn't feel like it's 4 hours.
Right.
You just kind of go
Everyone
along
said
for this
that.
ride.
I think virtually every review I've read on the show has been. It doesn't seem like 4 hours
Yeah.
after you've watched it. In fact, some of them said, "I wanted there to be more."
Yeah.
Like, you're
And then we say, go to
Well, I'm
disc
like,
two.
go to disc two, right? But and this was a difficult balance storytelling because it's Freddy versus Jason, so you have to kind of deal with the Jason part of it, but we really wanted to kind of keep it focused more on the Freddy side. So
Well, and
it was good having Zach and Brendan.
And we did touch on the Jason side of it in,
Mhm.
the Friday the 13th
Right.
documentary, so I think it was time to give Freddy
Right.
his due.
Oh, that's what it was
You know?
about. And and it felt a little like we had to tread some of the same water that we did in His Name Was Jason with this, because you had to talk about why Kane wasn't cast. And
Yeah.
and people I know we got a little bit of a couple fans have said, well, why didn't they bring in, Ken Kirzinger and, but it wasn't about the Ken part of the story.
No,
it was
wasn't about Jason, really.
the development of the movie, and Kane was part of the development of that movie because he was promoting the hell out of it for 20 years before it was ever made.
That, and he did play Freddy.
And he played Freddy.
Yeah. I mean, but it was a massive controversy at the time.
It
Like,
was.
the
And I think
internet
if we hadn't addressed that, then I think it would have been
We would have got hit more, I think.
It would
remiss
have been
of us,
false,
yeah.
So you pick and choose your information and what you feel is
right.
going to be.
I mean, I would have
right,
loved to have had a little bit of Ken in here too to talk about maybe when they were fighting.
Yeah.
But
He was in Canada.
he was in Canada.
So-
Another one of those people up in Canada.
Now, an interesting tidbit, I don't know if it's in the show or a bonus feature or a fan said this to me, but we all talk about how Brendan Fletcher is the only one who gets killed by Freddy.
Yeah.
But Zach actually says, no, I was killed by Freddy. So
He
talk
killed
amongst
him-
yourselves.
He
So-
killed himself, though.
He killed himself.
Off screen.
Yeah.
No, I know, but
years
that's
before
the
the
interesting thing is that some people believe that Freddy
But
was
that's up
was
to
what made him do it.
interpretation.
I know, and I just thought to myself,
But it could be
people
that
are really
his-
delving in.
But I mean,
Yeah.
like in Nightmare 3, and Kristen commits suicide.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
Freddy that
technically,
causes that
yeah.
to
Freddy
happen.
would have been
It could
her
have been
killer.
that same
No,
thing.
that's very, very true. But I mean,
Well, we
on
can geek
screen,
out all
in
day
the
about
movie,
these things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can tell we are fans. Like, we'll sit here and debate, who really killed Zach Ward's character.
completely incorrect there when you say
But Zach was funny, and it's funny to me. A lot of people didn't know he was Scott Farkas from Christmas
I was
Story.
so
I
intent
knew.
on making sure, just make sure he talks about it.
Yeah. Just and I think it was a little tidbit that you throw in that I think entertains people. I think
Yeah.
it makes
I was
it-
like, whatever we need to do to get Scott Farkas in the documentary.
Oh, that was
just-
the
Yeah.
first thing I said when I was miking him up. I was like, "Hey, man, I don't want to geek out on or anything, but
I'm sure he hears it a
I
lot.
really love
But
it."
remember,
it's one of the best movies ever made.
Remember, he said afterwards, he's like, yeah, I go into these big, huge business meetings with these big, uber powerful, multi-billion-dollar studio executives, and they're like, Christmas Story.
Well, but that's the thing. I bet the power of something that has such a reach is Robert Englund can probably meet the president of the United States and not be nervous because you know what? He was Freddy Krueger.
Exactly.
Okay? You know what? It's
It's
like...
true.
It's true.
very-
when you have that kind of backing, when you're an icon, like when you're Scott Farkas
And
from
Scott
A Christmas
Farkas
Story,
is an icon.
Yeah.
I think you have that behind you is almost like the
Well,
thing
it's
you
right.
can lean on.
You can wear it anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just something you can always.
But
say, you know that kid.
That's that. This is why
He was smart though. He told us too. He retained the rights to the character.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So anytime they make a Scott Farkas figure,
Oh, wow.
they have to go to him.
Wow.
But
That's
generally,
great.
this is why everybody in the Nightmare series, especially Robert Englund,
Oh.
are so
Oh, wait.
cool because
Oh, we gotta. Oh, here we go. This was a well-guarded secret through the whole production of this movie, that we knew we were getting Jason to come in and do this little walk-on cameo, which was like literally something we had to. Like, one of our associate producers, Bill Philpott, has a relationship. He's represents Jason, so he got him for us. But it was just something we wanted from day one, to have him comment on that character of this movie, this bowled fans over. They loved this little cameo.
Yeah, it started as a joke, and then Bill, who had him on speed dial, immediately
was like,
pulls
"Why
out his
don't we
phone
do
and was
it?"
like,
No, I think we were interviewing. There was Brendan Fletcher or no, it was
Monica, maybe.
It might have been Monica. I don't know. It was after the interview. No. It wasn't Monica. It was Brendan, because it was after the interview.
Because we told
were
Monica,
talking about-
yeah.
Yeah, because we were talking about it, and I was like, oh, you know what? Or one of us was like, we should have asked Brendan about how that the character looks exactly like Jay from Jay and Silent Bob. And we were like, oh my god, it's true. And then that's when Bill, I think, was like...
I forgot who came up with the initial idea of having Jason just pop on like that, but it was really fun. And he was a total sport to do it. We went to his house and shot it in his garage one day, and he just kind of came in and did it. And he was a really nice guy. I took some pictures with him, and he was really cool.
Very, very cool guy. But yeah, no.
And he agreed that he's like, that's me.
Yeah. And we were talking to him about it too, and he was like, I wouldn't get any money for it. I think Kevin Smith would be the one that would have gotten any royalties.
Well, I mean, it was it was not even like a homage. It was just like, that's that character. It's just him. The dress, the cap, the whole thing.
Oh, and here we go.
Yeah, this weird thing. This was a weird one, because we found out later, after we'd really kind of cut the show, right, that there's a little bit of a controversy of this story, because she said a line that, the infamous faggot line of this movie, but she didn't just improv that line, as we later learned. It was in a draft of a rewrite of the script that another writer, David Goyer, I believe, had written.
Yeah, it was David Goyer's line, but everybody was sort of like throwing it.
I think they all threw
Kelly.
They threw Kelly under the bus.
They were like, oh, poor Kelly, she was just improvising and she panicked.
Maybe they just forgot. I mean, they were probably one of those things where pages were being rewritten constantly, and maybe they just didn't realize that was in the script. I don't think it was in any of the drafts of the script I've ever seen. So that's why we asked the question.
I think it's unfortunate. I think it's unnecessary.
Well, also, Swift's and Shannon's idea of her confusing the mythologies between Jason and Freddy was so much better.
Oh, it was so much more clever.
Yeah.
I think what ended up on screen was not clever.
No.
I think it was base. I think it was just like the easy.
Yeah.
It was just I
And
mean,
it just
the
didn't
payoff of her getting hit and flung across the...
Yeah, but it wasn't good enough. It was like...
No,
it would have been so much more clever and in keeping with the
It goes
idea
back to the
of this
first
movie. Right.
where's
Right.
Heather and
It was much smarter.
Yeah,
And it's
it was.
unfortunate. I always feel, because I've been down this path myself, but you feel for the writers when you see your work kind of just
dumbed down
or put into the hands of somebody who didn't get what you were going for, and it becomes something you don't recognize. So I get that frustration. It's tough.
And there she goes, her favorite.
Especially when the
Yes.
writers are such hardcore fans and get it more than anybody, and then you have people who haven't even seen one of these movies come along and are like, nope, this is what you should do, bam, bam, bam. And that's pretty much how every franchise goes down.
I like that Monica had that childhood story.
Yeah.
Of how
What a great
Freddy was
therapy.
so
It was really
frightening to her,
personal.
and it actually made me have. I'm not a big fan of Freddy vs. Jason, but it made me have a little more appreciation for it, knowing that it actually meant something to her. Like, she was actually exercising her childhood fears.
I would have killed to see that Pinhead ending.
That was a cool idea.
Classic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would have been awesome.
The ending, that ending probably would have cost more than the whole movie. The way those storyboards and drawing, they really would have built.
And that was
something
another
crazy
storyboard
great.
that Crash Cunningham did for us.
Well, and then
More
also
props, but
Dimension owned, I think.
Pinhead,
that's true.
There's always that. And that's a little clip from the original not lost ending, but the rejected ending, where
it was made no
Jason,
sense.
Which I didn't ever. Yeah, I didn't
Never
get it
made
either.
sense.
It was really lame.
All of a sudden, he becomes Freddy.
I saw a rough cut of this when we were working on Crystal Lake Memories, the book, and our friend Jeff Garrett, who worked for Sean Cunningham at the time, had a DVD of it. So I saw that ending like a couple months before the movie came out, and I remember just sitting there afterwards going, "What?"
Did it ever explain why all of a sudden Jason Ritter's character became Freddy?
No.
Oh, okay.
It was just, I think it was the symbolism of her losing her virginity and the fear of that.
Well, because
That's
I know
what
we also talked,
I
and
don't
I don't know if it made it in there,
I didn't
about
write it.
where Crystal Lake has been drained, and her father and she walk, and
Well,
he gets
one of
pulled
the things you don't understand, like why when they're having their big battle and there's all that sort of construction going on, one of the subplots I think they left out was that they were building like condos at Crystal Lake.
Mm-hmm.
But
I remember seeing this in Tennessee opening night, midnight, with a bunch of loud, drunken rednecks, and it was one of the most fun experiences I've ever had in a movie theater. It was literally like being at a WWF show, where just screaming and hollering, and it was the total blast.
I mean, isn't that exactly what it is? It's Freddie is one wrestler and Jason is another, and those wrestlers become. It's like Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant.
That's why I defend this movie constantly, because people are like, some fans, even like Friday fans, are like, well, you know what? It had the worst acting and the worst characters of any Friday the 13th movie. I'm like, are you out of your mind?
Well, I don't think that's
like,
a valid criticism of the movie, but I just don't think it was, for me, a great movie. I think it just...
I wouldn't say it's a great movie when you compare it to, like, the imagination of Wes Craven, but as a versus film, it did exactly what a verse... It's King Kong versus Godzilla. It did its thing. Two guys smashed each other.
Than Alien vs. Predator.
We will not speak of that unholy name.
Well, now that's been settled,
I guess so. And and everyone has seen his bum. A lot of people.
Yep.
But yeah, everybody's a sport. Like, I mean, these guys just came in, and one thing I was really glad we were able to do is get Jeff Katz to talk about the whole series, just since he kind of grew up like we all did with all the films. But he was a great Greek chorus guy in this show, I think, and gave us lots of great bites to fill in.
Katz is the voice of the fans,
and we made a conscious decision to not go that route. I think his name was Jason. We made the mistake of having too many fanboy voices and girl voices, and those were all good, and I think they all had valid points. But I think you detracted from, the people that you really want to see. And I know, Tommy, you were a big advocate always of.
I was always like, no.
Yeah, tell us what you would say.
I would always say every minute you have a fanboy on, you don't have Heather Langenkamp on, you don't have Robert Englund on, and
it was a great call, and I'm glad. I mean, we were going to have one expert, Steven Schneider, who's a producer friend of mine. He did Paranormal Activity, and he was scheduled to come in, but it was like it just never worked out. But he's a real academic when it comes to horror.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to have that voice, but again, it would have been time. And devoted to that rather than the people who made the movies. So I'm glad we went. This was a good call.
And someone like Jeff Katz, I mean, he was a New Line Cinema executive.
Absolutely.
So he absolutely has a place here. And on top of that, we got the icing on the cake. He is a huge fan.
He is a fan.
Yeah.
Right.
Originally, when we were really hashing this out, even when we were shooting before it got as big as it did, we were going to delve a lot into the dream side of things and psychology, and interview well-known psychologists and visit dream centers and really get into that whole freaky Cronenberg-esque kind of real world of medical experiments and things like that, and
would have been a good bonus feature.
Yeah, it would have. But then we were going to dive much more into the culture around it, behind the ideas. But it never. After 105 interviews, it was like, okay, this just needs to be about the movies.
And to me, that's the best animation.
That is a really good.
That's a great one.
That's
I mean, Freddie's offering Tina
a
body bag popcorn.
It's
hilarious. I remember when we were doing the narration, and this was one of the toughest pieces to write, because how do you sum up New Line Cinema in half a paragraph?
I know.
Mm-hmm. And that's really what we had to do here is,
yep.
and how do you sum up New Line Cinema in however long this segment is? I mean, this is a great little piece on.
It's really nice, and we haven't mentioned Sean Schaefer Hennessy, who did the music and the majority of the music in the show, and man, did he have to score like crazy to get 4 hours of coverage for us, and then some. He did some of the bonus features.
He wrote the emotional Lifetime.
Yeah, and he wrote this sort of emotional Lifetime. We were on the fence with it. We felt like maybe it's a little too schmaltzy.
I thought it worked. I thought it worked the first time I heard it.
I was against it.
Yeah, but Andrew wasn't.
We mixed it well.
We mixed it well, and I think it's enough there. But look, I mean, you really see the raw emotion in Bob's eyes.
This was Bob Shea's entire life.
Yeah.
He built this with his bare hands.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I love that we got to tell this story.
When you guys first showed me this all cut together with the music on there, I got teary.
A lot of people get teary because it's an emotional.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're saying, you're getting emotional about a Nightmare on Elm Street. You're getting emotional about a man who built something with his bare hands and saw it kind of taken away from him.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I think
also
it's tough to see that with anyone.
And at the height of its success with something like Lord of the Rings, that's, I mean, the Star Wars saga of its era.
Yeah. I mean, we were so lucky to get into a room with someone like Bob Shea, and who gave us such a raw, emotional, honest
I didn't expect it.
story.
Yeah. I felt like Barbara Walters.
It was, well, but it's true though, because all these people, Sarah Risher, Bob Shea, they had this incredible story, and they didn't shy away from being honest and being emotional about how it affected them and how everything they had done up until that point impacted them, and how it just kind of all disappeared.
Yeah.
And look at how it's affected everybody here at the end. Harlan saying the greatest thing that ever happened in my life was Nightmare on Elm Street, and all these different people, like, I owe this everything, and I could be. It was the most fun, creative time of my life, and now it's sort of gone on. Passed on into corporate America, and you see, you look at the new Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, which is isn't really a franchise just yet. I don't know if they're going to be successful in relaunching it, but I just don't feel that passion from
the charm is not there.
Yeah,
it's lost the charm, and I think but that's the great thing is like this is now kind of like the little time capsule of those years and what the company was, and I don't know. I'm glad that people responded to this and that we ended it on this note. I think gave everyone, the main people, a say in and how this impacted them, their lives, their careers, and the people around them. And I don't know. And I just love what they all have to say about not just that it was all well and good, and we had the greatest time of my life, but there were a lot of challenges. I learned a lot. And it changed a lot of lives. This series.
It did, and I think more so than most other horror franchises, you have all these cast members who really believed in what they were doing, wanted to do something good. Right. They weren't just like, oh, okay, I have to run away from the killer and scream and roll around in the mud. They really wanted to do the best job that they could, and they still look back and they love it.
Yeah,
and I mean,
she like Lisa Zane is saying, this is still in my life after all these years,
and she's happy with that.
She's happy
it's okay,
with it,
it's an okay thing.
Yep.
I think there are some people in other franchises who really want to just say goodbye, and I think most of the people here look. I mean, John Saxon.
I know
everything he's ever done.
I know, and this is the one that probably it's like Donald Pleasance in Halloween.
Yeah.
The young that generation, our generation, knew Donald because he was Dr. Loomis, and I think same thing with John because of playing Thompson.
Leo cameo.
And there's Leto, our co-producer. We had to give him props because he is a huge fan.
I think the other thing that this did for me was, I'm a fan. I love the movies and I think they're fun, and I realize I'm a much less of a fan than many people.
I mean, you don't realize your competition.
You only have 10 Freddy posters.
Yeah, exactly.
I did want to say that when we had the first cut of this, originally all of these little interviews and wrap up stories
were at the end of each chapter.
Segment, and we all agreed when we were looking at a 6-hour documentary to cut them all down and put them.
It felt like 8 featurettes that you just play all.
It almost felt too final for each one because
and it was tough because we did have to make some cuts. Not everyone made it to the end of the show, and there's probably stuff that if I were to look back at it now, I'd be like, "Damn, I wish we'd had her say that." But I think from a storytelling perspective, I think we go through it, and I think we hear from all the right people.
No, and this is the.
And I think with the way we wind up, Andrew and I very specifically, it was like we lined up the names, and we knew exactly who we wanted to hear from and in what order. Yeah. And especially to go out, you had to go out on Wes, you had to go out on Bob,
Robert,
Shea,
and Wes.
Yeah, Rob Shea, Heather, and Wes. Mm-hmm. But
it literally is the perfect.
Yeah. And then these 3D kind of things. We didn't do a whole lot of that in this show, but I think the little touches of it really make it nice.
Yeah, if we had more time, we would have loaded this thing up with 3D
a little bit
stuff.
More. But I like that it's not all over the place because it seems more special. It seems more like we're drawing attention to this particular.
I hate that sort of, MTV generation, ADD avid fart type editing that is just way too common in documentaries and movies in general.
Where things cut in the middle of people's sentences and stuff like that.
People tell their stories,
let it breathe. But yet, on that note, this documentary doesn't slow down either.
No, it doesn't. So it's
so there's a nice balance of it being. It has a momentum, but it doesn't. At least it tries to tell a complete story, and everybody gets their share of screen time, and people don't get cut off. We don't or introduced and we never see them again. Those are the kinds of shows I'm not a big fan of.
Yeah, no, this definitely was it's a very emotional end because I mean, it's right there in Bob's face.
Yeah.
It's
really, there's a lot of pain and
you nailed
loss
it.
there.
I mean, that's his or Tommy. That was his life.
Yeah.
That the majority.
He
of his
lived
life.
his life doing what he loved,
and he's still doing it.
Yeah, no, he
He's
is still
just-
doing
yeah.
it, but it's just it kind of came to that gigantic peak, and then it all changed.
Right.
Yeah.
But
No.
it's also genuine. Like, you wouldn't see most studio executives today appearing on camera and deeply thanking the fans,
Yes, right.
you know,
for
or,
this series,
or,
right?
or even like having a falling out with somebody like Wes, and then going back and making amends.
We have to
Right.
have to talk about
This theme.
the theme music
Yeah.
here, which was
Charles,
Dan and I.
oh my god! At like 5 a.m, so slap happy, drunk
It's
with exhaustion.
the very first theme we got from Charles Bernstein.
Yeah, this
for
this,
the opening.
For the
for
opening.
the opening, and we just were like, that doesn't
It didn't
work.
fit with what we had
no.
in the stop motion. So
But then at 5 a.m., Andrew has
He has checked out.
He had to check out because he had been up for like 4 days straight. So
Yeah.
Dan and I are trying to figure out what we can do to put on the end.
Yeah.
And then
I said, throw that music right on
just
there.
Put it on there.
Let's put it on there. Let's
And-
see how that
And
sounds.
we're basically drunk at this
Mhm.
point because we're so sleep deprived.
Yep.
And it was-
Hallucinating.
Hallucinating.
would be
We were
another
hallucinating.
Yeah.
I was at one point.
Oh my god.
You had to have been.
thing. Oh yeah.
But we were laughing because when we started hearing it, and it worked.
It worked. It was ridiculous, but it worked. But this is one of the most fun. We did this in His Name Was Jason, and it was something that the fans really loved.
It's so
we
fun.
wanted to do it again, and it worked out great. And I love that they've got the Elm Street house behind them. It's perfect, and
Mm-hmm.
I know it's just a really fun way to go
Well,
out of the show
they
because
have-
the show does end a little bit on a bittersweet note.
Mhm.
So to end on this high note with
It's a lot
everyone
of
having
fun.
fun with it, I think it was the perfect out. for
I
the
mean,
show.
and just these types of things here,
Yeah.
it happened twice with Kim Myers and Mark Patton. We were the conduit for a reunion between
Yeah,
the two of
that's
them.
right.
And the
And
same thing
Danny
with Danny
Hassel.
Hassel and Lisa
And
Wilcox.
Lisa Wilcox, right? But it was really emotional. You see that on one of the bonus features where
Mhm.
Kim and Mark reunite for the first time.
that was
one
an
was-
emotional moment.
I'm so glad I hit record.
Yeah,
good move, Buzz.
The whole room got dusty when that happened.
Mhm.
That was very big.
It was. But these lines are great, and Tommy, credit to you for digging up all the best lines for these people. And it's just, it was hard sometimes because we're all big fans and we want them to say it just the way they did in the movie.
I mean,
And sometimes they didn't remember.
No, they
would
don't.
I'd have to act
But
it
then
out for
sometimes,
them.
Yeah.
but sometimes they would nail it.
Nail
like
it.
Priscilla Pointer.
oh yeah, no,
Right.
she
She
turned
nailed it,
into
right.
Dr.
This is hilarious.
I mean, that's the best one. I want to
She's got
know
like a curtain on her head.
why she put a curtain on her
I
head.
don't
It's
know,
Perfect.
but it's great. That was New York. So.
That was the one
Yeah.
that you and I
We lost
it
ours.
It's
every time.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Clu Gulager, I think, delivers his lines better in here than he does in the
Doesn't
Oh
movie.
my god,
Totally, yeah.
his anger
Jesse!
has risen, exponentially.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
But it was just great, like seeing them all do this and
The Deadly Dinosaur. I'm glad we got him to say that.
just funny stuff. And I mean, it's kitschy now, but there's something. Yeah.
We had
It's
that
just-
I mean, look, he's just very angry at Jesse. And I just again, looking at the Danny Hassel, Lisa Wilcox thing, it's like, I kind of love the fact that we were able to put that moment together because
Yeah.
it would never have happened.
Right.
It's
True.
really cool that we got
We
that
had to bring him to town, and that little 3D thing.
effect is so funny.
We had to just lock the camera
took
down
that
and
from our
make it.
Freddy box set.
Box set.
And I
Yeah.
love we even got Wes to say
say
one
a
of his
line,
big
yeah.
lines.
We didn't get one out of Robert. I do have to point it out.
Yeah, he
but
had to-
It's
he had to
okay.
bolt
He
for
had to
signing.
bolt. He was on his way out. But
I'm
it was
going
good
to say
end
that,
with Heather.
we got all the cast that
Wait,
Robert killed.
Nightmare.
Thank you to
Thank
three
you
people
all.
who watched
Yeah,
this
thank you for
commentary.
joining us.
All right.